A grand, elegant mansion stands proudly beneath a bright, cloud-dotted blue sky. Sunlight and a gentle breeze slip through the window as a dark-haired woman stretches in bed. Waking from a deep sleep, she anticipates a perfect, promising day ahead. Elegantly dressed in a purple gown, the dark-haired woman steps out while her maids attend to her. To her sudden shock, her handsome blonde husband unexpectedly asks her for a divorce. The blonde man is introduced as Duke Euclid, the prominent head of House Rodian. The couple sits in a tense, quiet confrontation across a large desk in his study. Forcing a tense smile, she calmly asks him to repeat what he just said. Caught under her commanding gaze, the blonde Duke stammers nervously. Evgenia calmly sips her tea while her husband, Euclid, hesitantly reiterates his desire for a divorce. With a quiet sigh, she sets her teacup down with a firm, resounding click. Euclid visibly flinches, clearly intimidated by her calm and cold response. Observing his fear, she internally resolves to soften her expression to avoid scaring him. She directly questions whether he truly desires to end their marriage. Sitting back, she explains that she is highly receptive to reassuring lies over harsh truths. Smiling sweetly, she offers him one last chance to reconsider his answer. Euclid remains silent, refusing to back down from his stance. Fine, he slams his hand on the desk and presents pre-prepared divorce paperwork. Evgenia is left completely stunned by his bold and thorough preparations. She stares in disbelief at the official document laid out before her. She is deeply shocked to see that he has gone as far as drafting these papers. Reading carefully, she confirms his signature and distinct handwriting on the document. Her frustration flares as she wonders how her constant efforts to please him failed. She finds his sudden demand for a divorce completely baffling and unfair. Euclid remains firm, politely requesting that she review the papers carefully. She silently resolves that she will never let him have his way. Her determination solidifies, refusing to allow such a separation to happen. In a sudden, swift motion, she tears the divorce paperwork completely in half. She flatly rejects his proposal and commands him to return to his room. Ignoring his frantic pleas to wait, she walks away, entirely unfazed by his shock. She calmly slips out of the study, leaving him behind without a second thought. As she walks, she reflects on how she unexpectedly transmigrated into this novel's world. The sudden realization of her bizarre reincarnation strikes her with dramatic shock. Despite the chaotic truth, she stands tall and embraces her new life. In her previous life, she was born as an infant blessed with incredible money luck. Her childhood was marred by her father's arrogance, which eventually drove her mother to take her and leave. The moment they walked out, her father's fortunes took a sudden, drastic turn. Her father's heavily funded business immediately began to crumble into ruin. Stricken with debt, her father begged them to return, promising to be a better man. Although she disliked him, her return instantly revived his business, proving her miraculous luck. As he quickly became rich again, greedy relatives rushed back to secure their share of the wealth. Tragically, her parents died in an accident and her protective grandmother eventually passed away as well. Cutting off her parasitic relatives, she took control of her life and launched an investment firm. Looking out over the city, she realized the sheer power of her extraordinary money luck. Her wealth grew astronomical as lottery wins and investments constantly succeeded. Despite her massive success, she felt empty and surrounded only by people chasing her money. Plagued by distrust, she avoided romance and found her only comfort in web novels. She became deeply engrossed in a popular reverse harem web novel. Relaxing in her pajamas, she enthusiastically declared a love for Euclid, her favorite character. The novel focused on a saintess named Melissa who was pursued by 3 dangerous suitors. The reader declares that Euclid Rudian, the gentle head of House Rudian, was her ultimate favorite character. She laments that her favorite character was basically treated like a background prop, lower than a side character. Sitting on her couch, she weeps over her phone, questioning why nobody recognizes Euclid's kindness in a world of dangerous men. She reflects on how her talent for picking winning stocks failed to translate to her taste in fictional characters. She admires Euclid's only illustration in the novel, treasuring his heartbreakingly sweet, supportive dialogue. Desperate for more content, she emails the author, offering to pay any amount for a story centered on Euclid. A sharp ding chimes as her phone screen flashes with an immediate, unexpected email reply. Bewildered by the instant response to her email, she anxiously prepares herself for a blunt rejection from the author. The instant she opens the message, a sudden, blinding flash of light completely consumes her vision. She wakes up in a luxurious, unfamiliar room, wondering if she had simply fallen asleep at home. Stepping out of the grand bed, she gazes around the foreign, opulent chamber in complete confusion. She gasps in disbelief as she stares at her unfamiliar, elegant reflection in a mirror. She notices her glossy black hair and violet eyes, realizing her face looks incredibly sharp and villainous. She recognizes these features as belonging to Evgenia, the story's villainess who divorces Euclid. Shaking her head in disbelief, she wonders how she possessed Evgenia and why her head is wrapped in bandages. She calmly pieces the clues together, remembering the blinding light that swallowed her after opening the author's email. As she panics beneath the covers, a sudden, polite knock sounds at her bedroom door. Guarded and tense, the dark-haired woman sharply demands to know who is entering her room. A gentle maid with brown hair steps inside, carefully carrying a tray with tea and porcelain cups. The maid gasps happily upon seeing her awake, while Evgenia defensively asks who she is. The maid is deeply hurt, pleadingly identifying herself as Anne, Evgenia's personal maid. Evgenia realizes this girl is Anne, the loyal right-hand maid mentioned frequently in the original novel. Anne steadies her as she stumbles, urging her to rest since she has not fully recovered. A sudden realization flashes in Evgenia's purple eyes as she begins to form a plan. Evgenia grins mischievously, prompting a terrified and highly concerned reaction from her maid Anne. She envisions a beautiful wedding, walking down the aisle hand in hand with her beloved Euclid. Overjoyed, Evgenia clasps her hands together, eyes sparkling at the prospect of her dream wedding. She remembers how Euclid was depicted as the incredibly gentle, sweet head of House Rudion. This gentleman was her ultimate favorite character in the novel, The Saint's Dangerous Choice. Recalling her previous life, she fondly remembers commissioning her own custom merchandise of her favorite character. She gleefully celebrates the fact that she has possessed the woman destined to marry Euclid. However, she lets out a heavy sigh, remembering that the couple eventually ends up divorced. Brimming with fresh determination, she realizes she can rewrite the narrative and completely change their fate. Abandoning her monotonous past life of endless work, she embraces this priceless opportunity to marry her favorite. She resolves to do whatever it takes to secure her happy ending alongside her beloved Duke. Getting down to business, Evgenia realizes she must first figure out exactly where she is in the timeline. Evgenia directly asks Anne how she got injured, leaving the maid shocked by her memory loss. Anne explains that the Crown Prince recently sent a formal marriage proposal letter to Lady Melissa. Hearing this, Evgenia is relieved to realize that the story is still in its very early stages. She notes with relief that she has not yet committed any of the villainous acts against the heroine. Anne reveals that Evgenia threw a massive tantrum and slammed her head directly into the wall. Evgenia is completely astounded to learn that her character went so far as to self-harm. She internally screams at the original Evgenia for being completely out of her mind. She realizes the original villainess was far more unhinged and reckless than she ever imagined. She decides this wild reputation might actually help her get rejected by the prince, keeping her with Euclid. Determined, Evgenia suddenly stands up and announces her immediate need to go see the Duke. Despite Anne's frantic pleading for her to wait, Evgenia opens the door to resolve things with Euclid. With a sharp metallic clang, two guards suddenly cross their spears to block her path. The armed guards hold their weapons firmly, keeping her barred from leaving the chamber. She freezes in absolute shock, completely blindsided by this unexpected and hostile security blockade. The guards firmly state that Evgenia is forbidden from leaving her room, forcing her to collapse in distress as her maid watches. Her maid angrily confronts the guards for threatening Evgenia, while she cowers in fear, recalling her severe fear of sharp objects. As the guard looks back, she realizes the gravity of the situation. She is officially under confinement. Her maid comforts her as she sits on the floor, processing the shock of her house arrest. Her maid apologizes, explaining that the Duke ordered her confinement as discipline after she fainted. Evgenia calmly requests her maid to arrange an audience with her father so they can talk. Her maid is startled because Evgenia never used to refer to her father so affectionately. Evgenia bitterly reflects on her father's coldness, noting he did not even visit after her collapse. Her maid frantically tries to clear up the misunderstanding about her father's absence. Her maid reassures her that her father was deeply shaken but had to leave on urgent business. The maid explains her father's sudden departure, then asks if she is worried about the basement prisoner. Evgenia tries to recall who is in the basement as her maid mentions delivering meals. The maid explains that Melissa has been secretly taking care of the prisoner during Evgenia's illness. Her maid explains she followed orders to ignore Melissa's actions, but Evgenia suddenly stands in alarm. Evgenia panics as she suddenly remembers the dangerous male lead is currently imprisoned in the basement. Realizing the danger, Evgenia urgently commands her maid to quickly bring her a rope. Her maid gasps in confusion while bringing a thick rope as requested. Evgenia climbs down the window using the rope, instructing her worried maid to hold on tight. The maid tearfully questions the dangerous escape plan, while Evgenia promises she will return shortly. Evgenia complains about her high heels, realizing how impractical they are for climbing. She desperately prays that the original Evgenia has not mistreated the prisoner yet. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick tap as she lands safely on the ground. She sighs in relief, motivated solely by her dream of marrying her favorite character. Her maid waves from the window, pleading with her to remain cautious and return safely. Evgenia shivers as she walks through the cold night air toward her destination. She walks past the garden fountain, arriving at the dark and quiet annex building. She notes that the guard's patrol schedule makes this the perfect time to sneak in. She stops abruptly upon hearing a noise and seeing a sudden movement near the door. Peeking from behind a tree, she panics at the thought that the prisoner might have escaped. Taking a closer look, she realizes the shadowed figure is actually someone else. A portrait introduces the beautiful blonde-haired holy saintess named Melissa. The story explains how Melissa discovered the imprisoned Richard and secretly brought him food and medicine. Evgenia regrets not possessing the villainess earlier to prevent this fateful meeting. She wishes she could have stopped Richard from being bought from the slave market entirely. A quick tap echoes as she cautiously makes her way down the steps into the basement. She quietly walks down the stone corridor of the dark and gloomy basement prison. She walks along the iron bars, searching for the prisoner's cell. She stops in relief, thankful that her fears were unfounded. She spots the pink-haired young man sitting quietly inside, confirming he has not escaped yet. The chained, pink-haired young man raises his head to look directly at her. The prisoner, Richard, is pictured as a handsome young man of noble stature. The narrative describes Richard as the most dangerous of the male leads, born to a twisted life. The story details how Richard met Melissa in prison, experiencing warmth and care for the first time. This kindness triggered Richard's obsession, leading him to escape and rule the underworld. His obsession grew into a deep desire for revenge against Evgenia and attachment to Melissa. Richard's dark obsession became so extreme that he eventually resorted to kidnapping the Saintess. Evgenia admires Richard's handsome appearance, comparing him to a stunning idol. She She notes his beautiful, gentle eyes while Richard unexpectedly asks about her recovery. Richard explains he heard she collapsed and would be unable to visit for several days. Evgenia is deeply unsettled, realizing the dangerous prisoner is actually showing genuine concern for her. Evgenia gasps in shock, noticing Richard staring at her with intense hostility as if looking at a lifelong nemesis. Standing before the cell, Evgenia notes with relief that the young man's eyes are still completely intact. She remembers the dark truth. The original Evgenia bought Richard to gouge out his red eyes in a fit of rage after being rejected by the crown prince. Appalled by the original villainess's madness, Evgenia resolves to free Richard unharmed, but suddenly notices something unexpected. She spots a red mark on the back of Richard's hand, realizing his eyes are indeed the only thing left undamaged. She hesitates, realizing Richard must harbor deep hatred for her since the day he was enslaved. She trembles in fear, wondering if he will simply kill her upon release, but forces herself to stay strong. She reassures herself by clutching the self-defense magic bracelet Anne gave her, knowing she must act immediately. With a sudden clanking sound, Richard warily asks what she is doing as she approaches the bars to unlock them. Stepping aside, Evgenia coldly commands the pink-haired young man to come out of his cell. She holds out a heavy ring of keys, ordering him to use them to unlock his shackles. A sharp clinking sound echoes as she accidentally drops the keys right in front of his shackled feet. Internally panicking, she regrets dropping them so harshly, realizing she sounded exactly like a cruel villainess. Richard remains completely silent, staring down at the keys dropped on the stone floor. While a sharp metallic click sounds as Richard unlocks his shackles, Evgenia decides to search for his belongings. Slipping quietly across the dark chamber, Evgenia spots a wooden crate and hopes his things are inside. She opens the crate with a soft wooden thud as Richard quietly informs her that he has freed himself. She dumps his clothes and a special pouch into his arms, demanding he put them on immediately. With a satisfying rustle, Richard stands fully clothed in a dark cloak, holding the money pouch she shoved into his hands. She firmly tells him that he is now a free man and has no reason to remain locked up. Richard flinches in surprise as Evgenia flatly commands him to go. Noticing his unhappy expression, she wonders if she made a mistake and realizes he might be waiting for an apology. Evgenia offers a sincere apology for everything, while Richard stands in stunned, silent disbelief. She acknowledges that her sudden change of heart must sound completely ridiculous and highly suspicious to him. Richard stares wide-eyed as she confesses her genuine remorse for buying him and keeping him locked away. A soft clinking sound rises from the pouch as she explains it contains gold coins and jewels. She reassures him that the wealth is plenty for him to comfortably settle down wherever he pleases. Swallowing her nervousness, she smiles softly and reiterates one last time that he is completely free. As Richard tightly squeezes the pouch, she hopes this compensation will buy her forgiveness, wondering if she should have brought medicine. She gasps in utter confusion when Richard quietly asks why he has to leave. Tears stream down Richard's face as he desperately begs her to please let him stay. With a heavy thud, Richard falls to his knees before her, crying out to his lady while she panics in shock. Sobbing uncontrollably, Richard asks if she is casting him out because he failed to call her master. His hands tremble violently as he grips the hem of her dress, pleadingly asking if she is throwing him away. Listening to his heartbroken pleas not to abandon him, Evgenia feels a heavy weight of sympathy and guilt. She remembers that at this point in the novel, Richard is only 18 years old. She realizes that to a boy who has only ever known slavery, sudden freedom feels terrifyingly like being discarded. Richard cries bitterly for a long time until her steady silence finally makes him realize she will not change her mind. Accepting his fate, Richard finally gives up and slowly walks out of the underground cell into the forest alone. Evgenia sighs deeply, wondering why she feels so guilty for letting him go when she wasn't the one who imprisoned him. She is completely astounded, having never imagined the dangerous future villain could look so much like a pathetic abandoned puppy. Shaking off her doubts, she walks away, firmly telling herself she cannot keep him out of mere pity. She knows he would have escaped eventually anyway to become an assassin guild leader, likely seeking his revenge. She silently prays that whatever happens, Richard will keep both her and her beloved Duke off his revenge list. With a slow, heavy creak, she cautiously slips back inside the grand mansion's doors. She tiptoes through the silent, opulent hall, completely unaware of a solid boot standing directly in her path. A sudden voice calling out makes her freeze instantly in absolute terror. Her heart pounds wildly as she realizes someone has cornered her despite her careful planning of the guard routes. She panics, knowing she will be in massive trouble if anyone discovers she broke her house arrest. Turning around, her jaw drops as she suddenly recognizes the strikingly handsome face of the man standing before her. Evgenia observes the dark blue-haired royal knight, noting his striking resemblance to her own features. She recognizes him as Alexis Basilian, the second son of the prominent Basilian family. Alexis sternly questions why she is wandering around despite being under strict house discipline. As Alexis scolds her for ignoring their father's orders, Evgenia silently regrets not slipping past him. Alexis is deeply puzzled by her quiet demeanor, expecting her to cause a massive scene. Evgenia grows increasingly irritated by his comments questioning her sanity after her recent head injury. Evgenia sharply retorts, demanding to know if he threw his knightly manners to a passing dog. She demands respect, asking if that is how he should speak to his elder sister. Alexis stammers in absolute shock, backing away at her unexpected reference to their sibling relationship. Alexis looks highly offended, questioning how she can suddenly refer to herself as his sister. Alexis remains completely dumbfounded by her sudden claim of being his older sister. Evgenia wonders if she misspoke, recalling that he always detested being reminded of her sibling status. He questions when she ever treated him like a sibling, wondering if her head is severely injured. Realizing her severe head injury might be affecting her memory, Alexis panics and questions her mental state. Fed up with his prying, she dismissively orders him to leave and go somewhere else. Evgenia angrily commands him to stop pretending that he actually cares about her well-being. Standing in the silent hallway, she suddenly wonders if she was a bit too harsh on him. She internally begs him to yell or react instead of staring at her like a complete stranger. Evgenia panics as she suddenly feels a massive sneeze coming on, fearing for her noble dignity. With a sudden muffled sound, she desperately tries to hold back the sneeze in front of Alexis. Alexis calls out to her in confusion as she turns away, her face flushing red with embarrassment. A sharp clack echoes as she hurriedly retreats to her room, warning him not to follow. Left behind, Alexis stands in stunned disbelief, wondering if she was actually crying because she was upset. Safe inside her room, Evgenia finally lets out a loud sneeze while wrapped snugly in her blanket. She curses her luck, sneezing once more as she struggles to stay warm in her room. Peering out the window, she regrets not dressing more warmly for her cold night escape. She spots a crowd gathered outside, wondering why the servants, Alexis and Melissa, are standing there. She narrows her eyes, focusing on the mysterious figure standing right next to Melissa. Evgenia is shocked to see Alexis standing alongside Melissa near the main carriage once again. She huffs in annoyance, frustrated that Alexis is free to roam while she remains under house arrest. She watches a distinguished man step out of the carriage as the servants bow in deep respect. Knowing she must confront the powerful Duke, she's suddenly overcome with intense nervousness. She observes the Duke of Basilian giving immediate, stern instructions to one of his household servants. Evgenia notes the urgency of the situation as the maid quickly runs back toward the mansion. Her maid bursts into the room, breathlessly announcing that the Duke has ordered her immediate presence. Realizing she is the urgent matter, Evgenia resolves to speak with the Duke immediately. A striking portrait introduces the Duke of Basilian, a man of unmatched imperial power. The narrative describes the Duke as a cold-blooded politician who sees several steps ahead. Standing before him is described as thin ice, with his deep voice commanding absolute authority. Evgenia realizes the immense pressure she faces when dealing with such a cold-blooded patriarch. She knows she must secure his approval if she ever wishes to marry Euclid. Her maid dresses her in a sparkling purple gown, excited by the Duke's concern. Evgenia dryly notes that even a mortal enemy would feel concerned after her wall-smashing incident. Her loyal maid looks up eagerly, asking if she is finally ready to go. Clad in her elegant purple dress, Evgenia firmly commands that it is time to depart. Despite her lingering fever, Evgenia insists on opening the door and heading out immediately. Stepping into the grand hallway, she stops as she spots a familiar guard standing watch. She remembers him as the guard she easily intimidated during her secret outing yesterday. Evgenia asks the nervous guard for his name, and he stammeringly introduces himself as Gressel Fion. Hearing his name, Evgenia is struck by a sudden sense of recognition, finding it familiar. Evgenia reassures the nervous guard Gressel that she will praise his diligence to his superiors. The guard breaks into a cold sweat under her intimidatingly polite gaze. As they walk down the hall, Evgenia's maid curiously asks if she has feelings for the guard. The maid expresses her strong disapproval of the guard to Evgenia's inner amusement. Evgenia decides to play along vaguely and casually tells her maid to handle the matter. A rhythmic clicking of her heels echoes as Evgenia suddenly spots Alexis waiting by a door. Alexis notices her and immediately demands to know what she is going out. Alexis demands an explanation for her presence, but Evgenia confidently retorts, questioning his tone. Evgenia internally accuses Alexis of slacking off instead of performing his duties as an imperial knight. Alexis reacts with explosive outrage, loudly defending himself by explaining he is on official leave. His angry demeanor softens slightly as he reveals he only recently heard about her collapse. Alexis demands to know why she is looking at him with such a shocked face. Alexis fiercely warns her to remain quiet and not provoke their father any further. Sudden click echoes as a hand pushes the heavy door open. A cold, commanding voice interrupts them, reminding them that this is no place for idle chatter. Alexis nervously stammers an excuse as the newcomer coldly commands them both to be quiet. Hearing Alexis address the man as his older brother confirms his identity to Evgenia. A striking portrait introduces Sionel Basilian, the solemn first son of the prestigious family. Evgenia is struck by a familiar, unsettling feeling of irritation, much like her reaction to Richard. She realizes that despite lacking Evgenia's memories, she can still feel the original girl's raw emotions. Sionel coldly notes that throwing a tantrum will change nothing, causing her a wave of displeasure. Evgenia quietly defends herself, though she feels a sudden spike of annoyance at his hostile attitude. Sionel demands to know her purpose, pointing out her confinement order should already be active. Evgenia calmly states that she came to discuss an important matter directly with their father. Sionel stares in absolute disbelief as a sudden rattle signals the office door swinging open. A deep voice from inside commands them to enter, throwing Alexis into a panic. The voice commands them to enter, asserting authority over the tense conversation. The authoritative voice commands them to stop lingering and come inside immediately. Seated behind a grand desk is Duke Basilian, exuding an imposing and formidable aura. The Duke's cold, piercing gaze narrows as he commands his children to step forward. The three siblings stand in a tense, nervous silence before their formidable father. Evgenia walks forward, terrified by the Duke's severe presence and fearing he might exile her. She internally fumes at the unfairness of suffering consequences for actions she didn't commit. The Duke suddenly flinches in surprise as he looks up and gazes at his daughter. Evgenia stands silently before him, tears unexpectedly beginning to well in her eyes. The Duke calls out her name in absolute shock, visibly shaken by her distress. Sionel looks on in stunned silence, deeply confused by the sight of his sister crying. Evgenia is completely bewildered to find herself crying without even realizing what she is doing. She wonders if she is crying because the original Evgenia's memories are influencing her emotions. A sudden rattle sounds as the Duke abruptly stands up from his desk. The Duke walks over and hesitantly offers her a clean white handkerchief, surprising her. Evgenia is stunned by this unexpectedly gentle gesture, completely defying her image of a cruel patriarch. The Duke softly apologizes for calling her out while she is still recovering from her injuries. Looking at his gentle expression, she realizes the Duke is simply a deeply worried father. She realizes her initial fears of exile were foolish and questions her previous assumptions about him. Evgenia knows she must use this meeting to discuss her future and secure goals. Swallowing her pride, Evgenia politely bows and offers her father a sincere apology. The Duke is stunned by her polite apology as she promises never to cause trouble again. The Duke gasps in sheer shock as Evgenia declares she's giving up on the Crown Prince. The Duke desperately asks if her claim is true, while Evgenia quietly dabs at her tears. Evgenia internally realizes that her sudden, unexpected tears have actually worked in her favor. Stepping forward, Evgenia directly asks her father if he can arrange a marriage for her. She explains that she must marry quickly before her resolve to abandon the Crown Prince wavers. She fondly imagines a bright, peaceful wedding day with her beloved future husband. Her brother Sionel quickly questions her sincerity, prompting her to firmly reaffirm her honesty. Standing before them, Evgenia maintains her calm, composed demeanor under their heavy skepticism. She offers to let them choose her groom, though she internally notes their lingering suspicion. She insists on marrying before the Crown Prince does, knowing she must press her advantage. She expresses her desire to leave the capital quickly to begin her quiet newlywed life. The Duke and Sionel trade silent glances while Evgenia internally hopes her plans go smoothly. She requests that her future husband's status still befits her family's noble standing. The Duke firmly reminds her that she remains a proud lady of House Basilian. The Duke's expression softens with deep paternal care as he gazes at his daughter. The Duke promises to choose a highly suitable groom, letting Evgenia let out a sigh of relief. Satisfied with her progress, Evgenia prepares to excuse herself and return to her room. Sensing his reaction is slightly incomplete, Evgenia decides to deliver a final emotional blow. With a soft, sorrowful gaze, she quietly acknowledges her past selfishness to her father. She bows deeply to her stunned father, leaving him completely speechless in his office. She declares that the old, troublesome version of herself has completely vanished. The Duke calls out her name in deep emotion, completely moved by her dramatic words. Satisfied with her exit, Evgenia turns to walk away with graceful composure. Suddenly, her vision begins to warp and spin in a disorienting, dizzying haze. A panicked shout rings out as Evgenia suddenly collapses onto the cold floor. Desperate cries echo through the room, demanding a physician be called immediately. Evgenia lies in bed with a high fever as her worried family members argue over her. The Duke frantically demands the physician's arrival while his sons try to calm him down. The physician arrives and diagnoses her with a severe cold after examining her. The physician reassures the worried family that she will recover with medicine and rest. The Duke's furious voice demands to know how she caught a cold while confined. Sionel wonders if her head injury caused her collapse, but the physician quickly refutes this. The physician explains that her collapse was likely caused by a severely weakened physical and mental state. Sionel angrily berates his father, accusing him of making her condition worse through neglect. Melissa nervously confesses that Evgenia had asked about her father's whereabouts upon waking up. Hearing this, the Duke and Sionel are struck with a sudden wave of deep guilt. Melissa adds that Evgenia had simply smiled sadly and given up hope of his return. The Duke blames himself, realizing his avoidance only hurt his daughter further. He laments his foolishness in thinking she was merely throwing another dramatic tantrum. He emotionally recalls how she finally addressed him as her father after so long. Sionel quietly agrees, remembering how much she had always resented their family in her youth. They recall that their mother was the only person Evgenia ever truly trusted as a child. After their mother's death, she had isolated her grief, making her current warmth even more impactful. The Duke concludes that her collapse is the result of immense trauma from the prince's betrayal. The Duke fumes with rage at the Crown Prince for daring to insult his daughter. Sionel suggests that this sudden change in her heart might actually serve their family's interests. He looks on with a calculating yet protective expression, thinking of his sister's future. Sionel warns their father that Evgenia is fickle and could change her mind at any moment. The Duke agrees and realizes they must find a suitable marriage candidate immediately. The Duke quickly writes a letter, deciding that House Rudion would make a perfect match. In a sunny garden, the handsome, blonde young man of House Rudion quietly writes a letter. At the Grand Rudion Duchy, a sudden, furious shout of absolute outrage echoes through the halls. Seated at his desk, the blonde nobleman, Euclid Rudion, calmly asks his aide what the matter is. His aide, Delano, expresses absolute shock at the proposal of marrying Lady Basilian. Delano passionately argues against the match, pointing out her ruined reputation and well-known obsession with the crown prince. Remaining completely unbothered, Euclid calmly asks Delano about the outstanding debt they owe to Count Beers. Delano nervously reveals a looming debt of 750 gold, warning of severe price hikes if they default. Euclid acknowledges the warning but notes that their financial troubles extend far beyond a single distribution fee. Euclid explains that their unstable financial situation makes marrying into the Basilian family an absolute necessity. Delano remains vehemently opposed, questioning why the supposedly decent Duke Basilian would offer such a match. Euclid recalls how unexpectedly open the Duke was, while Delano reminds him that the trade network expansion holds little mutual benefit. Euclid points out the immense dowry and trade branch promised by the Duke, while Delano's sweat drops over the Duke's desperation to marry off his daughter. Euclid notes that rumors linking Lady Basilian to the Crown Prince are false, meaning the marriage won't anger the royal family. Despite Delano bringing up the lady's persistent feelings, Euclid dismisses them, cryptically stating it doesn't matter to him. Euclid commands his steward to prepare for an immediate departure to the capital, ignoring Delano's final protests. With a cool and determined expression, Euclid slides on a pair of round, gold-rimmed glasses. Realizing he cannot change his master's mind, Delano reluctantly submits with a quiet sigh. Euclid smiles gently, declaring the matter settled and dismissing his aide to return to his work. Left alone in his grand office, Euclid sets down his pen with a sudden, quiet tap. Suddenly, a violent tremor seizes Euclid's body as he desperately clutches a handkerchief to his mouth. Sweat pours down his face as Euclid gasps for breath, blood trickling from his lips. He gazes down at his blood-stained handkerchief, his critical illness casting a dark shadow over his future. Back in the Basilian estate, Anne cheerfully brings a warm bowl of medicine to Evgenia's bedside. Evgenia grumbles internally at the family's excessive worry, feeling like a tragic patient despite only having a common cold. Evgenia asks Anne not to watch her so closely, but the maid insists she is under strict orders from the Duke. She sips the bitter tonic. Evgenia realizes her theatrical tears in the study have triggered this wave of protective guilt. She vividly recalls her father and brother screaming in sheer panic the moment she suddenly collapsed on the floor. Waking up refreshed, she is completely bewildered to find her entire family hovering anxiously over her bed. Her father deeply apologizes for neglecting her, leaving Evgenia completely baffled by his sudden, intense display of paternal guilt. Realizing her previous tears caused this misunderstanding, Evgenia frantically waves her hands, insisting she was never lonely or upset. Her father tearfully commends her strength, completely misinterpreting her denial as a brave attempt to hide her pain. To take away the bitter taste of the medicine, Anne rewards a cooperative Evgenia with a sweet piece of candy. Evgenia quietly chews on her sweet treat, enjoying a rare moment of peace in her recovery. Anne suddenly remembers that Melissa had asked to see her earlier, asking how she should respond. Evgenia looks surprised, wondering what business Melissa could possibly have with her. The scene shifts to a sunny gazebo where Evgenia graciously thanks Melissa for inviting her out for tea. Sitting across from her, the gentle blonde Melissa smiles warmly as she sweetens her cup of tea. Sipping her tea, Evgenia notes how different Melissa's gentle demeanor is from the rest of the Basilian family. When Evgenia directly asks the purpose of their meeting, Melissa flinches in sudden surprise. In her nervousness, Melissa accidentally knocks over her teacup, spilling tea across the white tablecloth. Melissa panics over ruining the cherished tablecloth, but Evgenia calmly assures her it is fine and offers a handkerchief. As Melissa repeatedly apologizes, Evgenia observes her extreme tension and wonders if the proposal letter is the cause. Gently dabbing the spill, Evgenia reassures Melissa that she has no reason to worry about the imperial marriage offer. Evgenia clarifies that she has abandoned her feelings for the crown prince, freeing Melissa to make her own choice. Melissa quickly protests, clarifying that her past encounters with the prince were purely accidental chance meetings. Melissa insists she rejected the marriage offer of her own free will, remembering Evgenia's advice to never be pushed around. Evgenia accepts this explanation but questions why Melissa still seems incredibly anxious around her today. Melissa hesitantly confesses that she recently wandered into Evgenia's annex and went down into the basement. Evgenia's expression sharpens with alarm, realizing that letting Melissa bring up Richard could lead to a dangerous situation. A chilling, dark aura surrounds Evgenia as she coldly commands Melissa to forget everything she witnessed in the basement. When Evgenia states she sent the boy somewhere better, a terrified Melissa instantly fears the worst. Evgenia quickly clarifies that she simply freed him with ample travel funds, letting a greatly relieved Melissa finally breathe easy. Evgenia asks Melissa about her adjustment to the estate, and Melissa happily declares she loves it. Internal narration details the strict restrictions on Melissa's freedom of movement around the estate. Evgenia advises Melissa to seek their father's permission and an escort for safe outings. Melissa reveals that the temple is busy praying for the crown prince's upcoming departure for war. Evgenia quietly realizes that the looming war completely overshadowed Melissa's rejected imperial engagement. Melissa prepares to share more details about the crown prince's legendary lineage and martial reputation. A vivid legend depicts the imperial family's dragon-slaying heritage, justifying the prince's status as a genius swordmaster. Their quiet afternoon is suddenly interrupted as Anne runs toward them in absolute panic. Evgenia turns with a sharp, guarded look, immediately sensing that something is terribly amiss. Anne frantically announces the unexpected arrival of an extremely prominent visitor at the estate. A close-up reveals the relaxed smirk of the newly arrived guest as he sips tea. Crown Prince Kaede Elios lounges arrogantly, exuding an aura of absolute power and charm. System text formally introduces Kaede Elias, the formidable crown prince and Melissa's persistent suitor. Narration notes that this man was the tragic catalyst for Evgenia's obsessive downfall. Stealing her nerves, Evgenia hesitates at the door, unprepared for the sudden confrontation. A smirk plays on the prince's lips as the imperial presence looms large inside. Kaede greets Evgenia with supreme arrogance, mockingly asking if she had missed him. Evgenia observes his handsome face coldly, feeling nothing but profound resentment and anger. Hiding her disdain, Evgenia performs a polite curtsy and delivers a formal imperial greeting. The crown prince shifts forward in his seat, sharpening his focus on her. Leaning in close, Kaede mockingly asks if she injured her head out of jealousy over Melissa. Evgenia dismisses his concerns, but Kaede smugly points out her history of self-destructive behavior. When Kaede claims she has been acting strangely, Evgenia firmly retorts that she simply came to her senses. Kaede narrows his eyes in disbelief, deeply irritated by her uncharacteristic composure and defiance. Evgenia clearly states she has abandoned her feelings for him and intends to marry another man. She assures him that he will no longer be burdened by her persistent attention. Shocked and angered, Kaede demands to know if she is truly planning to abandon him. Kaede aggressively grabs her shoulders, outraged that she would dare relinquish her ambition to be crown princess. Evgenia is utterly bewildered and repulsed by his sudden, intense display of possessive anger. Demanding her personal space back, Evgenia coldly commands the prince to release his grip on her. A frustrated click of his tongue breaks the silence as Kaede reluctantly loosens his hold. Internal thoughts reveal the prince's suspicion that her coldness is merely a manipulative new strategy. Kaede accuses her of playing games, but Evgenia's attention is suddenly diverted by a buzzing insect. A pesky fly persistently buzzes around the prince's neck, completely distracting her from his words. Evgenia internally mocks the legendary swordmaster for failing to notice the insect right under his nose. Kaede continues his arrogant speech, completely unaware of both the fly and her growing irritation. Kaede cruelly mocks her, asking who would ever willingly agree to marry a woman with her reputation. Evgenia's eye twitches in intense annoyance as the fly continues to disrupt her concentration. She desperately wishes the oblivious prince would simply notice the bug and swat it away. Her patience completely evaporates, her hand clenching into a tight, determined fist. As the fly finally lands squarely on the prince's cheek, Evgenia prepares her decisive strike. Cut off mid-sentence, the arrogant prince is violently slapped across the face as Evgenia squashes the bug. An oppressive, stunned silence descends upon the room as both of them freeze in absolute shock. A sudden wave of panic washes over Evgenia as she realizes the gravity of her action. Kaede demands an explanation for the slap, while a horrified Evgenia silently accepts her impending doom. Kaede's thoughts highlight his confusion over her uncharacteristic panic, given her usual bold and shameless behavior. He recalls how her past tantrums and desperate scenes always followed a predictable manipulative pattern. Despite her dramatic outbursts, he notes that she had always maintained a calculating level of restraint. He remembers deliberately ignoring her and dancing with other women to provoke her obsessive jealousy. He reflects on how she would ruthlessly handle any rival ladies, ensuring no other relationships could develop. He recalls that her face has always shown irritation and boredom since they first met as children. The crown prince finds her actions unbelievable, completely bewildered as to why she slapped him. He assumes her shocking reaction must be due to the proposal, refusing to accept it was over a bug. Sweat beads on her face as Evgenia hesitantly offers her apologies for the sudden strike. Observing her submission, he notes she swallowed her pride, believing she hasn't changed after all. He walks forward, thinking that this level of submission is still not enough for his desires. A knock sounds as an attendant outside informs the prince it is time to return to the palace. Crown Prince turns to leave, drawing a quiet gasp of surprise from Evgenia. He warns her that once he departs, he will not return for at least 3 months. The prince casts a smug look back, expecting her to beg him to stay. Evgenia suddenly reaches out, grabbing his sleeve and pleading for him to wait. With a sudden movement, she thrusts a delicate lace handkerchief directly into his hands. Evgenia firmly presses the lace-trimmed pink handkerchief into the prince's grasp. The prince flinches in absolute bewilderment, questioning why she is presenting him with a handkerchief. He inspects the pale pink lace, commenting on her taste while she remains silent. Believing it is a parting gift, the prince smugly accepts the handkerchief, startling Evgenia. A trace of complex emotion crosses the crown prince's face as he looks away. He reflects that her cold, indifferent violet eyes have always reminded him of strong liquor. With the pink handkerchief in hand, the crown prince finally turns and departs the room. An ominous shift in tone signals that his departure is not the end. In a dark crimson light, the prince smirks wickedly while clutching the pink lace handkerchief. Back in her room, a weary Evgenia sighs heavily while rubbing her aching forehead. She sits alone on the sofa, still disbelieving that she actually slapped the crown prince. She notes that this Kaiden felt surprisingly lenient compared to his brutal novel counterpart. She panics upon realizing she accidentally gifted Melissa's pink lace handkerchief to the prince. Evgenia desperately reassures herself that she managed the highly dangerous situation reasonably well. Alexis yawns wearily as he complains about how exhausting his recent mock training was. He stretches his tired limbs, eager to eat a quick dinner and finally rest. Alexis pushes open the dining room doors, only to halt in sudden confusion. He is utterly shocked to find Evgenia sitting at the dinner table with the family. Evgenia calmly questions if family dinners are really that unusual, cutting her steak. She recalls Melissa inviting her to join, which surprised but delighted her family. Her father mentions hearing that the crown prince visited the estate earlier that day. Her father sternly asks if the prince tried to blame her for Melissa's rejection. Evgenia clarifies that the prince did not scold her, though his information source remains a mystery. She explains that the prince somehow knew about her dramatic tantrum at the estate. Her father fumes over who leaked the information while Alexis breaks into a nervous sweat. Evgenia confesses that the prince insulted her, telling her never to dream of being his mistress. Alexis erupts in sheer fury at the insult, but his brother quickly orders him to be quiet. Alexis declares that insulting an unmarried noblewoman's honor is an attack on their family name. He vows to lodge an official complaint with the imperial family, alarming Evgenia. She begs him not to go that far, hinting that she did not merely stand there. Evgenia bluntly confesses to the entire table that she actually slapped the crown prince. Alexis yells in absolute shock, unable to believe she had the audacity to strike royalty. When Evgenia apologizes, her father warmly commends her action, saying she did the right thing. Her father jokes that a slap from her probably felt like a tiny bug to a swordmaster. Evgenia expresses her desire for the matter to quietly blow over so she can marry soon. Hearing this, her father smiles, stating that her desire to marry works out perfectly. Evgenia is left completely bewildered by her father's cryptic response. Golden light surrounds her as her father prepares to reveal a long-awaited arrangement. Evgenia swallows nervously as she prepares to discuss her sudden marriage plans. Her father heartily approves, believing any man would be honored to marry her. During dinner, her father explains that the Duke's slow reply was sent via regular carriage. Angered by the Duke's lack of resources, her father orders a supply of magic carriages and stones. Evgenia requests that a carriage be sent ahead to House Rudion, which her father readily grants. Her father praises her meticulousness in also choosing a personal escort knight, confusing Evgenia. He mentions the guard who watched her room, prompting a sweat-inducing memory for the night. Evgenia remembers Anne's promise, while her father rejects her proposal to delay the wedding. She insists on marrying as soon as possible, envisioning her future with Duke Rudion. She explains she must wed and leave before the crown prince returns from his campaign. Accepting her urgency, her father sighs and promises to contact the temple immediately. Alexis suddenly interrupts the conversation, completely bewildered by the sudden marriage talk. Her father clarifies that Evgenia is marrying, sending Alexis into a frenzy of questions. Upon hearing the groom is Duke Rudion, Alexis reacts in utter shock and disbelief. Alexis feels betrayed, discovering everyone else, including Melissa, already knew about the arrangement. He explodes in anger, shouting about feeling excluded from his own family. Alexis storms out of the room, leaving Evgenia thoroughly confused by his sudden outburst. The dining room doors shut heavily, bringing a sudden end to the chaotic family meal. Walking down the hallway, Evgenia notes how childishly Alexis behaved by storming off. She spots the knight, Gressel Fion, standing in the corridor as they discuss her escort. The knight recognizes her while Evgenia tries to recall where she heard his name. Falling to his knees, Gressel begs for forgiveness, catching her completely off guard. He confesses he once resented guarding her due to rumors, which puzzles Evgenia. Swearing lifelong loyalty, he thanks her for her boundless grace, leaving her awkwardly accepting. The knight reflects on his past, finally understanding the true nature of her actions. Evgenia resolves to speak carefully, realizing Anne did something secret to earn this devotion. She commands the knight to stand, and he eagerly obeys her first order. She asks if he is truly willing to follow her to the cold north. The knight explains his sibling's situation, leaving Evgenia baffled by the word hostage. He tearfully realizes her hostage demand was actually a secret way to provide medical treatment. Bemused by his misunderstanding, Evgenia deadpans and dismisses the emotional knight. The knight enthusiastically thanks her once more before taking his leave. Back in her room, Evgenia marvels at how she acquired a personal guard so easily. She realizes Anne is incredibly clever for securing a loyal knight in just 1 week. She wondered that the original Evgenia was far more extraordinary than the novel depicted. Evgenia directly asks Anne if her sudden decision to marry seems strange. Anne beams with absolute joy, reaffirming her unwavering loyalty to her mistress. Anne trusts her decisions, while Evgenia reflects on how her internal change sparked everything. Anne supports her choice of Duke Rudion as rain begins to fall outside. A tortured soul collapses in despair as a heavy downpour sweeps over the land. Deep within the temple, High Priest Damien desperately begs for death in his prayers. He prays with clasped hands, wondering if aiding Lady Basilian will truly save the world. He ponders the ultimate weight of his divine mission to prevent the world's destruction. An older priest approaches, warning Damien that he will collapse from days of constant prayer. The priest notes Damien's upright character, worried by his son in intense distress. He is deeply unsettled, seeing High Priest Damien looking so pale and haunted. Damien asks about his visit, and the priest reveals he has an urgent report. The priest announces that Lady Basilian has requested to hold her wedding at the temple. He notes her famous obsession with the crown prince, surprised she is marrying someone else. High Priest Damien turns in absolute shock, stunned that his guest already knew the details. The white-haired High Priest Damien walks with another priest, announcing that he will personally officiate Lady Basilian's upcoming wedding ceremony. High Priest Damien holds his chest ornaments tightly, declaring his firm resolve to preside over the sacred wedding ceremony. Sunlight gently illuminates the grand towers of the Basilian ducal estate as a new morning begins. Evgenia and Alexis sit in a heavy, awkward silence within the lavishly decorated parlor. Alexis angrily yells at Evgenia, demanding to know how long she plans to sit there staring in silence. Evgenia calmly explains her presence, noting that Alexis is merely sulking over not knowing about her engagement earlier. Chibi style Evgenia sweat drops as she mentally questions why her brother always has to speak so aggressively. Alexis buries his face grumpily behind a white pillow, refusing to ease up on his dramatic sulk. Though relieved by the temple's swift wedding approval, Evgenia resolves to mend her relationship with Alexis before departing. Evgenia gently teases Alexis, questioning why he is brooding when his military campaign begins in just 2 days. Alexis looks over in sudden distress, demanding to know why she has always treated him so differently. Alexis hugs his pillow tight with imaginary dog ears, complaining that she never allowed him to call her Nuna. Evgenia stares back blankly with a sweat drop, admitting she does not understand his long-held grievance. A close-up of Evgenia's purple eyes signals a sudden, quiet shift back into her childhood memories. Evgenia recalls a past memory where her younger self stood coldly before a hopeful younger Alexis. In the flashback, a cheerful young Alexis holds a small bouquet of flowers, asking what he should call her. Young Evgenia abruptly slaps the white flowers directly out of the boy's hands. Young Alexis cries out in distress as the flowers fall scattered onto the dirt path. Without a backward glance, the cold young Evgenia walks away, leaving him standing completely alone. Evgenia reflects on the fragments of past memories, realizing how brutally cold her previous self was to her brother. She looks down in quiet contemplation, deeply questioning why the original Evgenia acted so cruelly. Evgenia relents and sighs, offering to finally let him call her Nuna from now on. Alexis reacts with loud hostility, questioning her sudden change of mind and flatly refusing the offer. Evgenia sighs wearily as Alexis continues to grumble about her sudden, unprompted permission. When Evgenia apologizes and tells him to drop it, Alexis peeks cautiously over his pillow. Alexis hesitantly asks if he may visit Duke Rudion's castle once his campaign safely concludes. Evgenia chides him for jinxing himself, warmly insisting that he will return safely from the campaign. Alexis sulks as Evgenia officially grants him permission to visit her at Rudion Castle. Evgenia mentions missing his victory parade, prompting Alexis to complain about a handkerchief she gave to a stranger. With a gentle smile, Evgenia suddenly reaches out, presenting a folded, lace-trimmed handkerchief to her brother. Evgenia presents the handkerchief with a soft smile, asking if this finally makes him happy. Alexis stares in absolute shock at the delicate gift, his defensive guard completely crumbling. Holding the handkerchief close, Alexis breaks into a genuinely bright, joyful smile. Seeing her brother's pure happiness, Evgenia smiles back at him with genuine sisterly warmth. 3 days later, the scene shifts as a magic carriage travels swiftly through the city. A white magic carriage rolls smoothly along the paved streets, carrying its high-status passengers. Inside the carriage, the blonde, bespectacled Duke Rudion expresses his immense gratitude for Duke Basilian's overwhelming generosity. His brown-haired knight companion sits opposite him, expressing deep unease over Duke Basilian's sudden generosity. The knight details his suspicions, pointing out the double dowry and the sudden push for a northern trading branch. He continues to grumble about the rushed marriage timeline and the suspicious lack of wedding guests. Duke Rudion calmly reviews the documents, suggesting that Lady Basilian might simply be very devout. The knight remains highly skeptical, arguing that the wedding timeline feels far too convenient. Duke Rudion looks up with a serious expression, asking his companion what he is trying to imply. The knight earnestly asks if the arrangement strikes the Duke as odd, suggesting a hidden motive. A close-up of Duke Rudion's face shows him opening his mouth to firmly cut off the discussion. Duke Rudion's expression turns cold and intense as he declares that his marriage promise is absolute. Recognizing his overstep, the loyal knight quickly bows his head and offers his sincere apologies. A voice from outside interrupts, announcing that the carriage has finally arrived at the Basilian estate. The magic carriage passes through the grand gates, arriving at the impressive Basilian estate. 3 maids whisper excitedly among themselves, noting that Lady Evgenia looks unusually beautiful and nervous. The elegant white carriage finally arrives at the grand estate, halting with a soft click. Evgenia watches with bated breath as the handsome blonde Duke steps out of the carriage. Bathed in gentle sunlight, the blonde Duke stands poised, his striking profile radiating aristocratic elegance. A sudden panicked scream echoes from Evgenia's bedroom 3 hours before the Duke's arrival as she cries out in absolute terror at what she sees. Evgenia clutches her head in utter horror, screaming in disbelief upon discovering a bright red pimple on her cheek. Staring at her vanity and despair, Evgenia laments her terrible luck just as Anne knocks on the door to greet her. Anne gasps in absolute shock at the unprecedented blemish on her mistress's skin, while Evgenia dryly wishes her maid wouldn't react so dramatically. Anne apologizes tearfully, realizing a new herbal face mask she tested the previous day must have irritated Evgenia's sensitive skin. Evgenia realizes her excessive pre-wedding beauty regimen backfired, remembering the hectic routine of face packs and pampering. Evgenia desperately suggests popping the blemish, but Anne quickly cuts her off with a stern warning that it will only worsen. Bibi Evgenia looks warily at Anne, hoping she can trust her maid's backup plan. A few hours later, the dark-haired Duke and the maids wait anxiously in the grand hall. The dark-haired Duke stares in absolute bewilderment, sweat dropping as he asks Evgenia what on earth she did to her face. Duke scolds her for her strange appearance, asking if she ignored the professional dressing maid, though he quickly gives up in exasperation. CNL decides to rush out to avoid being late, while the surrounding servants quietly whisper about their mistress's bizarre new style. Evgenia wonders why her father reacted so strongly, confident that Anne did an excellent job covering up the blemish. A magnificent white carriage stands ready in the driveway, awaiting the arrival of the wedding guests. The Basilian family and their servants stand in a line as the carriage pulls up. Evgenia squeals in excitement as the carriage door swings open, signaling the long-awaited arrival of the groom. CNL waits with a composed and dignified expression, ready to greet the arriving Northern Duke. Delano, the brown-haired aide, flinches in sheer terror upon seeing Evgenia before stutteringly introducing himself to her. Delano nervously sweats as he wonders if her bizarre, heavily caked face is actually a high-fashion trend from the capital. Polished black boot steps gracefully out of the carriage, announcing the blonde Duke's descent. Wearing an ornate cream suit, the strikingly handsome blonde Duke strides forward with absolute confidence. A polite greeting welcomes the handsome blonde Duke as he steps closer to the waiting Basilian hosts. The silent atmosphere grows tense as the handsome visitor stands poised before his future bride. Gazing at him, Evgenia realizes with absolute certainty that she crossed worlds and timelines solely to meet this beautiful man. Overwhelmed by a sudden wave of deep emotion, Evgenia wonders why she feels like crying. Euclid stands close to Evgenia, his gentle presence instantly calming her racing, anxious thoughts. Euclid introduces himself with a charming smile, sending Evgenia into an internal frenzy over his divine looks and velvety voice. Sionel loudly clears his throat, abruptly snapping Evgenia out of her daze as she realizes she forgot to introduce herself. Preparing to curtsy, Evgenia elegantly gathers the fabric of her ornate white and gold dress. Evgenia performs a beautiful, sweeping curtsy as she formally introduces herself to the breathtaking blonde Duke. Euclid looks at his future bride, momentarily caught off guard by her uniquely striking presence. Reaching out with gentle grace, Euclid takes Evgenia's hand, establishing a tender connection between them. With his eyes gently closed, the handsome Duke leans down to deliver a chivalrous gesture. Euclid presses a soft, respectful kiss against the back of Evgenia's trembling hand. Euclid looks up with a heart-melting smile, softly asking Lady Basilian to take good care of him. Evgenia's mind completely fractures into a panic scream of pure, unadulterated fangirl excitement. Evgenia's inner fangirl explodes with absolute joy, screaming over her favorite character kissing the back of her hand. As Euclid releases her hand, Evgenia greedily wishes he would have held onto it for just a little longer. Blushing furiously, Chibi Evgenia scolds herself for having such shameless, greedy thoughts in broad daylight. Lionel graciously welcomes Euclid after his long journey, completely unaware that Evgenia's soul has practically ascended to heaven. Sionel invites Euclid inside for dinner, but the polite blonde Duke requests to change his traveling clothes first. Back in her dressing room, Evgenia stares at her reflection, muttering that she is utterly doomed. Evgenia gasps in absolute horror upon seeing her reflection, realizing her heavy makeup has horribly smeared into a clownish mess. Evgenia finally understands her father's shock, lamenting that her outdated, caked-on makeup ruined her carefully planned matching outfit with Euclid. Evgenia tearfully praises Euclid's angelic nature, deeply moved that he treated her with such kindness despite her ridiculous makeup. Blush-stricken and teary-eyed, Evgenia is deeply touched that the blonde Duke spoke to her so gently without flinching at her makeup. Staring thoughtfully, Evgenia notes that she felt no discomfort with Euclid, unlike the chilling dread she experienced around Richard. A polite knock sounds at the door as Anne asks if she may enter the dressing room. Anne rushes in, anxiously presenting Evgenia with multiple small medicine bottles. Anne explains that the darker medicine is a sedative, while the others are for digestion. Anne apologizes for her nervousness and for applying such heavy makeup onto Evgenia's face. Evgenia accepts the medicine, thanking Anne for helping her feel more comfortable for dinner. Anne suddenly looks up with a bright, cheerful expression to ask for another favor. Evgenia instructs Anne to wipe off the heavy makeup and fetch a fresh dress instead. The blonde-haired Melissa happily welcomes Evgenia as she takes her place at the table. Evgenia asks Melissa if any other guests have arrived yet at the grand dining table. Evgenia curiously asks Melissa if there is still something left on her face. Evgenia stands beautifully without her heavy makeup, wearing a much more elegant natural dress. Melissa eagerly asks Evgenia what she thinks of her handsome future husband, Duke Rudion. Internally, Evgenia is thrilled at the perfect opportunity to brag about her favorite character. Evgenia praises Euclid's gentle and elegant presence, recalling a handsome memory of him. Evgenia internally gushes over Euclid's reputation as a kind, compassionate, and perfect noble. Melissa excitedly looks forward to speaking with the Duke, while Evgenia smiles silently in agreement. Evgenia's father and his companions walk into the dining room to join the sisters. A close-up highlights Euclid's dazzling blonde hair, sharp golden green eyes, and elegant cream-colored attire. The dining table is presented with a lavish spread of gourmet lobster and seafood. Evgenia's father invites everyone to sit, and Euclid politely expresses his gratitude. Evgenia admires Euclid from across the table, thinking he looks like a radiant sunshine prince. Evgenia realizes her secret plan to wear a matching outfit with Euclid has completely failed. Against a dramatic background, Evgenia is hilariously depressed over her failed matching outfit plan. Evgenia continues to admire Euclid's gold hair, ivory skin, and incredibly sculpted, elegant figure. A close-up showcases Euclid's beautiful golden eyes, looking like a man crafted by gods. Evgenia gasps in surprise when she realizes Euclid has suddenly looked directly at her. Euclid stares back with a soft, slightly flushed expression and shimmering, focused eyes. Evgenia wonders if she imagined it or if Euclid's face actually turned a bit red. Blushing deeply, Euclid quickly covers his mouth in a moment of adorable, flustered embarrassment. Evgenia's father asks if the Duke is all right, prompting Euclid to politely apologize. Her father turns to Evgenia, asking if she lacks an appetite since her plate is untouched. As her father teases her, Evgenia blushes, admitting she was too busy staring to eat. Her father gently encourages Evgenia to ask Euclid directly if she has any questions. Looking across the table at Euclid, Evgenia internally resolves to learn everything about him. Her father teasingly asks if she is feeling shy, and Evgenia admits her extreme nervousness. Her father notes that only Euclid's aide accompanied him, asking why no one else came. Euclid recalls his two young nephews as Evgenia's father asks about them. Euclid explains that he decided not to bring his young nephews due to their brief stay. Evgenia's father points out that holding the wedding tomorrow seems far too rushed. Evgenia firmly asserts that she has already finished packing to leave on schedule tomorrow. The dark-haired aide joins the father in suggesting Euclid stay for a few more days. Her father suggests visiting the imperial palace, which instantly irritates Evgenia. Evgenia coldly questions the necessity of greeting the emperor since they are not related. Her father awkwardly reminds Evgenia of the emperor's lifelong affection for her. Euclid politely declines the invitation, citing his need to return to his young nephews. Her father inquires if anything was inconvenient since their luggage remains mostly packed. Euclid explains they are staying at the Rudian capital estate, leaving their luggage packed. Euclid reveals the estate's staff belongs to the imperial family, sparking Evgenia's sudden suspicion. Melissa sadly asks if it will be difficult to see her sister once she moves north. Her father reassures Melissa that Evgenia can visit often since the crown prince is away. Sionel remarks that Evgenia might find the distant land unfamiliar, but she silently resolves to adapt. Amidst the sudden, tense silence at the dinner table, Evgenia nervously relents and promises to visit. Evgenia wonders why Euclid looks so deeply surprised by her quiet declaration. Evgenia realizes Euclid found her commitment unexpected, believing she is obsessed with the crown prince. Determined to prove she is changed, Evgenia resolves to show Euclid her true reformed character. A close-up of Evgenia's gentle smile reflects her quiet, newfound determination. Euclid politely takes his leave, prompting a silent wave of childish excitement from Evgenia. The grand estate of House Basilian stands beautifully bathed in the warm glow of sunset. Sionel warmly bids farewell to Euclid, looking forward to meeting at the temple tomorrow. Evgenia vainly pleads with her overly enthusiastic father to maintain his dignity as they say goodbye. The close-up of Euclid shows him blushing softly in response to the warm family interaction. Euclid and his aide board their white carriage, preparing to depart into the cool evening. Delano welcomes his lord back as Euclid confirms they are ready to depart. As the carriage rolls away, Delano asks about the dinner and Euclid notes it went well. Delano remarks on the grand scale of the Basilian estate and Euclid quietly agrees. When asked about his first impression of Evgenia, Euclid describes it as quite striking. Delano reacts with startled confusion to Euclid's unexpected description of his future bride. Delano admits his heart nearly stopped upon seeing Evgenia, surprised that Euclid was also startled. To Euclid, despite her intimidating makeup, Evgenia appeared truly beautiful during their meeting. Delano is utterly dumbfounded by Euclid's shocking declaration of Evgenia's beauty. Euclid enthusiastically declares he has never seen such a beauty, leaving Delano sweating over his taste. Delano asks if Evgenia seemed forced into the marriage, prompting Euclid to contemplate deeply. Euclid silently reflects on how he initially believed his only duty was to ensure the marriage. Euclid recalls his initial plan to grant Evgenia as much freedom as possible after their wedding. That distant plan immediately felt foolish to Euclid the very moment he laid eyes on her. A sharp close-up of Euclid's golden eye captures his profound realization. Euclid remembers feeling as if time had stopped, finally finding what he had long been waiting for. Euclid recalls standing by the carriage, completely captivated by Evgenia's presence during their meeting. He remembers her gloomy expression, wondering if she truly felt forced into the wedding arrangement. Sionel asks Euclid if he is curious about the sudden rush behind the wedding timeline. Euclid politely replies that he is simply grateful for the Duke's trust and hadn't questioned it. Sionel expresses his deep gratitude for Euclid's respectful and understanding attitude. Sionel admits he often struggles to understand his daughter, asking Euclid if he heard the rumors. Sionel asks if Euclid heard about the imperial family granting the Basilian name to his niece. Sionel explains that when a marriage proposal arrived from the imperial household, he assumed it was for Evgenia. Sionel reveals the shocking twist, questioning if the imperial proposal was actually intended for his niece instead. Clenching his fist tightly, Sionel recalls the sobering shock of that deceptive proposal. Sionel explains that Evgenia was deeply hurt by the betrayal, and Euclid expresses his heartfelt sympathy. Sionel notes that, thankfully, Evgenia decided to let go of her unrequited feelings through this marriage. Euclid is startled to learn that the marriage was actually Evgenia's own choice to move forward. Sionel emphasizes that the marriage was entirely driven by Evgenia's own determination to move on. Euclid realizes with shock that the marriage was driven by Evgenia herself, not her father. Euclid worries that Evgenia might eventually regret choosing a marriage designed only to escape her past. Euclid anxiously wonders about the severe consequences of canceling the marriage at this point. As Euclid worries about the family's honor, Delano suddenly screams out to halt the carriage. An armed guard demands the carriage occupants identify themselves, announcing they are at the Rudion residence. Delano angrily offers to handle the insolent guard, but Euclid calmly decides to step out himself. The guard demands the passengers step out, explaining that the estate is managed by the imperial family. The guard is instantly shocked upon realizing the passenger is none other than Duke Euclid himself. The guard nervously asks if the Duke has sudden business in the capital at such an hour. Feeling incredibly weary, Euclid requests to rest immediately and orders the gate to be opened. A guard stutteringly offers his deepest apologies as the massive iron gates swing open. The majestic estate has stood almost entirely empty for over 500 years since the founding. Because the imperial family covered all maintenance, it was effectively viewed as imperial property. Philip warmly welcomes Euclid back, and the young Duke notes it has been a long time. Euclid requests to be guided to his room immediately so he can rest his weary mind. As they ascend the grand staircase, Philip calculates the brief length of Euclid's magic carriage trip. Declining dinner, Euclid politely requests to bathe and head straight to sleep instead. A sudden soft knock sounds at the door as Euclid dries off from his bath. A young brown-haired servant boy nervously steps inside to greet the blonde Duke. The young servant anxiously inquires if the bathwater temperature was to the Duke's liking. Rick stands completely frozen in absolute, wide-eyed nervous tension before his lord. After Rick introduces himself, Euclid gently thanks him for preparing such a comfortable bath. Euclid dismisses the boy for the night, and Rick eagerly promises to return whenever summoned. Alone at last, Euclid sits quietly on the edge of his bed in deep contemplation. He recalls sensing a strange, unsettling atmosphere from the very moment he arrived. Kneeling on the floor, Euclid begins searching under his bed for hidden secrets. He uncovers a tiny monitoring device, realizing the imperial family keeps him in a gilded cage. Euclid is fully aware that hidden magical surveillance devices are planted all around the estate. Holding the small purple device, a chilling dread slowly creeps down Euclid's spine. A haunting question regarding his late brother echoes silently in Euclid's mind. The dark history of his family begins to unfold, revealing long-hidden secrets. The Ilios Empire's history features two founding noble houses, wealthy Basilian and magical Rudion. House Basilian supported the first emperor with their overwhelming wealth and capital. Meanwhile, the first head of House Rudion served closely as the emperor's premier mage. Following the dragon's defeat, both families received titles and territory for their immense contributions. Mysteriously, House Rudion abandoned the capital to establish their domain in the harsh north. Despite their isolation, young Euclid grew up happily alongside his loving father and brother. 5 years ago, tragedy struck, shattering the peaceful life they had built together. A sudden cold shock disrupted the quiet sanctuary of the family's home. But Euclid's brother delivers the devastating news that their father has passed away. His brother sends a desperate final message, prompting Euclid to panic and seek him out. His brother's final cryptic words reveal that he left crucial evidence hidden behind. His brother worries that the evidence left behind might only become a heavy burden. With his final plea, his brother begs Euclid to protect Marianne and Dior. His brother was returned as a corpse, leaving Euclid with his title and children. Haunted by his brother's final words, Euclid could not find any peace of mind. Driven by his brother's message, Euclid desperately searched every corner of the residence. That was the day Euclid first discovered the hidden eavesdropping devices and magical tools. Since that discovery, Euclid lived in constant paranoia, questioning every servant's words and actions. Overwhelmed by fear and paranoia, Euclid felt his entire world slowly collapsing around him. The immense burden and constant paranoia leave Euclid physically and emotionally broken on the floor. Coughing up blood, Euclid wonders if dying would finally bring him the peace he craves. Struggling to support his ailing body, he contemplates running away from his duties into death. However, Euclid is immediately gripped by worry over what would happen to his nieces. As Philip secretly watches him through a door crack, Euclid realizes his death would invite danger. He knows that if he dies, his brother's children will surely not survive. Resolving to protect them, Euclid decides to pretend to be weak to deceive his enemies. He forces a cold, determined smile, preparing to play the part of a fragile duke. From that day forward, Euclid focused solely on surviving his perilous life in the mansion. Lying awake, Euclid resolves that this marriage is absolutely necessary for his family's survival. Euclid realizes that agreeing to the marriage is the only protection he can offer his household. The scene shifts to the magnificent estate preparing for the life-altering choices ahead. A maid gently adjusts the veil of the bride, preparing her for the ceremony. Euclid stands dressed in his splendid wedding attire, looking solemn and resolute. Evgenia stands beautifully adorned in her wedding gown, her gaze carrying a quiet sadness. She clenches her dress tightly, a silent testament to her underlying nervousness. A sudden, cheerful chirping of birds echoes outside the majestic mansion on the wedding day. Evgenia is greeted with a startled morning welcome, noticing a tense atmosphere among the family. At breakfast, the two serious men blame their haggard appearances on drinking too much last night. Evgenia questions her father's gloom, wondering what exactly she should be disappointed about. Father laments that a grand Basilian wedding typically attracts countless congratulatory nobles. Evgenia dismisses the idea, preferring to avoid being swarmed by strangers. The family agrees that a quiet, intimate ceremony perfectly suits her distaste for noisy crowds. Sional admits he was deeply worried by her sudden, overnight change in attitude. He recalls her fainting from despair after being rejected by the crown prince. Looking at her now, Sional is struck by a strange and unexpected feeling of relief. Her father gazes at her with a gentle, appreciative smile, finding comfort in her peace. Sional shares the exciting news that the high priest will personally bless her wedding. Melissa suddenly chokes on her drink, drawing startled concern from her family. Sional teases Melissa about her excitement over seeing the high priest, Damien. Evgenia internally recognizes Damien as a key character from the novel storyline. He recalls Damien as a gentle priest who nonetheless rejected Melissa's feelings coldly. Despite Melissa's devastation, Damien acted righteously, possessing incredible divine favor from the gods. Evgenia becomes worried, wondering if Damien's powerful divine abilities pose a threat to her. She panics, fearing the high priest will instantly realize she is an otherworldly Saul. The scene transitions to the Grand Temple just 1 hour before the sacred wedding ceremony. Standing alone in the dressing room, Euclid nervously adjusts his collar, filled with apprehension. Euclid approaches Evgenia's preparation room door, politely requesting permission to enter. A sudden, polite knock sounds as Euclid prepares to deliver an important message. He hesitates at the threshold, gathering his courage before stepping inside the room. Upon entering, Euclid freezes in place, completely transfixed by the sight before him. He is shocked to see Evgenia holding a mysterious liquid bottle to her lips. Chilling dread grips Euclid as he desperately wonders if the bottle contains poison. Euclid panics, fearing she is committing suicide over her unrequited love for the prince. Spurred by pure adrenaline, Euclid shouts out and rushes forward to stop her. With a swift, desperate move, he knocks the bottle clean out of her hand. Euclid demands to know what she was thinking, his face pale with intense worry. Euclid pleads with her not to resort to such extreme measures, regardless of her unhappiness. He urges her not to do something so dangerous, expressing his deep concern. Evgenia looks at him in utter confusion, completely caught off guard by his dramatic reaction. Euclid reflects on his initial intention to let her call off the marriage if she wished. He firmly takes her hands and declares his intention to immediately call off the wedding. Before he can leave, Evgenia interjects to clarify that there has been a major misunderstanding. She explains with a calm smile that the liquid was simply a sedative to calm her nerves. Evgenia admits she was so nervous about the wedding that she asked a servant for medicine. A brief memory shows her asking her maid, Anne, for the calming medicine. Euclid is completely stunned and immediately begins to blush furiously at his massive, highly dramatic blunder. Covering his face in sheer embarrassment, Euclid apologizes for making such a hasty assumption. Evgenia graciously dismisses the mistake, then curiously asks what brought him to her room. Evgenia wonders if she acted too stiffly as she stands nervously before the blonde duke. Euclid softly apologizes to Evgenia, leaving her bewildered by his sudden and unexpected remorse. Bowing his head solemnly, Euclid expresses his sincere regret for his dramatic behavior. Euclid confesses his guilt over marrying her despite feeling unworthy, prompting Evgenia's complete and utter confusion. Euclid assures her he won't mind if she hates him or loves another, but Evgenia internally recoils at the absurdity of his misunderstanding since he is her ultimate bias. A maid suddenly enters the dressing room to announce that the wedding ceremony is about to begin. The brown-haired maid bows deeply in respect before the blonde duke. Evgenia panics as she realizes she missed her opportunity to object to his misunderstandings. Looking at her bouquet, Evgenia worries about the chaotic state of affairs before the ceremony even begins. Walking to the ceremony, Evgenia remains flabbergasted by Euclid's bizarre permission to hate him. Evgenia feels increasingly anxious as Euclid watches her approach the grand courtyard fountain from behind. Seeing the blonde duke's stunning, glittering appearance, Evgenia finds all her lingering irritation instantly melting away. Under her delicate veil, Evgenia looks breathtakingly beautiful as she prepares to face her groom. Euclid asks if she is all right, prompting Evgenia to quickly apologize for being distracted. With a gentle smile, Euclid extends his gloved hand to guide his bride forward. Evgenia reflects on the many twists and turns as she prepares to accept his hand. Hand in hand, the bride and groom step through the temple doors toward the altar. The couple walks forward side by side, presenting a picture-perfect image of devotion. The priest announces the names of the groom and bride as they stand before the altar. High Priest Damien stands solemnly at the altar, preparing to conduct the wedding ceremony. Evgenia nervously stammers her response as the High Priest begins his address. High Priest Damien requests the bride to speak up, fixed with a piercing, serious gaze. Evgenia quickly corrects herself, while a sweat-dropping Euclid looks on in utter confusion. Evgenia internally questions why the High Priest sounded so skeptical of her identity. High Priest Damien officially announces the commencement of the marriage ceremony. High Priest Damien delivers an unsettling sermon, warning the couple to abandon misguided falsehoods. Damien continues his dark, foreboding sermon, urging them to repent before evil runs rampant. The dark tone of the sermon leaves Evgenia and the guests whispering in confusion. An outraged noble fumes in silence, wondering what grudge the High Priest is holding. Euclid's loyal retainers grow furious at the High Priest's offensive sermon during the ceremony. Damien sternly commands the couple to humbly submit to their predetermined destiny. Evgenia remains silent, inwardly questioning the High Priest's demands to submit to destiny. Evgenia recalls her character's tragic original fate of divorce and ruin. Evgenia firmly resolves that she will never accept such a tragic and ruined fate. Evgenia boldly challenges Damien, declaring her resolve to carve her own path through life. The onlookers watch in silent confusion, unable to understand the tense exchange. Damien lets out a quiet sigh, conceding the verbal clash before continuing. Damien closes his eyes and finally offers his formal blessing for their future. The priest instructs the couple to finally exchange their sacred marriage vows. Evgenia mentally prepares herself to recite her practiced vows as Euclid watches her. Euclid solemnly swears to take Evgenia as his wife and honor her forever. Evgenia is deeply moved by the profound sincerity of Euclid's vow. Evgenia vows to take Euclid as her husband, promising to treasure him deeply. Euclid freezes in absolute shock at the sheer intensity and passion of her vow. A heavy silence falls over the chapel as Evgenia wonders if she misspoke. Evgenia realizes she went off script, nervously wondering if her declaration was too dramatic. Chibi Evgenia sweat drops in sheer embarrassment over her overly dramatic vow. The priest clears his throat, suddenly reminding an embarrassed Evgenia of the wedding kiss. The maid brings forward the wedding rings while Evgenia notes her father's slight disappointment. Evgenia admires the heritage amethyst rings passed down through generations of House Rudion. Euclid softly smiles as he holds Evgenia's hands at the altar, preparing for their kiss. Under her delicate veil, Evgenia smiles softly up at Euclid as the fateful moment arrives. Euclid gazes affectionately at his bride, his heart pounding with nervous anticipation as he leans in. Euclid hesitates for a brief, breathless second, preparing to seal their vows with a kiss. Euclid gently presses his lips against Evgenia's through her sheer wedding veil. He slowly pulls away from the soft kiss, leaving a lingering warmth between them. Euclid stands completely flustered, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment after the sudden kiss. Evgenia is completely stunned, internally screaming with disappointment over the incredibly brief, veiled kiss. As they sign the registry, Evgenia laments the lack of a real dramatic wedding kiss. Evgenia officially registers for marriage, realizing she is now officially wedded to her favorite character. The grand bells toll as the marriage is formally declared under the blessing of the goddess. Outside the temple, the family gathers near the carriages to say their final emotional farewells. Her father warmly reminds Evgenia that she will always be a cherished member of the family. He affectionately assures her that her status as his beloved daughter will never change. Evgenia smiles softly and gratefully, deeply touched by her father's loving reassurance. Melissa tearfully asks if they can write letters to each other, to which Evgenia happily agrees. Looking at Melissa's radiant smile, Evgenia worries about the future of her sister's chaotic love life. CNL suddenly steps up to announce it is time for them to head out. The family stands together in the courtyard, preparing to conclude their conversations and depart. CNL solemnly offers his support, reminding Evgenia to reach out to him whenever she needs help. Evgenia notices a persistent, growing sense of discomfort and tension whenever she is near CNL. CNL suddenly calls out to stop her, prompting Evgenia to look back in surprise. Evgenia turns around, deeply suspicious and wondering what exactly CNL wants to say to her. Evgenia directly questions him, asking why he suddenly stopped her. CNL points out that her specific carriage has not actually arrived yet. Her father and brother stand together, waiting as a final piece of business is resolved. A magical message reveals that a new magic carriage model was recently released for House Basilian. CNL explains that they decided to purchase this newly released magic carriage model for her. Evgenia realizes with pleasant surprise that this new carriage must be CNL's special wedding present. She curiously asks him where this new carriage she is supposed to ride is located. A rumbling sound echoes nearby, signaling the prompt arrival of the promised magic carriage. CNL and Evgenia turn their attention toward the approaching sound of the incoming carriage. A grand ornate carriage decorated in gold and green sweeps into the temple courtyard. The door swings open and someone prepares to step out of the newly arrived carriage. A flamboyant man with wavy, multicolored hair and glasses steps out, adjusting his glove. Evgenia is completely shocked to recognize the arriving passenger as the legendary Tower Lord. The Tower Lord dramatically apologizes for his slightly late arrival with the new carriage. CNL looks on in complete disbelief, astonished that the Tower Lord delivered the carriage personally. Tower Lord explains he came in person to witness the reaction to his new model. He casually drapes an arm over a sweat-dropping Euclid, congratulating his close friend on his wedding. The family watches in sheer confusion, surprised to learn Euclid and the Tower Lord are friends. Asked about a gift, the Tower Lord proudly admits he has no intention of wasting money. Euclid and the Tower Lord immediately begin bickering like old friends, leaving the others bewildered. The Tower Lord eagerly shifts his focus to proudly present his highly innovative new carriage design. The cover drops to reveal a bizarre futuristic vehicle that looks exactly like a rocket. Evgenia and Sionel stare in absolute drop-jawed silence at the completely absurd vehicle. The Tower Lord brags about its aerodynamics while Evgenia panics over the literal rocket-shaped carriage. Evgenia suspects he might be transmigrated, but sighs when he reveals he dreamt the design. She takes a deep breath, trying to process the sheer absurdity of the situation. Evgenia fumes with silent rage at the bizarre, utterly ridiculous vehicle posing as her carriage. The multicolored-haired Tower Lord is offended by her harsh criticism, defending his expensive creation, while Evgenia internally questions if she was too harsh. Evgenia admits the interior is high-tech, but notes that riding in such an embarrassing vehicle would be humiliating. Tower Lord is crestfallen, explaining he used premium materials to customize it as a special wedding carriage. Euclid steps in to resolve the tension by proposing a sudden alternative plan to the crestfallen Tower Lord. The Tower Lord asks Euclid if he is certain about his proposal, to which the blonde Duke confidently agrees. Euclid bids farewell to the family, causing Evgenia to swoon internally over his casual use of the word we. Her father reminds them to write once they arrive at their destination, and Evgenia promises she will. The carriage finally rolls away from the temple, beginning their long journey back to the Duke's territory. Sionel and his father watch the carriage depart, quietly confirming to each other that they have truly gone. A moment of quiet reflection as the two Basilian men-persons stand side by side in the courtyard. The comedic scene unfolds behind them as the tower subordinates loudly calculate the massive losses, leaving both Ken speechless. The Tower Lord remains deeply baffled by Evgenia's embarrassment until a subordinate suddenly calls out to him. Panicked assistant scolds the Tower Lord for taking the premium carriage without warning, which he cluelessly denies. The assistant questions where the other carriage went, leaving the bizarre rocket-shaped vehicle parked completely alone. The Tower Lord brags about his trade, but his assistant reveals last month's profits were loaded inside that very carriage. The Tower Lord screams in utter horror upon realizing he unknowingly gave away the entire tower's massive profits. Inside the moving carriage, the maid notices her distress and asks Evgenia if something is bothering her. Evgenia feels an awkward discomfort sitting down, but quickly brushes it off to avoid causing concern. Evgenia internally laments that because her brother gifted her this carriage, she cannot ride with Euclid. Evgenia celebrates successfully leaving the capital and evading the Crown Prince, completing the first phase of her plan. Recalling her creepy last encounter with Crown Prince Kaiden, Evgenia rejoices that her marriage now protects her. Evgenia blushes with immense joy as she marvels at her success in marrying her ultimate favorite character. Although their wedding kiss was brief, the memory replays constantly in Evgenia's head, encouraging her to take things slow. Evgenia resolves to stay dedicatedly by Euclid's side, showing him her true feelings through consistent loving actions. Looking out the window, Evgenia looks forward to a future filled with endless happy days by his side. The scene shifts abruptly to the magnificent imperial palace, where a different conversation is currently taking place. Emperor Owen Elios sits in deep contemplation, demanding confirmation on whether the wedding has actually taken place. The narrative formally introduces the powerful ruler Emperor Owen Elios as he sits at his desk. The emperor admits he initially dismissed the marriage registration as a forged prank from an insolent fool. The emperor notes how sudden the arrangement was, as Evgenia had no prior talks with other houses. The emperor asks why Evgenia lacked proposals, but her father explains she had many, though they awaited Kaiden. Her father explains Melissa's royal proposal forced their hand, while the emperor internally curses Kaiden's massive failure. The emperor fumes with rage, horrified that the powerful Duke Rudian has now allied with House Basilian. The story shifts to the next day, showing the carriages traveling through a peaceful, snowy mountain range. Euclid's loyal retainer eagerly reports to his lord that Evgenia seems to possess an extraordinary special ability. The blonde Duke looks at his retainer in complete bewilderment, asking for clarification on his sudden claim. The retainer eagerly continues his explanation, asserting that Evgenia was undoubtedly born under a highly auspicious lucky star. The retainer describes how Evgenia helped a stranger and received an incredibly valuable jewel-studded watch in return. He details her continuous sweep of festival game prizes, including winning 2 highly expensive luxury teddy bears. The retainer concludes that House Basilian must possess incredible financial luck, which Euclid thoughtfully acknowledges. The retainer admits he was completely startled by the intense sincerity of Evgenia's dramatic wedding vows. The retainer fondly recalls how profoundly moved he was, having never witnessed such devotion from a bride. He expresses relief that her devotion proves she has completely abandoned her previous infatuation with the Crown Prince. Euclid smiles with gentle, quiet affection as he asks if her actions truly make her feelings look that serious. Outside, the carriages heavily rattle as they slowly navigate the treacherous and bumpy snowy northern mountain passes. Evgenia anxiously wonders if the stingy Tower Lord neglected to put any shock absorption magic on the carriage. Surrounded by her won prizes, Evgenia worries about potential damage before her maid calls out to her. The maid peeks through the carriage curtains and excitedly announces that they have finally reached the ducal estate. Before them stands the grand, snow-draped fortress of House Rudian, nestled spectacularly against the towering northern peaks. Gazing upon her new home, Evgenia's heart swells with anticipation for her happy new life with Euclid. The grand carriage door opens and Evgenia steps down onto the snowy ground, noticing the assembled crowd waiting for her. She notices several solemn-faced retainers in matching gray outfits, wondering why they all look so incredibly displeased. Evgenia realizes they must view her as an evil woman, noticing her maid and butler locked in a silent staring contest with them. Her gaze shifts past the retainers as she spots two young children standing quietly in the background. Evgenia looks at the two blonde children with immense curiosity, wondering if they are Euclid's niece and nephew. The majestic, snow-draped fortress of House Rudion towers behind them as a servant formally welcomes their lord home. Euclid apologizes to his retainer for arriving unannounced, surprised to see so many people gathered to greet them. Euclid turns to the crowd with a warm, brilliant smile, thanking everyone for taking the time to celebrate his marriage. He leans in close to a blushing Evgenia, softly asking if she was startled by the unexpected reception. Euclid explains to her that his vassals were simply too eager to meet the new lady of the house. Evgenia's heart flutters intensely as she listens to him affectionately refer to her as the lady of the house. Euclid turns toward the children, calling out to Marianne and Dior to come forward and greet their new aunt. Evgenia carefully steps forward with a nervous smile, trying to greet the children gently so she does not frighten them. Marianne and Dior stand completely frozen, staring up at her in tense, wide-eyed silence. Euclid quickly apologizes on their behalf, explaining that the children are simply shy and unaccustomed to strangers. Evgenia warmly reassures him, kindly stating that it is perfectly normal for young children to be shy at first. She kneels down to their eye level, cheerfully introducing herself as Evgenia and asking them to get along. Suddenly, a close-up reveals a hand secretly and viciously pinching Marianne's pink-sleeved arm. A sharp, painful gasp sounds as Marianne cries out, "Ow!" prompting a startled Euclid to call out her name. Dior suddenly bursts into tears, aggressively pointing at Evgenia and screaming that she is a witch, not their aunt. Surrounding servants gasp in utter horror and shock at the young boy's sudden dramatic outburst. An outraged Euclid sternly scolds Dior, demanding to know how he could speak so rudely to his aunt. Euclid turns to Evgenia in deep embarrassment, offering his sincere apologies for the children's behavior. Evgenia diffuses the tension with a gentle smile, cleverly pointing out that storybook witches are always exceptionally beautiful. Dior gasps in stunned surprise, quickly covering his blushing face as his anger completely melts away. Evgenia reaches into her warm clothing and pulls out a small glass jar filled with round purple candies. She holds up a glistening purple treat, warmly asking the children if they would like to try one. The two children happily chew on the delicious sweets while a delighted Evgenia gushes over how adorable they are. Euclid looks on with immense relief, offering another candy to the now cheerful children as they warm up to Evgenia. In the background, a mysterious woman with a lace collar watches the scene with a cold, disapproving gaze. Later that evening, Evgenia relaxes in a luxurious bath, letting out a soft sigh as she reflects on the day. She gazes down at the warm water, deeply troubled by the strange events that occurred during their arrival. Recalling Marianne's sudden cry, she remains certain that the sound was a genuine reaction of sharp surprise and physical pain. Evgenia sits up in the steaming tub, her expression turning serious as she ponders the mystery. Her maid suddenly peeks into the bathroom, cheerfully reminding her that it is time to head to the dining room. Evgenia agrees, resolving to personally observe the children to figure out what is truly going on. The scene transitions to the grand dining hall inside Rudion Castle as the heavy doors swing open. Evgenia enters and stands in utter bewilderment, staring at the bizarre, extremely spaced-out seating arrangement at the table. The head maid politely guides her to a seat placed exceptionally far away from the rest of the family. Evgenia looks down the massive table in disappointment, realizing she can barely even see Euclid's face from this distance. Nearby, the servants whisper in confusion, wondering if Euclid actually wants to keep his distance from his new bride. Euclid smiles warmly from the other end of the table, politely gesturing for her to take her seat. Evgenia sits down at the head of the table, feeling immense, sweat-dropping pressure from the awkward distance. Her attention shifts to the stern, brown-haired woman in a lace gown who is glaring at her from across the room. Evgenia notes that this unpleasant woman has been staring at her coldly ever since she first set foot in the castle. She recalls how anxious and conscious the children seemed to be whenever they were near this mysterious woman. Evgenia narrows her eyes in deep suspicion, silently questioning the true identity of the hostile stranger. Evgenia directly asks if the woman is the children's nanny, but Euclid quickly clarifies that she is not. A highly confused chibi Evgenia tilts her head, wondering who on earth the woman could possibly be. Euclid formally introduces the woman as Amy Beers, the younger sister of the late Duchess who helps care for the children. Evgenia analyzes Euclid's words, wondering why the late Duchess's younger sister chose to stay at this northern estate. Amy Beers' light brown hair is shown from behind as she faces Euclid, who sits in uneasy silence. Euclid adamantly objects, declaring they would never carelessly let an unmarried young lady reside in the castle. Chibi Evgenia asks Lady Beers if she will be visiting the castle again tomorrow. Evgenia suggests Amy visit in the afternoon because she plans to tour the castle tomorrow morning. Evgenia coolly dismisses Amy Beers, telling her she may leave for the day. Amy Beers reluctantly bows and accepts a dismissal with a tense acknowledgement. Amy clenches her jaw in silent anger, her gaze simmering with resentment. Amy casts a sharp, calculating look over her shoulder as she leaves the room. Dior gasps in soft relief as the intimidating woman finally leaves the dining hall. Dior internally resolves to protect his uncle from their new aunt, believing Amy's warnings. Euclid gently asks Dior if he was scared, and the boy timidly admits he was. After Euclid apologizes for being gone, Dior shyly asks him to grant a wish. Euclid smiles warmly, asking his young nephew what it is that he desires. Marianne speaks up, her voice suddenly interrupting the quiet atmosphere of the room. Marianne innocently asks if her uncle and new aunt are going to share a bed. Euclid and Dior react in utter shock, completely flustered by the girl's bluntness. Euclid hastily tries to explain away Marianne's teasing, begging Evgenia not to misunderstand. Evgenia remains entirely unfazed, a soft and knowing smile playing on her lips. Her calm, elegant posture remains undisturbed despite the awkward romantic tension filling the room. A flashback reveals the children's utter amazement upon discovering a room filled with surprises. Marianne asks in wonder if all the massive, colorful presents are from their aunt. Marianne sighs softly, a look of quiet guilt washing over her young face. Dior approaches his sister nervously, timidly asking if she is angry with him. Marianne scolds Dior for listening to Amy, while Dior defends himself using Amy's warnings. Dior explains Amy threatened to punish him instead, but Marianne insists she can handle it. Dior quietly admits that their new aunt actually seemed like a very kind person. Dior brightens up instantly, thrilled to see that his sister agrees with him. Marianne asserts Euclid wouldn't marry anyone awful, but a sudden loud slam cuts her off. The children freeze in terror as Amy Beers suddenly looms behind them like a shadow. Amy paces down the hallway in frustration, annoyed that the Duchess defies her expectations. Amy whips around with a fierce glare, calling out sharply to the trembling children. Amy scolds Marianne for failing to show dislike, but Marianne timidly defends her aunt. Amy mocks them for being won over by simple candies despite their aunt's reputation. Amy manipulatively claims Euclid is being sold off, leaving the children looking deeply depressed. With a chilling, sinister look, Amy prepares to deliver her next dark warning. Amy embraces the terrified children sinisterly, asking if they do not wish to protect Euclid. Back at dinner, Euclid flustredly tries to smooth over the awkwardness of Marianne's comment. Evgenia smiles warmly, finding her husband's intense embarrassment absolutely endearing and sweet. Euclid expresses his gratitude for her understanding while the staff mentions the historic Grace Room. Marianne questions if they will be sleeping in the special chamber together tonight. Euclid blushes furiously as he confirms it, while Marianne happily wishes them a nice night. Evgenia asks about the Grace Room, prompting Euclid to explain it as the Master Suite. Evgenia questions if northern married couples must always use this room to sleep together. Evgenia internally muses over the traditional northern customs regarding scheduled wedding nights. Evgenia directly asks if they are required to spend their first night there tonight. Euclid softly confirms the rule, while Evgenia worries her direct question was too blunt. Cutting her steak, Evgenia hopes Euclid does not find her curiosity too strange. Blushing deeply, Evgenia realizes she is far too flustered to focus on her dinner. Her maid cheerfully asks if she should help Evgenia get ready for the night. The brown-haired maid offers some revealing nightgowns, but Evgenia insists she only intends to sleep. Flustered and comically outraged, Evgenia resolves to wear her usual clothes since they haven't even kissed. Sitting quietly, Evgenia realizes this private meeting is the perfect chance to discuss her lingering suspicions. A sudden polite knock sounds at the door, signaling that it is time to proceed. Clad in a simple white gown, Evgenia follows her maid down the castle hallway. Anxious thoughts swirl as she wonders why her body has suddenly gone so stiff with nerves. She gulps nervously, trying to maintain her composure despite the mounting pressure of the night. Standing outside the Grand Master Suite, Evgenia's internal panic rises as she prepares to enter.
She tries to reassure herself that nothing intimate will actually happen between them tonight.
With a deep breath, her slender hand pushes open the heavy door to the bedroom. Evgenia enters only to find a startled Euclid hastily stepping away from a bed covered in rose petals. A wave of awkwardness fills the room as the newlyweds stare at each other in mutual shock. Euclid blushes furiously as Evgenia notices he is clutching a handful of scattered rose petals. In a frantic chibi panic, Euclid desperately explains he was actually trying to clean up the romantic petals. Evgenia smiles politely, though she secretly admits to herself she had expected a bit of romance. Euclid admires the stunning rose-filled chamber, remarking how wonderful the atmosphere feels tonight. Euclid suddenly turns to her with a serious expression, assuring her she has nothing to worry about. He looks at her with gentle concern, asking if she feels uncomfortable sharing the space. Evgenia smiles warmly, deeply respecting his wish to build emotional trust before sharing a bed. Beside him, the stiff and blushing Euclid strives to maintain a respectful, equal relationship. Smiling gently, Evgenia reassures him that she is completely comfortable with his thoughtful boundary. Relieved, Euclid invites her to sit down so they can discuss an important matter together. Suddenly, her foot catches on the hem of her long nightgown, causing her to slip. Euclid reacts instantly, shouting in alarm as he lunges forward to catch her falling figure. The two collapse together onto the bed in a sudden, breathless embrace amidst the rose petals. Time freezes as they lie close together on the bed, staring wide-eyed into each other's eyes. Euclid's breath catches as he gazes down at her, his face flushing a deep crimson. Evgenia stares back in stunned silence, her heart pounding at their sudden physical proximity. The romantic tension peaks as they remain locked in their accidental, intimate embrace on the bed. Breaking the silence, a flustered Euclid softly apologizes as he quickly moves to pull away. Sitting side by side in excruciatingly awkward silence, Evgenia decides to steer the conversation back to business. Turning to him, Evgenia directly asks Euclid if he already has someone else in his heart. Euclid is taken aback as she quickly reassures him that she is merely asking out of curiosity. Evgenia asks for complete honesty, explaining that she wants to fully commit to their married life. Euclid reacts with a Yevgenia to watch him with narrow-eyed suspicion. When Evgenia asks if his secret love is Lady Beers, Euclid comically rejects the idea instantly. Looking at her with earnest sincerity, Euclid declares he has never loved anyone romantically before. Evgenia blushes as she realizes his words imply he will only ever love her. A profound warmth settles between them as Euclid's heartfelt promise hangs gently in the air. Evgenia's eyes sparkle with genuine emotion as his sweet words touch her heart deeply. A soft, incredibly happy smile spreads across her face in response to his earnest declaration. Giddy with excitement, she internally celebrates what she can only interpret as romantic confession. Overwhelmed by his charm, Evgenia decides to boldly make a move, catching Euclid completely off guard. Her hand slowly slides across the soft sheets, reaching out to touch his trembling hand. Gazing up with an enchanting smile, she completely disarms him with her mesmerizing beauty. Distance between them vanishes as she leans in closer, teasing him playfully. The scene transitions as bright morning sunlight begins to stream through the bedroom window. Despite her bold advances, Chibi Evgenia sleeps peacefully, noting that absolutely nothing actually happened. Both newlyweds lie awake, staring stiffly at the ceiling after a night of pure awkwardness. Evgenia facepalms internally, realizing she got entirely carried away trying to seduce her flustered husband. Euclid solemnly promises not to touch her tonight, leaving Evgenia feeling quite bewildered. Evgenia silently sits up in bed, gazing down at her fast-asleep husband. She admires his handsome features, thinking about his proud nose and long eyelashes. She panics internally as Euclid begins to stir, fearing he might wake up now. To avoid awkwardness, Evgenia quickly closes her eyes and pretends to sleep against his chest. Euclid slowly opens his eyes as the morning light begins to fill the room. Evgenia remains perfectly still, her heart racing as she continues to feign sleep. Euclid looks down in quiet surprise at his wife resting peacefully against his chest. Euclid asks if she is awake, gently observing her as she sits up beside him. She blushes deeply while gently placing her hand over his on the soft bedsheets. Euclid's face flushes a bright crimson at her sudden gentle physical touch. Evgenia, rubbing her sleepy eyes, notices Euclid looking at her with a gentle expression. Euclid kindly suggests she rest longer, but she declines to prepare for her castle tour. Evgenia asks for a guided tour, but Euclid apologizes because of his heavy workload. Evgenia is left speechless by his refusal, repeating his words in sheer disbelief. She complains about his early departure, wishing they could spend their first morning together. Euclid looks away with a troubled expression, seemingly hiding his own inner embarrassment. A decorative floral motif symbolizes the budding emotions of the newlyweds. The butler introduces her to the massive library and she notes its immense size. Evgenia asks to visit the library freely and the butler happily welcomes her anytime. She thanks him while secretly planning to thoroughly research the history of Euclid's ancestors. The butler suggests showing her the portrait gallery displaying all the previous dukes next. The butler suddenly clasps his hands together, catching her off guard with his sudden movement. Upon seeing a portrait of young Euclid, Evgenia squeals in absolute delight at his cuteness. Evgenia declines the offer for today, expressing her wish to view the portraits alongside Euclid. She asks if her office is near his, confusing the butler with her sudden request. She mentions reviewing the house ledgers, prompting the butler to joyfully offer her complete control. Evgenia complains internally, realizing the butler is trying to dump all the chores on her. The butler shows her the grand hallway, confirming her office is near Euclid's study. She asks about the decorative wall lamps, and the butler clarifies they're functional. When she asks why they aren't used, he blames their expensive operating budget. Evgenia reminds him of the magic stones her father sent, catching the butler off guard. The butler explains that gifts are kept safe and not included in general operations. He confesses that the estate's heavy debts prevent them from using expensive magic stones. Stunned by the mention of debt, Evgenia asks when it will be paid off. She grows suspicious, recalling that the family's debts were cleared early in the novel. Evgenia orders the butler to immediately bring her the financial records to examine their debts. The scene shifts to Euclid's office, where his assistant begins to speak to him. Euclid gasps in surprise, looking up from the documents piled on his grand desk. Delano voices his worry, pointing out that Euclid looks exceptionally exhausted today. Delano directly asks if his master failed to get any sleep last night. Euclid deflects the nosy question, calling it far too personal for his unmarried assistant. Delano frantically clarifies his pure intentions, denying any inappropriate meaning to his question. Delano explains he was merely worried the Duchess might have made things difficult. Euclid laughs off the concern, assuring Delano that his wife has not troubled him. He fondly recalls how peacefully she slept resting against his chest earlier that morning. He falls into a quiet, warm reverie as he thinks about his beautiful wife. Euclid blushes sweetly, unable to hide his growing affection as he touches his chin. Smiling to himself, Euclid admits that the night was indeed a bit difficult. He quietly contemplates his new married life filled with sudden and unexpected warmth. Delano reacts with sudden realization upon hearing the truth from Euclid. Delano angrily declares he will file a complaint about how the Duke is being treated. Footsteps echo as someone marches with determination down the castle hallway. Delano and the flustered steward collide in the doorway with a startled gasp sounding. The steward joyfully announces that a great benefactor has arrived to save their house. Euclid asks about Delano's well-being, while the bruised Delano asks what happened to the steward's nose. The steward reports that the Duchess requested all their financial ledgers, praising her noble intentions. Leaning over the desk, the steward dramatically proclaims her as their new hope. Delano is left entirely bewildered by the sudden revelation of the lady's actions. Wiping away tears, the steward explains she plans to use her dowry to clear their debts. Euclid is stunned, questioning if she is really sacrificing her personal property. The steward confesses he told her the brutal truth about their massive, collapsing debts. Delano urgently asks what her response was to this terrifying financial reality. The steward thoughtfully recalls her confident, quiet chuckle before she spoke. Evgenia's magnificent, commanding presence completely awes the starstruck Delano. The steward recounts her vow to clear their debts, though Delano remains skeptical. Delano shivers with comical dread, worrying she might charge them higher interest later. The furious maid of the estate, Adelia, scolds Delano for his outrageous doubts. Adelia steps into the office, praising the lady's deep care for the household. Adelia fiercely rebukes the advisor for speaking of their lady like a loan shark.
Adelia insists they must deliver the ledgers directly to the Duke at once.
Euclid listens with a deeply troubled and solemn expression. A sudden, loud coughing echoes from behind a grand wooden door. Evgenia waves her hand in the air as she enters a dusty room. Evgenia realizes why Euclid avoided showing her this incredibly dusty, neglected office. Waiting in the hallway, Evgenia wonders why the steward is taking so long. Turning toward the entrance, she softly invites the visitors to come in. Euclid enters the dusty chamber, prompting Evgenia to greet him with quiet surprise. The steward gasps in horror at the filth, apologizing for not cleaning beforehand. Euclid apologizes for the shortage of staff, but Evgenia understandingly dismisses his concerns. Euclid promises to organize a proper schedule to clean the room regularly. Evgenia agrees that a regular, lighter cleaning routine is far more practical. Euclid blushes deeply against a soft floral background, touched by her gentle understanding. Evgenia suggests that any cleaning they do should be thorough and done right. Wiping away happy tears, the servants sniffle in profound gratitude. Euclid directly asks if she truly intends to pay off their family debts. A quiet plea to reconsider hangs heavily in the silent room. Euclid looks at her with earnest eyes, pleading for her to change her mind. Evgenia and the crying servants react in utter disbelief to his unexpected refusal. Euclid struggles to explain his reasoning when she asks if it's about her reputation. Evgenia questions if he fears for their standing, but Euclid denies the claim. Standing close, Euclid confesses he is worried about putting a burden on her. Evgenia speaks to her husband with a sudden, serious gravity. She directly asks if he is directing his worries toward the wrong person. She realizes with a pang of regret that her words came out too sharply. Fearing she pushed too hard, Evgenia watches as Euclid dejectedly accepts her point. Euclid suggests treating her financial help as a loan he will repay monthly. Stunned by his stubborn proposal, Evgenia reacts in complete and utter shock. Evgenia indignantly questions why she would charge her own husband interest, which Euclid defends. Looking away, Evgenia admits that drawing such formal lines makes her feel deeply isolated. Evgenia keeps her unspoken fears of a potential future divorce completely to herself. Euclid firmly rejects the notion of divorce, while Evgenia declares her commitment to her new family by refusing to let their massive debts remain unresolved. Evgenia resolutely gives Euclid an ultimatum, asserting that rejecting her financial help would mean he does not respect her as his wife. Evgenia presses further, warning him that refusing her aid breaks his solemn wedding vows to honor her. Euclid stands utterly speechless and deeply troubled by her sharp, unrelenting arguments. Euclid finally relents, softly agreeing to her terms while clarifying he never meant to dishonor her. Evgenia suddenly panics as she realizes the estate servants have been standing nearby, awkward witnesses to their intense argument. Trying to break the heavy tension, Evgenia suggests continuing their talk outside the dusty room, which the nervous servants eagerly support. Turning on her heel, Evgenia leads the way out of the dirty chamber. Euclid quietly follows his wife into the corridor, a gentle smile gracing his face. Their walk is suddenly interrupted when Euclid's brown-haired advisor rushes toward them in high excitement. Dropping dramatically to his knees, Delano loudly proclaims Evgenia as the true savior and blessing of their household. Evgenia is left entirely bewildered and sweating at the advisor's sudden dramatic display of devotion. A formal introduction presents Delano, who serves as Euclid's exceptionally capable and dedicated aide. After leaving high society for the impoverished North, Delano endured relentless hardships to keep the estate running. Delano's difficult life in the North soon faced a brand new intimidating challenge. This major new obstacle was none other than the sudden arrival of the intimidating Lady Basilian. Swayed by dark rumors, the young advisor was initially filled with absolute terror of her presence. His fearful perception changed entirely after secretly witnessing an intense, emotional conversation between the newlywed couple. Moved to tears by her devotion, Delano realized all his doubts and suspicions about her had completely vanished. In the present, the emotional aide remains firmly on his knees before his new mistress, who recognizes her not just as their benefactor, but as an incredibly wise leader. Delano looks up at Evgenia with sparkling eyes full of immense admiration and hope. Seizing the opportunity, Evgenia tasks him with cleaning the dusty office, which he accepts with a passionate salute. Sitting at her newly cleaned desk, Evgenia marvels at how a massive pile of estate documents was condensed into a single sheet. Evgenia instructs Delano that all future financial reports must be structured in this highly efficient, simplified format. Delano eagerly agrees to the new reporting system, completely awed by her sharp organizational skills. Evgenia quietly ponders their next moves, aiming to design a comprehensive long-term plan to develop the duchy. Delano stands ready to execute whatever orders his brilliant new lady has in store for them. Delano wonders how such malicious rumors could have ever targeted a woman of such flawless professionalism.
Snapping out of his daydreams, Delano quickly responds to her call with enthusiastic stuttered affirmation.
Analyzing the data, Evgenia notes that while the estate's finances are grim, there are several promising silver linings. She identifies valuable mines and territories that will quickly flourish once their crushing debts are finally cleared. Fortunately, her personal dowry is comprised of highly liquid assets, making it easier to rapidly clear their massive debt. Evgenia concludes that the success of her plan relies on how quickly she can liquidate her assets. Delano agrees with her strategy but admits his uncertainty about how to execute such a massive liquidation. Evgenia reveals she plans to utilize her personal maid to handle the confidential selling of her dowry. She recalls how her maid was exceptional at navigating complex trading routes and finding reliable business contacts. She prepares to summon her trusted maid, only to pause as she remembers a crucial detail. Evgenia suddenly remembers with a sigh that her loyal maid is not currently at the estate.
She recalls her maid leaving for a suspiciously long 2-day task to tidy up the bedroom.
Shaking off her temporary distraction, Evgenia assures her advisor not to worry about the asset sales. Delano beams brightly, his absolute trust in her making him completely worry-free. However, the young aide hesitates slightly, as if there's one more thing on his mind. Delano tentatively asks for the chance to continue assisting her directly, which Evgenia warmly and immediately grants. Their productive meeting is interrupted by a polite knock at the door, prompting Evgenia to call out. Euclid enters the study wearing glasses, prompting a very affectionate welcome from his beautiful, doting wife. Euclid walks over to his desk, gently confirming that he has already eaten his meal. Euclid apologizes for dining alone, but Evgenia insists she preferred working, admitting she often skips meals when busy. Concerned for her well-being, Euclid gently chides her unhealthy habit and extracts a promise that she will never skip meals again. The brown-haired maid swoons over how incredibly kind her master's gentle scolding is. An inquiry about the work progress is met with reassurance that selling the assets will cover the debts. Euclid offers to order dessert right away as they discuss having a sweet treat.
She decides to share the treat with the children, eager to see them enjoy it.
Euclid politely offers to deliver the dessert himself so she can focus on her busy work. Evgenia nervously insists she needs a break, too embarrassed to admit she just wants to spend time with the kids. Euclid gazes quietly with a soft, analytical expression. He stands silently, the atmosphere in the room turning still and quiet. Evgenia looks down, her eyes reflecting a sudden touch of melancholy. Evgenia agrees to let him go, prioritizing his health and well-being over her own wishes. Euclid is left visibly flustered, a deep red blush spreading across his cheeks. An internal thought notes that checking the ledgers likely revealed her true identity. Amy sits in a sunny room, calmly admiring her hand over a cup of tea. Marion speculates that their aunt skipped her meal out of sheer fear. Amy doubts the new lady's financial capability, noting they still face unavoidable fees. Amy complains about her stingy father, wishing he had used the fees to arrange a match with Euclid. Amy gossips and wonders if the newlywed couple has even consummated their marriage. She questions whether the Duke and his new bride are getting along at all. Amy casually predicts that their aunt will soon abandon the estate and leave. Dior's heart sinks as he begins to fear their new aunt will truly leave them.
He wonders guiltily if her departure is because of his own harsh words.
Dior feels deep remorse, realizing he never truly believed she was a bad person. Amy suddenly questions the complete disappearance of all the toys in the playroom. Marianne explains that the maids confiscated the toys because they weren't being used. The child protests the unfair disposal of their toys without any prior worry. Amy laments losing the toy she intended to use as a simple distraction. She halts mid-step, her attention caught by something suspicious in the room. Amy demands to know what the children are secretly hiding beneath the sheet. Amy questions the hidden object, leaving Dior stammering in pure panic.
She questions the origin of the mysterious teddy bear they hid.
A beautiful, pristine teddy bear sits glowing under the warm light. Amy is completely stunned to find that the bear's eyes are genuine emeralds. Evgenia casually answers her query, stating the incredibly high price of 15 gold. Amy shrieks in absolute disbelief at the staggering price tag of the toy. She questions what kind of toy could possibly justify such an outrageous cost. Amy lets out a loud, terrified shriek as she is startled by her sudden presence. Evgenia mentally complains about the incredibly loud and dramatic reaction. She dryly wonders why 15 gold for a toy is causing such a massive scene. Evgenia continues to walk past, repeating her annoyance at the loud scream. She repeats her disdain for the dramatic fuss over a minor sum of 15 gold. Evgenia glares coldly, her sharp gaze conveying absolute authority. Evgenia notices with soft satisfaction how relieved the children are by her sudden arrival. She deduces that the children's fear stems directly from Amy's harsh presence. Evgenia steps forward, ready to put an end to the uncomfortable situation. Evgenia delivers a stern scolding, warning Amy to watch her language around the kids. Amy stutters out a nervous, trembling apology under her cousin-in-law's intense gaze. Evgenia turns away from Amy to call out to the young boy. She kindly expresses her happiness that he enjoys his special new toy. She cautions him to guard his belongings against greedy people, which Dior accepts with surprise. The children look up in shock as they prepare to share a startling revelation. The children look up with wide, shocked eyes, stunned by her warm reassurance. The brown-haired cousin-in-law speaks up, offering to get the children anything else they want besides toys. Evgenia confidently announces that a branch of the Basilian trading company will soon open in the north. Amy is completely struck with horror upon hearing that the massive Basilian trading company is coming.
Sweating with worry, Amy wonders what will happen to their own family business, the beer's trading company.
Evgenia steps closer, dryly questioning if the opening of a major trade branch isn't a good thing. Evgenia points out that locals can now get goods from the capital quickly, making Amy grind her teeth in frustration. Making a hasty excuse about urgent business, Amy quickly turns to leave, which Evgenia showcases no objection to. Evgenia watches her run off, noting to herself that the family's corrupt monopoly over northern goods is finally over. The grand snow-covered ducal castle stands tall and silent amidst the beautiful winter mountains. Time passes quietly, shifting the scene to several hours later inside the warm castle. Children happily stuff their faces with the rich chocolate cake, their cheeks full of sweet dessert. Sipping her tea, Evgenia observes the thin children, wishing they would grow a bit sturdier. Evgenia sits with the children, reflecting on Amy's cruel comments and the suspicious absence of helpful estate servants. A painful memory of two-faced corporate colleagues in her past life reminds Evgenia of how cruel family can be. Setting down her cup, Evgenia gently asks the children if they truly get along well with their aunt. Marianne looks up in surprise and asks if she is serious, to which Evgenia warmly confirms her sincerity. Evgenia kindly promises that they can come to her anytime if they face such harsh treatment again. Marianne stares back in stunned silence, deeply touched by the unexpected kindness of her new aunt. Walking down the grand hallway, Evgenia senses that a deeper, unsettling secret is still hidden within the estate. Opening her office door, Evgenia suspects that the children's poor condition points to a deeper conspiracy with house beers. Anne and the brown-haired knight warmly welcome Evgenia back to her room, hoping she isn't too exhausted. Anne immediately notices a slight shift in her mistress's expression, asking if something is troubling her. Evgenia reveals she found massive monthly distribution fees paid to House Beers while going through the financial ledgers. Evgenia explains to her maid that the amount paid to House Beers is far too excessive for simple transport. She recalls that Euclid's late older brother was the one who mediated the unfair agreement 10 years ago. Anne thoughtfully agrees that such a strange financial drain must point to a serious underlying problem. Anne points out that despite supplying necessities to the north for years, the Beers trading company never grew. The two converse in chibi form, analyzing the strange contradictions in Count Beers' business history. Anne explains that the Count was never capable, yet collected massive fees, leaving Evgenia amazed by her maid's knowledge. They deduce a suspicious deal took place, especially since Euclid's late brother married the Count's daughter soon after. Evgenia crosses her arms, realizing they cannot question the dead, but the issue will fade once the Basilian branch opens. Evgenia feels a surge of annoyance at the sheer injustice, sending a chilling wave of irritation through the room. Anne suggests reporting the suspicious collusion to Yahello, a financial auditor, leaving Evgenia momentarily surprised. Anne explains that Yahello's job in the finance ministry involves auditing and regulating unfair economic monopolies. They discuss how Count Beers jacked up prices a decade ago, meaning it might still be possible to punish them. Evgenia ponders why House Rudion settled things quietly instead of utilizing imperial laws to crack down on the Count. Evgenia recalls Euclid's reluctance to visit the capital and the complete lack of imperial relief sent to the north. Dark realization dawns on Evgenia as she wonders if the imperial family holds a grudge against House Rudion. Anne speaks up with a surprised gasp, revealing she was about to report something highly similar. Anne explains that the emperor secretly dislikes the north, treating them as non-existent in hopes that they will crumble. Anne adds that 5 years ago, an even more shocking incident occurred, pausing mid-sentence to check her surroundings. The brown-haired knight quickly covers Anne's mouth, warning her that this dangerous topic should not be discussed here. The knight sighs, admitting he finally understands why their security situation has deteriorated so severely. He explains that the position of commander remains completely vacant with only 20 squires and trainees left. A vision shows the small group of young squires taking turns to guard the castle on their own. Evgenia is shocked to learn that Euclid personally schedules their shifts and manages castle defense himself.
She reflects on how terrible the estate's security is on top of their crushing financial debts.
Deeply saddened by the heavy burdens Euclid has been carrying alone, Evgenia rests her chin in quiet contemplation. The knight reassures her, explaining that the castle itself is a powerful magic fortress designed by the First Lord. Gressel explains that even the long-serving staff did not know how to operate the castle's magic fortress. Evgenia requests that Gressel and Anne step closer, prompting a bewildered response from both of them. In chibi form, Evgenia whispers her secret plans and instructions to Anne and Gressel. Eagerly pledging their absolute devotion, the two loyal servants leave Evgenia wondering why they are so suddenly excited. Anne enthusiastically promises to contact Black tomorrow, noting everyone was shocked by Evgenia's sudden marriage. Anne mentions that the people in gold also wish to pay respects, leaving a bewildered Evgenia questioning these mysterious terms. Evgenia rests on a chaise, recalling her decisions to hire mercenaries and appoint Gressel as commander. Gressel stands proudly at the head of the knights, ready to secure the vulnerable castle. Narration explains that Yahello was sent the distribution records of House Beers to investigate their suspicious contract. Although she planned to keep her distance from House Basilian, Evgenia feels grateful for their helpful support. Evgenia remains deeply troubled by the mysterious black and gold organizations that Anne previously mentioned. Evgenia vividly recalls her conversation with Anne trying to piece together the maid's cryptic words. Frowning in confusion, Evgenia accidentally terrifies Anne, who nervously backtracks and promises to only contact Black. Tucking herself into bed, Evgenia can only restlessly wonder about the true identity of Black. Walking down the brightly lit corridor, Evgenia decides to investigate the matter for herself. Preparing a bath, Anne gently scolds her mistress for not resting longer, while Evgenia replies she expected the work to be finished. Remembering Anne spent 2 full days in her bedroom, Evgenia commends her maid for organizing the wardrobe. Eagerly scratching her head, Anne offers to show her the wardrobe, which Evgenia hesitantly agrees to inspect. Evgenia is highly skeptical when Anne leads her toward a wall where only a clock stands. Anne demonstrates the secret mechanism by carefully turning the clock hand backward exactly 3 times. Her hand taps twice against the wooden wardrobe panel immediately beside the clock to complete the sequence. Bright light suddenly floods the room as a secret wall panel slides open, leaving Evgenia completely speechless. Evgenia's mind reels in absolute bewilderment as she silently questions what she is witnessing. Smiling warmly, Anne happily invites her astonished mistress to step inside the hidden room. A soft tap echoes as Evgenia takes her first tentative step across the secret threshold. Stunned by the sight, Evgenia inwardly marvels at Anne for relocating her entire Basilian estate dressing room. A gorgeous, fully stocked dressing room stands revealed, gleaming under the warm light of the secret chamber. While Anne worries about her satisfaction, Evgenia nervously questions if building a secret room here is truly acceptable. Realizing the original Evgenia must have planned this, she quickly reassures her maid that everything is fine. As she glances around the secret room, Evgenia's eyes suddenly widens in absolute shock. Evgenia instantly recognizes a familiar item, realizing it bears the exact embroidery pattern of Reinhardt's pouch. Sitting amidst glittering pearl necklaces is a beige drawstring pouch adorned with a golden bird embroidery. The mention of Black and the familiar pouch weave together, constantly reminding a worried Evgenia of Reinhardt. Hands gently open the drawstring pouch, revealing a brilliant, warmly glowing pink magic stone nestled inside. Evgenia recalls giving him ample funds much earlier than in the novel's original timeline. She anxiously wonders if he has already successfully seized complete control of the criminal underworld by now. The scene shifts abruptly to the dark and imposing stronghold of the Black Assassination Guild headquarters. Alarms blare through the corridors as guards shriek to stop the bleeding pink-haired intruder immediately. Moving with lethal speed, Reinhardt effortlessly clashes with multiple masked guards in the dark courtyard. His eyes burning with intensity, Rickard unleashes a powerful, glowing blue strike against his opponents. Looking through a window, a bearded man notes that the intruder used no weapons, causing only bruises. The bearded man marvels at Reinhardt's incredible skill, shocked that their prepared defenses were completely helpless. He reasons that their master simply wanted to keep them alert, concluding they must deeply reflect on this. Loud creak echoes through the hall as the heavy double doors swing wide open. Covered in fresh blood and cuts, Rickard calmly steps through the threshold into the inner sanctum. The bearded guild member asks if he is Lord Reinhardt, to which the boy firmly confirms. Dropping to one knee, the guild member pledges that their master instructed them to serve Reinhardt now. Intrigued, Reinhardt questions if the master they refer to is actually his own beloved mistress. The kneeling man confirms his suspicion, verifying that the previous master is indeed his mistress. Smiling softly through the blood on his cheek, Reinhardt happily asks if he can finally meet her. Evgenia's eyes snap open with shock as she suddenly wakes up in bed. She reflects on having a restless night thinking about Reinhardt. Evgenia lies restlessly in her grand white bed, resting her hand on her forehead. She contemplates the true significance of the Black organization Anne spoke of. A close-up shows her nightgown rustling softly as she sits up in bed. She recalls Reinhardt was destined to become the master of the Black Assassination Guild. She tries to reassure herself that the identical name must be a mere coincidence. Anne brightly announces she is coming into the ladies' bedroom. Evgenia sits up in bed as Anne and Gressel walk into the brightly lit room. They deliver news that the Black Guild was attacked and gained a new master. Evgenia is visually startled, her eyes wide with shock at the sudden, unexpected news. Gressel sharply warns Anne to speak of the formidable new master with extreme caution. Anne cheerfully dismisses his worry, stating their loyalty to Evgenia outdates any new master. She is stunned to realize her intervention caused the story's timeline to shift forward. Gressel praises her planning while Evgenia internally panics about opening a figurative Pandora's box. She resolves to avoid further complications in hopes of living a peaceful life with Euclid. She walks down the hallway, determined to keep her secrets locked away for now. She opens a door, hoping to find some much-needed peace of mind inside. She enters the library to look for the children and converse with them. A tall wooden grandfather clock stands wedged tightly between 2 large bookshelves. She questions why anyone would wedge a clock in such a strange position. She wonders if the odd placement indicates a secret, turning the clock hands backward. Evgenia stands back to examine the clock after adjusting the hands, waiting for a response. She reacts with surprise as a sudden mechanical noise sounds from the wall. She is stunned to find a dark, secret passage hidden behind the library wall. The heavy stone wall slides open next to the clock, revealing a hidden dark doorway. A close-up shows Evgenia gasping with wide purple eyes at the sudden discovery. She stands in disbelief at the entrance of the newly revealed secret passage. She notes Viridian Castle is a magic fortress and eagerly decides to explore the passage. She steps down the stairs, wondering what secrets might be hidden within the walls. She walks down the stairs, wondering if she will find priceless treasures or gold. She deduces that it is likely just a historical escape route used by nobility. She stops in her tracks as she notices something unusual further down the path. She spots a massive reinforced metal door and questions if she should open it. Evgenia slides her cuffed hand along the dusty stone wall beside the barred door. Cruel words echo in her mind, accusing her of exposing her low-born deceptive roots. A woman aggressively berates the children, accusing them of failing to convey her demands. She rants about the new Duchess and the trading company branch opening in the north. She demands they tell the Duke to keep paying the massive monthly distribution fees. She pressures them by invoking their dead father's promises, leaving the young boy weeping. Evgenia gently reassures the young girl, offering to help her if any trouble arises. The girl recalls agreeing out of fear, but musters the courage to refuse her. The girl bravely screams her refusal, swearing never to comply with her aunt's demands. The aunt stands utterly dumbfounded as the girl firmly rejects her commands. She mocks the children for getting cocky just because the new Duchess was kind. The brown-haired woman laughs maliciously, enjoying her cruel dominance over the children. She cruelly claims their guardians will discard them once their true identities are revealed. Evgenia suddenly bursts into the room with a terrifying purple aura, interrupting the aunt. Evgenia grabs the startled woman by her dress collar, her anger completely overflowing. Evgenia demands to know if the woman has been tormenting the innocent children. Evgenia appears from behind a pillar in complete shock as a terrible realization hits her. Sudden quick thud echoes as the brown-haired woman collapses to her knees. Evgenia demands to know exactly how long this cruel torment has been going on. The trembling woman desperately stammers out her denial, trying to excuse her abusive behavior. Sharp rustle sounds as Evgenia grabs the woman's collar, stopping her pathetic excuses. Overcoming her initial fear, the woman defiantly questions what business this is of Evgenia's. She attempts to deflect her guilt by accusing Evgenia of loving another man instead. Evgenia coldly refutes the baseless accusation, shutting down the rumors about her personal life. Evgenia firmly asserts her authority as both the Duchess and the children's protective aunt. Evgenia vows never to tolerate abuse and asks the children if they were harmed. The young boy tearfully admits that the cruel woman pinched them very frequently. Evgenia's anger spikes dangerously upon learning the kids suffered physical abuse from their aunt. Deciding violence is bad for the children, Evgenia struggles to control her rising fury. Loud, heavy stomp echoes as Evgenia asserts her absolute dominance over the abuser. The abusive woman shrieks in pure terror as Evgenia unleashes her terrifying dark aura. Evgenia coldly commands the terrified woman to leave immediately, sending her fleeing in fear. The panicked woman desperately runs away down the hallway to escape Evgenia's wrath. Evgenia gently comforts the trembling children, assuring them that they're safe now. Hesitant children turn to look at their protective aunt, still visibly shaken. The blonde girl tearfully begs Evgenia to keep their non-noble heritage a complete secret. Evgenia kneels down to their level, gently prompting them to explain their worries. The young girl reveals the secret that their deceased mother was actually a commoner. Evgenia listens in quiet understanding, absorbing the heavy truth about the children's lineage. She realizes Euclid's brother married a commoner, causing the subsequent family complications. To protect his wife's secret, the brother accepted a deal that burdened the territory. The girl tearfully asks if they should stop calling Evgenia their Aunt Mao. Evgenia warmly reassures them that she is, and always will be, their aunt. The blonde girl looks up in surprise at Evgenia's unwavering warmth and acceptance. Evgenia explains they have no relation to those terrible blackmailers, offering them comfort. Evgenia reassures them that their legitimate birth and registry make them true nobles. Evgenia smiles softly, her warm expression dispelling the children's deep-seated fears and anxiety. The blonde girl tearfully objects, crying that they are just a burden to Euclid. Evgenia is deeply saddened and baffled by the heavy guilt the children carry. Evgenia expresses gentle disappointment, encouraging them to reconsider their worries about their uncle. The boy tearfully explains they endured the abuse only to avoid disappointing their uncle. The children reveal how they quietly held in their feelings regarding Amy's selfish demands. Evgenia's heart aches as she continues listening to the children's heartbreaking confessions. She reminds them that Euclid always prioritizes eating meals with them despite his work. Warm memory shows Euclid and the children happily sharing dinner at the table. She explains that Euclid always thinks of them first and rushes home to see them. The blonde children listen intently as Evgenia explains how deeply their uncle loves them. She recalls Euclid embracing the joyful children, surrounded by a warm, golden, loving light. Tears continue to stream down the blonde girl's face as the truth sinks in. Overcome with emotion, the crying children throw their arms around Evgenia in a hug. Evgenia's gaze turns furious as she vows to make the blackmailers pay dearly. The scene shifts to a wide view of the grand and glistening Viridian Castle. Gently clasping the girl's hand, Evgenia softly asks if they have calmed down. The kids look up with tear-stained eyes, still overwhelmed but feeling much safer. Evgenia asks if they still intend to keep this a secret from Euclid. Evgenia hugs them tightly, silently resolving to protect their happiness no matter what happens. Blonde children are hesitant to speak, prompting Evgenia to internally gush over how incredibly cute they are. A polite knock sounds at the door as a voice outside asks if the Duchess is unharmed. Evgenia holds the startled girl close as the newcomer announces their entrance, causing the boy to hiccup. A firm, brown leather boot steps over the threshold, bathed in the soft glow of the room. Euclid freezes in surprise at the doorway as he takes in the sight of his emotional family. The brown-haired maid gasps in surprise upon seeing the tearful young noble children huddled there. The maid remembers seeing Lady Amy rush away in a panicked hurry, fearing the worst had happened. Concerned by Marianne's tears, the maid anxiously asks if the children have done something wrong. The children stammer a quick denial, clarifying that their tears are not because of their aunt. With tear-filled eyes, the blonde children desperately try to explain that Evgenia did not cause their tears. Euclid looks mildly bewildered by their sudden, passionate defense, his expression softening with concern. Evgenia swept drops, realizing their frantic denials are only making her look more like a cruel villainess. Euclid steps forward and places a comforting hand on Marianne's head, gently soothing his niece. Euclid instructs the maid to fetch a wet cloth, wound ointment, and clean bandages immediately. Evgenia reacts with silent confusion, wondering why Euclid is asking for medical supplies. She looks down in worry, fearing she might have overlooked some hidden physical injuries on the children. Evgenia gently strokes Marianne's hair, asking if she is hurt, but the girl reassures her she is fine. Suddenly, Euclid takes Evgenia's hand, softly telling her to relax her grip to avoid worsening her wound. He notes she must have scraped herself when she burst out of the heavy wooden wardrobe earlier. Close-up reveals a fresh red scrape marking the delicate skin of Evgenia's wrist. The young children gaze up in guilt-ridden concern upon realizing their protector was injured. Euclid carefully raises her hand, preparing to treat the scrape with quiet, focused attention. Evgenia is internally overwhelmed, finding it completely surreal that Euclid is personally bandaging her hand. Against a warm backdrop of shimmering roses, Euclid tenderly wraps the white bandage around her wrist. Evgenia reflects on keeping the secret passage hidden from Euclid, who seems to intentionally avoid questioning her. The grand snow-covered spires of the fortress stand quietly under a bright winter sky. Rumors quickly spread that Evgenia drove Amy away and scolded the children out of sheer malice. With the daily visits from the overbearing aunt abruptly stopping, the household staff assumed the worst. Evgenia accepts the misunderstandings, noting that as a transmigrated villainess, she is used to such rumors. She is startled when Euclid's bright, enthusiastic aide, Delano, unexpectedly enters her personal office. She notices Euclid sitting comfortably nearby, elegantly sipping tea as if he completely belongs there. Delano cheerfully announces that he has successfully confirmed the exceptional trading company to sell her dowry. When asked for the name of the prestigious merchant group, Delano proudly reveals it is gold. Delano explains that the highly influential merchant company has established extremely profitable northern trade routes. Evgenia finally understands that the gold Anne mentioned was actually this powerful trading company. Delano explains the spirited vice guildmaster sees their deal as a perfect chance to expand north. Evgenia is stunned to learn that the mysterious vice guildmaster wishes to meet with her personally. Delano enthusiastically highlights the potential expansion, prompting a curious glance from the Duchess. Evgenia notices Euclid staring at her intently, wondering if he has something to say to her. Euclid continues to gaze at her with a gentle, slightly flushed expression, silent and admiring. Close-up highlights the intricate patterns on Euclid's elegant vest and his sparkling blue brooch. Evgenia asks if he has something to share, and Euclid reveals the Magic Tower recently contacted him. The Magic Tower Lord reportedly felt guilty for providing a pre-owned carriage to the Duchess. The tower offered a brand new top-tier magic carriage in exchange for returning the old one. Evgenia politely declines the offer, stating they already agreed to no takebacks on the original carriage. A sudden knock interrupts their conversation as a lively voice announces the arrival of the children. Evgenia warmly invites them inside her brightly lit, spacious office. Marianne and Dior burst through the doors, happily inviting their aunt and uncle to join them for lunch. Evgenia is deeply touched that the sweet children ran to her office first before going to Euclid's. As they prepare to leave, Marianne casts a quiet, meaningful glance back into the room. Dior builds up his courage over 5 days, determined to finally tell his uncle today. Euclid sits elegantly with a thoughtful expression, ready to listen to his nephew's words. At the dining table, the children offer food to Evgenia, who insists she is fine. Evgenia sweat drops, privately noting that her hand wound is merely a minor scratch. Marianne eagerly feeds her anyway, prompting a politely resigned response from the smiling Duchess. Sudden footsteps echo down the corridor as someone calls out urgently for the Duke. A servant runs hastily across the polished floor to deliver the pressing message. An announcement reveals that Count Beers has arrived and wishes to see them immediately. Euclid narrows his eyes with a serious, questioning look upon hearing the Count's name. Evgenia maintains a serene smile while Dior sits beside her looking deeply anxious. Marianne nods silently, her wide red eyes reflecting her internal tension and worry. Evgenia decides to meet Count Beers first, telling Euclid to finish his meal peacefully. Euclid stands up, insisting that he can handle the guests so she can stay. With a menacing smile, Evgenia insists on meeting him first to inspect his ledgers personally. Evgenia notes that the children also have something important to confess to their uncle. Dior clutches his shirt tightly as he finally speaks up to address his uncle. Marianne prepares herself to confess, standing nervous against a vibrant pink floral background. A sudden transition marks a quiet pause before the scene shifts back to the hallway. Evgenia trusts that Marianne is currently explaining the entire situation to Euclid. Although worried about the children, she focuses on her impending meeting with Count Beers. She walks purposefully down the corridor with her maid, silently cheering for her niece. Delano intercepts her in the hallway, expressing surprise that the Duke is not with her. Delano asks if she is going alone, his face lighting up with absolute delight. Delano eagerly explains they are finally cutting off the Count's annoying monthly fees. Delano imagines Euclid being polite while anticipating how terrifyingly the Duchess will intimidate the Count. Evgenia asks Delano if the Count typically behaves in an arrogant, high and mighty manner. Delano confirms his insufferable attitude, noting he disrespects Euclid despite their distant family connection. Upon hearing of the Count's audacity, Evgenia emits a dark aura that terrifies Delano. Evgenia smiles menacingly, cracking her knuckles as she resolves to teach the Count a lesson. The heavy double doors open as Evgenia and her maid step into the drawing room. Evgenia is temporarily blinded by the light reflecting off the Count's extremely galled head. Count Beers introduces himself politely, boasting about his large northern trading company. Evgenia walks forward, inwardly thinking that his baldness perfectly reflects his rotten personality. The Count laughs boisterously, completely oblivious to Evgenia's cold, thoroughly unamused expression. Noting his nonchalance, she realizes his daughter Amy did not worry about her. The Count proudly presents a rare painting as a special wedding gift for her. Stepping closer to inspect the artwork, Evgenia suddenly loses her footing and trips. Gasping in shock, she accidentally bumps into the table while trying to catch her balance. Annoyed by her clumsy footwear, she regains her composure while cursing her frequent stumbles. Count Beers stands in tearful shock as a wet rose drapes over his bald head. Evgenia realizes with panic that she accidentally knocked the flower vase onto his head. Delano and the maid gasp in awe, mistaking her clumsy accident for brutal, tyrannical behavior. The Count screams in outrage, declaring the ruined painting to be a priceless masterpiece. Evgenia's eyes narrow as she recognizes the name of the famous artwork he mentioned. She begins wiping the table, confidently questioning his assumption that she wouldn't recognize it. She reveals the genuine masterpiece was actually part of her own wedding dowry. Delano firmly confirms ownership of the painting, leaving the Count sweating in utter panic. She pointedly asks if he thinks her father would ever give her a forgery. The Count desperately pleads his innocence, claiming he was also deceived by someone else. Smirking coldly, Evgenia leans in close and asks if he habitually sells fake goods. A mysterious monologue reveals a past conspiracy within the ducal house succeeded only because of a hidden accomplice. Evgenia smirks with glowing purple eyes, taunting her opponent's arrogance while they stammer in complete disbelief. Duke Rudion suddenly steps into the doorway, interrupting the tense standoff and calling out to his Duchess. Count Beers looks up in sheer panic as the golden-haired Duke walks forward with a majestic aura. Duke walks up to Evgenia, questioning her about the children while she tries to explain. Duke Rudion stands frozen in stunned silence as the shocking truth of the situation is revealed. Bowing her head politely, Evgenia respectfully acknowledges his request and agrees to leave the room. Evgenia harbors deep, silent thoughts as her cold purple eyes narrow with absolute determination. The golden-haired Duke offers a gentle, reassuring smile, surrounded by soft white blossoms. Evgenia quietly exits the room, casting a subtle look over her shoulder as she walks away. A soft thud echoes as the door closes, leaving Duke Rudion alone with the trembling Count. A flashback to 30 minutes earlier raises questions about Marianne's trust in her protective uncle. Marianne tearfully explains she hid the truth not out of mistrust, but to protect her precious uncle from additional burdens. Marianne clutches her dress in grief, apologizing for the trouble their late father brought upon the family. Duke Rudion passionately rejects her words, refusing to let the child blame herself for the tragedy. Pulling the sobbing girl close, the Duke acknowledges their father's failure but reassures her of their innocence. The Duke silently scolds himself for showing such vulnerable distress in front of the young children. Hugging them tightly, the Duke resolves to shield the children from his dark path of revenge. He silently vows never to speak ill of his late brother regardless of the global blame. A heartbreaking thud of embrace follows as the Duke tearfully apologizes to the children for the tragedy. Holding them close, the Duke promises that they are his true family and nothing will ever change. The children smile brightly in his arms, leaving the Duke utterly bewildered by their mention of Anna. Dior cheerfully recalls their aunt promising that they would always remain incredibly precious to their uncle. Brief memory shows Evgenia warmly comforting the tearful children, wrapping them in a loving embrace. She had also urged them to rejoice that the toxic Beers family was not their blood. The children joyfully celebrate their deep happiness at being recognized as part of their uncle's family. Marian and Dior laugh with pure, unbridled joy, holding a beautiful bouquet of white roses. The Duke smiles softly, wondering why the children's innocent words bring such deep comfort to his soul. Back in the present, Count Beers desperately grovels, claiming he only hid the Duchess's identity and adopted her on the late young Duke's orders. Duke Rudion coldly questions if his late brother truly promised distribution fees for his sister-in-law or if the Count manipulated young children with adult matters. The Duke demands to know if the children were ordered to prioritize House Beers' interests above everything else. Furious, the Duke shouts, rejecting the preposterous claim that his sister-in-law owed any debt to the greedy Count. Letting out a heavy, weary sigh, the Duke takes a moment to regain his cold composure. The Duke looms menacingly over Count Beers, asking who else is privy to this confidential secret. Though terrified on the outside, Count Veers silently plots to use this secret as blackmail against him. Duke Rudian repeats his cold inquiry with absolute sternness, offering no room for deceit. Clutching his fist, the Duke demands an immediate, honest answer from the sweating, terrified Count. Count Veers kneels on the floor in absolute defeat, completely shattered by the Duke's oppressive presence. Cunning malice glints in the Count's eyes as he dreams of using the secret as leverage. The door suddenly swings open as a panicked butler bursts in with an urgent alert. Count Veers furiously scolds the butler's insolence, but the butler frantically reports that the company has just contacted them with a major problem. Canis Hewen from the Imperial Treasury Department introduces himself, greeting Duke Rudian inside the room. The official announces they have received a report of the Beers Trading Company violating trade laws. Treasury official Canis Hewen explains they traced the corrupt Count to Rudian Castle and apologizes for the sudden, startling intrusion. Duke Rudian coldly asks if Imperial officials are allowed to disregard basic courtesy and castle protocol by barging in without permission. Canis Hewen sweatily clarifies that they only entered because the Duchess herself personally opened the door for them. The golden-haired Duke is left utterly dumbfounded, staring blankly as he realizes his wife's cunning move. Outside the snow-dusted gates, a majestic carriage waits as the guards prepare to alert the Lord. Hearing a loud commotion outside the palace gates, the servants wonder what is happening in confusion. Canis Hewen politely greets Duchess Evgenia, correcting his title for her and identifying himself as a treasury official. The dark-haired investigator explains that Lord Chianel sent him to handle the matter. The investigator promises a meticulous investigation, prompting Evgenia to urge him to get moving. The butler is commanded to open the grand gates as they prepare to depart. Evgenia and the children gather as the investigator prepares to leave with Euclid. Marianne anxiously asks if their grandfather is being taken away, and Evgenia gently confirms his punishment. Evgenia places a reassuring hand on Dior's shoulder to comfort the anxious children. The children obediently agree to behave, looking up at their aunt with bright eyes. Evgenia internally warns that the desperate Count will try to drag down Euclid's late brother's reputation. Evgenia instructs her maid Anne to escort the children to the library for safekeeping. Walking down the hall, Evgenia worries about the long-term impact on the children's future. Chibi Evgenia blushes furiously, scolding herself for fantasizing about their future family so soon. Euclid looks back over his shoulder, his golden eyes filled with quiet contemplation. Evgenia snaps out of her daydream, resolving to apologize to Euclid for acting independently. The investigator calls out eagerly, announcing he is ready to present his official report. The investigator grins broadly, clearly pleased with the rapid progress of the case. The investigator reports that Count Beers is currently held in Duke Rudian's underground dungeon. The investigator expresses his deep gratitude while Evgenia modestly downplays her own critical role. Evgenia casually mentions the Count's attempted fraud, leaving the investigator thoroughly shocked and outraged. Evgenia explains how the Count tried to pass off a forged masterpiece as a wedding gift. The investigator vows to ensure the fraudulent Count pays dearly for insulting the Duchess. Evgenia warmly expresses her trust, promising to report his exemplary service to her brother. The investigator reacts with sheer flustered delight at the prospect of the Duchess's price. Euclid suddenly steps remarkably close to Evgenia, causing her to freeze in startled silence. Evgenia quickly apologizes for overstepping and explains her reasoning behind auditing the ledgers. Euclid softly asks her to raise her head, catching her completely off guard. A sudden, gentle tap sounds as Euclid's fingers lightly lift her chin. Euclid smiles with breathtaking warmth, surrounded by a radiant background of blooming white roses. Leaning in close, Euclid sincerely thanks her for showing such compassion to his niece and nephew. Chibi Evgenia is utterly defeated by the angelically sweet smile of her beloved Duke. Evgenia reminds him that the Count will try to blackmail them, pledging to handle it. Euclid gently interrupts, telling her to leave everything to him and not worry herself. Evgenia looks at him with sudden curiosity, wondering what the gentle Duke intends to do. Euclid takes her gloved hand in his, giving it a reassuring and firm squeeze. Overwhelmed by his physical affection, Evgenia internally accuses him of playing dirty with his charm. Noting her deep blush, Euclid asks with genuine concern if she is feeling unwell. Chibi Evgenia screams internally, completely unable to resist the intense charm of her absolute favorite character. The scene shifts to the dark dungeon, where Count Beers furiously blames his daughter Amy. Amy defends herself, pointing out that their father's own illegal acts landed them in prison. As heavy footsteps echo in the dark corridor, Amy voices her embarrassment over his failed fraud. Euclid stands silently outside their iron cell, his golden eyes cold and devoid of mercy. Count Beers desperately begs for mercy, invoking their past trading relationship to escape ruin. Count Beers shamelessly throws his daughter under the bus, leaving Amy gasping in utter betrayal. Wearing a sinister smirk, Count Beers reminds Euclid of his leverage regarding the children's lineage. Euclid coldly inquires if anyone else besides the two of them knows their family secrets. Amy proudly confirms that they are the only ones who hold this dangerous secret. Count Beers threatens that the entire empire will learn the truth about the children's bloodline. Euclid activates a glowing blue recording magic stone, quietly noting that their treasonous blackmail is confirmed. Recognizing his fatal mistake, Count Beers' smug expression instantly morphs into absolute sweating horror. A dark, menacing shadow wraps around Amy, causing her to scream out for her father. Euclid towers over them in the dark dungeon, addressing Lady Beers with a terrifyingly cold voice. Euclid coldly reproaches the prisoner for revealing secrets to the children that they should never have known. Looking at the trembling captive, Euclid flatly declares that he has no intention of making things easy for them. Euclid warns the prisoner that if they must hold on to resentment, they should direct it solely at him. The scene shifts abruptly as a heavy drawing room door rattles open, breaking the dark silence. Gasping in sudden pain, Euclid clutches his chest and coughs up blood into his handkerchief. A flamboyant, rainbow-haired visitor dramatically questions why Euclid seems so eager to rush toward an early grave. Euclid dryly critiques his visitor's ridiculous wig and star-shaped glasses, which the guest loudly defends as peak fashion. Removing his colorful disguise, the brown-haired visitor bickers with Euclid about borrowing various magical tools. The visitor slides a cracked magical stone across the table while criticizing Euclid's lack of manners. Euclid softly apologizes for his attitude, quietly admitting that he is currently feeling rather unwell. Leaning back exhaustedly, Euclid is immediately scolded by his guest for neglecting his vital medicine. The brown-haired visitor reacts with utter shock upon learning Euclid has already consumed his entire supply of medicine. He pointedly asks if Euclid has forgotten his promise to survive long enough to watch his niece and nephew grow. Quiet, somber pause descends over the room as the two men sit opposite each other in deep thought. The visitor explains that overusing powerful restriction magic and tampering with minds places a fatal burden on Euclid's body. Euclid realizes his persistent friend followed him, though the brown-haired man playfully tries to deny the accusation. Euclid sighs in resignation, which only prompts his guest to demand why he refuses to ask for more medicine. In a cartoonish squabble, Euclid complains about the cost, prompting his frantic friend to prioritize his actual survival. Relenting, the trembling visitor offers a free bottle of medicine, urging Euclid to take it before he changes his mind. Setting the purple potion down, the visitor shifts topics and asks if Euclid discussed the magic carriage with his wife. Euclid smiles warmly and notes his wife was perfectly fine with the arrangement, leaving his friend thoroughly bewildered. The guest desperately pleads with Euclid to try persuading the Duchess to reconsider her decision. Desperate to avoid a loss, the flustered guest offers to provide 2 magic carriages instead of 1. Euclid points out that offering such an absurd bargain would only make his incredibly sharp wife highly suspicious. Euclid amusedly comments on his friend's bizarre negotiation tactics, leaving the guest grumbling in frustration. A polite knock suddenly sounds at the door as an urgent voice calls out for the Duke. Startled by the sudden arrival, both men instantly peer over the back of the sofa in a minor panic. Seizing the opportunity, Euclid mischievously suggests that his guest should pitch the carriage deal to the Duchess himself. Terrified at the prospect of facing the formidable Duchess, the guest flatly refuses and scrambles to escape. The frantic visitor flees the room, leaving Euclid with a final plea to negotiate the carriage change on his behalf. Euclid opens the drawing room door to find his wife standing outside and gently asks what brings her there. She explains with a serene smile that she merely came to accompany him to their upcoming family dinner. Evgenia stands beautifully alongside the 2 blonde children, Marianne and Dior, who are both cheering enthusiastically for food. Euclid gazes at her with quiet surprise, deeply touched by the warm and inviting side of his family. As Euclid expresses his quiet relief, Evgenia's purple eyes narrow as she spots something unusual on his face. Her composure falters slightly as she asks him with mounting concern if he is bleeding. She reaches up with her black-gloved hand, gently tilting his chin to inspect his face more closely. Smiling softly, she lies that his lip is simply split to keep from alarming the children standing nearby. Euclid blushes furiously, frozen in a fluster, dazed by her sudden and gentle physical contact. He stammers in complete bewilderment as she leans closer, asking if the split lip is causing him pain. Spotting the romantic tension, Marianne quickly holds a finger to her lips and shushes her snickering younger brother. Overwhelmed by the sweet moment, the children playfully shout and run ahead down the corridor. Walking side by side down the grand hallway, Evgenia asks if he has considered her previous military proposal. She reiterates her plan to appoint her own guard knight as commander to properly restructure Rudian's order. She envisions recruiting powerful new knights under a starry sky to fortify the security of their territory. Euclid sweat drops, mentally overwhelmed by the sheer scale of his wife's ambitious plans to build a private army. Evgenia logically explains that laying a strong defense foundation now is highly beneficial, regardless of the current crime rate. Noting his silence, she looks down slightly and worries if her request is too difficult for him to accommodate. Euclid quickly assures her that her reasoning is perfect, but hesitates as he prepares to explain their circumstances. He reveals that an ancient ancestral decree strictly forbids House Rudian from dealing with the capital or employing outsiders. The narrative explains that House Beers was uniquely authorized to run a northern trading company according to the founding lord's ancestral will. The speaker admits doubts about honoring the founder's will since House Beers shirked duties and took excessive profits. Marianne and Dior look up with concern, asking their uncle if he is feeling all right. Euclid recalls his distress when Imperial knights and armed soldiers breached the castle he once believed was safe. Euclid clenches his fist in frustration, worrying that although his family wasn't targeted this time, they might be next. Euclid yields to his wife's opinion, deciding to issue an official notice tomorrow to recruit more knights. Euclid silently reflects that his vassals will be thoroughly shocked by the sudden recruitment notice. A bright background of white roses frames an enthusiastic expression of gratitude to the Duke. Smiling warmly amidst blooming roses, Evgenia firmly declares that she will not regret her decision. The story jumps ahead a few days to show the immediate results of their recruitment notice. The leader of the mercenary group Black greets the Duke, explaining they traveled far to enlist in the Night Order. Euclid welcomes the mercenaries, thanking them for braving the treacherous northern mountains to apply for his Night Order. Evgenia panics internally upon seeing her mercenary guild Gold arrive alongside the others to settle her dowry. Evgenia is completely baffled by why the original story's infamous assassination guild has arrived to join the order. While the nervous assassins whisper about angering her, Evgenia desperately wishes they would stop hinting at their connection. Evgenia's worries deepen as she realizes there is an even bigger, more dangerous problem present. She is stunned to spot Reinhardt among the crowd, questioning why he would show up there. The pink-haired young man, Reinhardt, stands silently under his hood, his crimson eyes glowing intensely. Evgenia stares in disbelief as Reinhardt's name echoes in her mind. Evgenia recalls the time right after she first woke up in her new body. She remembers releasing Reinhardt with money to ensure he would not become a future threat to her. She laments that despite all her efforts to free him, he chose to return on his own. Evgenia shivers under Reinhardt's intense gaze, wondering why he is glaring as if he wants to devour her. Feeling extremely awkward standing beside Euclid under that glare, Evgenia struggles to figure out her next move. Euclid kindly asks if she is unwell, and Evgenia quickly downplays it as a minor headache. The mercenaries whisper in utter shock after hearing the Duke address their commander so affectionately as his lady. Amidst the mercenaries' nervous muttering, Evgenia frantically wishes they would stop hinting at their prior acquaintance. Smiling warmly, Euclid expresses his sincere gratitude to everyone for applying to House Rudion's Night Order. Euclid explains that enlistment will be decided with Commander Gressel Fion through a skill test and background check. Euclid honestly admits that because the Night Order is newly founded, they cannot offer high pay yet. The recruits quickly become flustered, admiring the Duke's handsome appearance and incredibly gentle voice. Euclid radiates a breathtaking angelic charm that leaves the entire group completely spellbound. The mercenary leader and Reinhardt exchange determined looks, thoroughly charmed by the Duke's sincerity. The recruits eagerly declare they are perfectly fine with not becoming full knights as long as they join. Chibi Euclid agrees to start the skill test immediately, casually asking where they left their weapons. The leader answers that they left all of their weapons on the racks in the training yard. The children stand nearby as Euclid explains they ask to avoid startling important guests or causing sparring accidents. Dior bravely shouts that he is completely fine and not scared of the weapons at all. Evgenia smiles slightly, prompting a teasing remark about how their aunt is the one who is scary. Euclid gently reveals to the children that their aunt is actually afraid of sharp and pointy things. Euclid adds that her fear gets a bit better when she is surrounded by other people. Apologizing for his thoughtlessness, Euclid urges her to rest inside, but Evgenia insists on staying by his side. The children enthusiastically drag Evgenia away, promising to protect their aunt and escort her safely inside. The scene shifts as a nervous voice calls out to the Duke, questioning their current path. Delano worries that enlisting slum dwellers, drifters, and criminals makes them look more like a thug gang than an order. Delano gasps in shock as he reviews the records, pointing out that there is even a former slave among them. Delano asks if the slave marks were removed, and Euclid confirms they were completely erased by a decent master. Delano notes that despite his lazy movements, the pink-haired former slave is incredibly skilled and potentially stronger than the commander. Delano asks what the Duke plans to do, prompting Euclid to ask for Delano's own opinion on the recruits. Euclid reflects on the difficulty of forming a strong Night Order using only northern recruits. Delano admits his surprise about a Night Order comprised of actual criminals. Delano expresses his fear of potential harm to the ducal house, but Euclid reassures him. Smiling gently, Euclid confidently declares his belief that the recruits will not harm House Rodion. Thud! Someone drops to their knees in the dressing room, urgently calling out to their leader. Two kneeling men address Evgenia as their commander, while she and her maid watch in silence. The scene shifts inside Evgenia's secret dressing room where the secretive meeting continues. Evgenia quietly observes Reinhardt as he bows deeply, realizing the anticipated moment has arrived. Evgenia clutches her head in distress, realizing she was far more than a simple infatuated villainess. She notes that Anne's efficiency and the abundance of rare magic tools are completely abnormal. She reflects on her secret dual identity as the head of both Gold and the assassination guild Black. Slumped in despair, she worries that anyone witnessing this plotting will see her as a major threat. Kneeling on the carpet, Reinhardt hesitantly calls out to her as the guildmaster. Evgenia warmly commends them for their long journey, leaving the Chibi mercenaries utterly bewildered. The men whisper in disbelief at her kindness, recalling how she saved their homelandless clan. Chibi Evgenia sweats in embarrassment as they praise her for rescuing them from wrongful imprisonment. Evgenia clears her throat to stop the praise, prompting an immediate apology from her subordinate. The mercenaries offer their late congratulations on her sudden marriage while Reinhardt watches silently. Smiling warmly, Evgenia shifts the topic and asks them to present their official report. The subordinate eagerly submits the monthly report on Gold Trading Company's income and investments. The pages rustle softly as Evgenia takes the thick stack of papers to inspect them. Evgenia wonders how her past self managed to build such an empire-wide trading company at age 22. Recalling the Crown Prince, she deeply doubts the original claim that she was obsessed with him out of love. Evgenia receives the records of this month's requests and now comes from her subordinate. The man prepares to report on the new master of their organization for the final update. He formally announces that Lord Reinhardt has taken over as the new Master of Black. Looking up, Reinhardt calls her his lady and questions if she was testing him. Evgenia gasps in shock as Reinhardt asserts that she rescued him and named as revenge targets. Evgenia freezes in terror, realizing the original Evgenia actually colluded with Reinhardt for revenge. Looking closely at Rimhart, she recalls that he harbors a monumental secret about his birth.
A tense silence falls as Reinhardt's glowing crimson eye burns with determination.
Evgenia recalls the shocking truth that Reinhardt is actually the Emperor's secret half-brother. She knew she rescued him from the slave market, but never knew she incited his revenge. She remembers her past life reading how Reinhardt assassinated the Emperor while Evgenia infiltrated the palace. She recalls that Kai discovered the assassination and framed Evgenia, throwing her into prison. The treason resulted in Duke Basilian's lands being seized and his family completely ruined. In her previous life, she had found this tragic downfall highly forced and unreasonable. Gulp! Now living these events, she realizes all the confusing plot holes finally make sense. She controls Gold to target the Basilian company and Black to command a private army. Reinhardt, a royal-born slave, calls her master and seeks vengeance on the Empire. All of these bizarre plot points are perfectly explained by one single chilling truth. She realizes with absolute certainty that the charges of treason were never a false accusation. The horrifying reality is revealed. Evgenia was indeed actively plotting to overthrow the Empire. Dark confirmation settles in that the original villainess was entirely guilty of rebellion. However, staring deeply into the truth, she still cannot fathom the exact reason for the coup. She suspects it stems from the sheer disgust she felt toward her family and the prince. Knowing she cannot solve it now, she worries Reinhardt remains the most dangerous element. The scarred mercenary asks why she abandoned plans of conquering the underworld to join the knights. Evgenia asks if he dislikes her plan, causing him to instantly panic and deny it. Kneeling at her feet, the submissive mercenary desperately begs for forgiveness and pledges absolute loyalty. Reinhardt quietly mutters his agreement, bringing their secret tense meeting to a close. Looking directly at him, Evgenia gently encourages Reinhardt to live freely and pursue whatever future he truly desires. Looking away, Reinhardt quietly repeats her words, questioning what it is he actually wants. Chibi Evgenia sweat drops as he reassures him, privately wondering if he is on the verge of crying tears of joy. Overwhelmed by her unexpected kindness, the pink-haired youth stands with sparkling, tear-filled eyes. Evgenia stares at him in sheer disbelief, completely caught off guard by his emotional reaction. Tears stream down Reinhardt's face as he covers his eyes, pleading to simply remain by her side. Evgenia deeply reflects on the political landscape, realizing his absolute devotion could make him her ultimate trump card. After Evgenia finally agrees to let him stay, Reinhardt's face lights up as he dramatically offers his own eyes as a vow of loyalty. Shocked by his extreme declaration, Chibi Evgenia sweat drops and quickly rejects his bizarre offer. Her sweat bead grows larger as she mentally laments the terrifying precedents her past self must have set. Shifting to a serious tone, Evgenia narrows her violet eyes and announces she has a specific mission for him. Seated elegantly behind a grand vase of flowers, she instructs him to spread a highly strategic rumor all the way to the capital. 1 week later, in the capital, hush whisper spread among the citizens about a northern merchant company monopolizing daily necessities. The gossip intensifies as the townsfolk reveal that Duchess Evgenia herself reported the corruption directly to the treasury. The rumors continue to spread, with the crowd noting that Lord Chiono personally stepped in to order an official investigation. At a high society gathering, nobles whisper in disdain about Duke Rudion paying massive distribution fees to that corrupt company for a decade. The aristocrats begin questioning why the imperial family never stepped in with subsidies or relief to assist the struggling north. The whispering crowd scoffs at the complete lack of tax reductions or government aid for the northern region. High above the ballroom floor, a noble looks down while the guests argue that helping struggling provinces should be standard imperial policy. The hushed conversations turn dangerous as the nobility begins to openly suspect the imperial family of deliberately neglecting the north. Deep in his private office, the emperor sighs heavily, rubbing his face in mounting frustration over the political fallout. Sitting at his massive desk, the emperor demands to know what his political opposition is saying about the current situation. His expression darkens with anger as he complains about the stubborn northerners refusing to cooperate with the empire. The dark-haired advisor reports that the mastermind behind the rumors has left absolutely no trail to follow. The advisor adds that House Basilian remains completely quiet, pointing toward a mysterious third party orchestrating everything from the shadows. Red stains the ground where the fallen members of the underworld's ruling assassination guild lie defeated. The emperor's sharp green eye narrows in deep concern as he ponders the hidden threat. He recalls the mysterious pink-haired slave, noting that the buyer's true identity remains completely unknown. Stroking his chin, the emperor wonders if the same elusive culprit is behind both the slave's disappearance and the recent underworld attack. Clenching his white-gloved fist in a sudden rage, the emperor seethes at the audacity of whoever is defying his authority. The emperor asks for the final verdict of the trial, and his subordinate confirms the targets were found guilty. Looking over the gloomy mine tracks, the advisor explains that the criminals were sent to forced labor and their assets transferred to House Rudion. Clicking his tongue, the emperor realizes the outcome has effectively relieved the financial pressure on House Rudion. Looking out the towering arched window, the advisor hesitantly mentions there is one final troubling detail from the trial. The bald criminal is shown desperately defending himself, loudly claiming the crown prince was never acting alone. The emperor demands to know who the criminal accused of being the true mastermind behind the scheme. The advisor clarifies that despite his loud protests, the prisoner never uttered a specific name. A flashback shows the bald man trembling in sheer terror, as if the mastermind's power was far beyond anything he could survive. Pinching the bridge of his nose, the emperor curses his inability to openly deny the rumors without fueling suspicion. Rubbing his temples, the emperor decides to change the subject and inquires about the crown prince's current campaign. A tactical map reveals the crown prince's successful conquest of Aruhin and his planned advance into the neighboring principality of Damandra. The emperor writes diligently, planning to throw a magnificent victory banquet to welcome Kaiden back to the capital. He reasons that staying quiet for now and keeping the public fed will soon restore the imperial family's reputation. The emperor hands the freshly written document to his advisor, ordering him to deliver the urgent message to the prince immediately. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Crown Prince Kaiden's military camp nestled deep within the Rocky Mountains of Aruhin's southern region. His advisor informs the red-haired crown prince, whose face is splattered with blood, that the unit commanders are gathering for a strategy meeting. Sudden running footsteps echo through the dirt camp as a voice frantically calls out to the prince. Kaiden immediately tenses and asks if they are being ambushed, but his subordinate quickly reassures him that the enemy is not attacking. The blonde knight happily explains that he just received an exciting letter from his wife detailing the latest gossip from the capital. With wide eyes, the messenger loudly announces the shocking news that Lady Basilian has finally gotten married. The red-haired crown prince stares in absolute disbelief, his face splattered with blood. Crown prince disbelievingly questions the marriage rumor, which his blonde knight nervously confirms is true. The blonde knight happily points out that the lady has finally given up on her obsession to marry someone else. A tense, chilling command of silence cuts through the soldier's cheerful words. The enraged crown prince fiercely demands how he dares to speak such ridiculous nonsense. He grows increasingly hostile, questioning how anyone could dare claim she left him. Grinning maniacally with glowing crimson eyes, he refuses to believe she would marry anyone else. He recalls sending a formal proposal and ordering a custom engagement ring for her before leaving. He desperately wonders how she could give up on him so easily and marry another. His expression twists into terrifying possessiveness, asserting she would never dare marry anyone else. Panicked blonde knight begs for mercy, suggesting he verify the news directly with Sir Basilian. The furious prince immediately orders his trembling men to bring Sir Basilian to him. Parting the tent curtain, black-haired Alexis Basilian calmly enters to greet the crown prince. Kaiden instantly draws his sword, pointing the blade directly at Alexis's throat. Confused by the incredibly hostile atmosphere, Alexis calmly asks what he needs to answer. Kaiden demands answers, pointing out that as her brother, Alexis must know the truth. Alexis stares blankly as the crown prince demands to know about his sister's marriage. The sweating subordinate desperately prays it as a rumor, but Alexis bluntly confirms she married. A heavy silence falls over the tent as Alexis formally confirms his sister's marriage. Alexis recalls his sister warning him to stay quiet, but reasons it is already common knowledge. Kaiden demands to know who she married, and Alexis reveals it is the Northern Duke. Kaiden bites his glove in frustration, wondering if Duke Basilian forced the marriage out of anger. Alexis quickly corrects him, explaining his sister was the one who insisted on marrying first. Aiden's eye trembles in profound shock as he realizes the devastating truth. He recalls her previous cold warning that she was completely letting go of her feelings. The horrifying realization sets in that her rejection was entirely sincere all along. In his silent rage, Kaiden clenches his fist so tightly that fresh blood begins to drip. His panicked subordinates notice his bleeding hand and desperately call out for a handkerchief. Alexis hesitates to offer his handkerchief, but they urgently demand he hand it over. Alexis watches in surprise as Kaiden's bleeding hand is wrapped in the white cloth. The blonde knight asks if the handkerchief is from a lover, which Alexis instantly denies. Alexis blushes furiously, clearing his throat in absolute embarrassment over the accusation. Knights look utterly dumbfounded as they realize the handkerchief actually belongs to his sister. Kaiden suddenly begins to laugh softly, a sinister smile creeping onto his face. He notices the embroidery on this handkerchief is completely different from the one he received. He recalls the past when Evgenia handed him a completely different pink handkerchief. He realizes with dark clarity that the handkerchief she gave him was never originally hers. He realizes that she had actively planned to blindside him from the very beginning. Smiling darkly, he notes she never truly yielded to him, just as a messenger arrives. An imperial messenger arrives at the camp bearing urgent news from the palace. A tense, heavy silence fills the tent as Kaiden receives the royal dispatch. Kaiden reads the emperor's letter silently, his back turned to his silent knights. A dark proclamation reveals his sudden, ruthless decision to discard all previous military plans. With glowing, pinkish-crimson eyes, the prince vows to end the war quickly and return. High-pitched screams of joy echo from the grand estate of House Rudium. Evgenia cheers ecstatically with her arms raised, celebrating that their debt is fully paid off. Stretching her arms behind her desk, she laments that the task took nearly 2 weeks. She looks at the massive stack of creditor papers that have piled up over the years. She notes that receiving Count Beers' confiscated wealth was an incredibly massive financial relief. A defeated, faceless figure clutches his head in despair following his complete financial ruin. Evgenia ecstatically praises Duke Euclid for handling Count Beers' punishment so smoothly. Walking down the hall, Evgenia notes the progress of Basilian Trading Company in gold. Evgenia smiles with determination, vowing to walk a prosperous path alongside her husband. Looking out the window, Evgenia reflects on the lingering awkwardness in her relationship with Euclid. Clenching her arms, Evgenia laments how distant and uncomfortable they still feel around each other. Startled by a sudden knock, Evgenia breaks away from her deep melancholic thoughts. Evgenia reminds herself of her plans to finally be alone with Euclid in the portrait room. After a quick appearance check, a chibi Evgenia enthusiastically prepares to head out. Reaching for the golden door handle, Evgenia opens the door to greet the Duke. To her surprise, Euclid appears smiling warmly while holding the ecstatic children who want to join. Euclid explains that bringing the children along felt appropriate, leaving a shocked Evgenia speechless. Although she understands Euclid's logical reasoning, Evgenia cannot help but feel deeply deflated. Evgenia suddenly realizes that she and Euclid have almost never spent any time alone. Evgenia recalls that they were only briefly alone once in the bridal waiting room. She remembers standing with Euclid in her wedding dress, their interaction brief and formal. She recalls their only other private moment in the wedding chamber with no intimacy since. Evgenia remembers gathering her courage the previous evening to ask Euclid for a portrait tour. She anxiously wonders if Euclid avoids private moments with her because he feels uncomfortable. Feeling a wave of sadness, Evgenia looks down with a solemn, wistful expression. Euclid asks if anything is wrong, prompting Evgenia to quickly offer a reassuring smile. Evgenia rationalizes that Euclid must be under immense pressure from the imperial family's hostility. Walking down the hallway with Euclid and the children, she vows to work harder for their territory. Euclid turns his head slightly, offering a subtle, gentle smile to his family. Arriving at the gallery, Euclid begins introducing the portraits of the former Dukes of Rudion. Staring at Euclid's father's portrait, Evgenia notes how cold and intimidating his impression is. Euclid softly asks her if she thinks he does not resemble his family very much. Evgenia notices the previous dukes all share stern, rigid faces and the same dull blonde hair. Euclid explains that despite his father's cold appearance, he was always incredibly warm to him. Seeing Euclid's melancholic look, Evgenia instantly regrets bringing up his family resemblance. Evgenia watches him in silence, her purple eyes filled with concern for his hidden sorrow. She reflects on how the emperor quietly harbors a deep hatred for the Northern Territory. Staring at the family portrait, she recalls the suspicious accident that claimed Euclid's family 5 years ago. She remembers the dark truth from the original story that the emperor caused their deaths. Looking at Euclid's solemn face, Evgenia realizes how devastating this burden must be for him. Seeing Euclid looking depressed, Evgenia frantically searches for a way to shift the somber mood. Evgenia cheerfully asks Euclid if there is a solo portrait of him from his childhood. Candles flicker as Euclid admits he lacked the patience required for a portrait back then. Euclid explains he couldn't sit still long enough and circumstances changed before he could. Hearing about their late father, the children tearfully call out in deep sadness. Evgenia quickly checks her emotions, reminding herself to stay strong for the grieving children. She resolves to comfort them, remembering her promise that happier days are ahead. Marianne looks up with teary red eyes, her expression suddenly turning to curiosity. Marianne happily declares that Count Barris's arrest means they can finally live in peace. Remembering her previous conversation with the children, Evgenia reminds herself to speak carefully. Euclid suddenly changes the subject, asking how she had accessed the children's locked room. Euclid asks how she managed to emerge from the wardrobe in the children's room. Evgenia playfully responds that she used a secret passage hidden inside the mansion. The children's eyes sparkle with excitement as they eagerly beg to see the secret passage. Evgenia smirks confidently, happy to distract the children and guide them to the secret. A soft click sounds as Evgenia rotates the clock dial, preparing to reveal the hidden doorway. A heavy sliding sound echoes as the door opens, leaving the amazed children completely starstruck. Euclid questions her unexpected discovery of the passage, which she claims was a pure accident. Evgenia asks if Euclid was unaware of the passage, but he reveals he has known of its existence for a long time. Euclid expresses surprise that a non-mage found it, while she nervously credits her good luck. Evgenia explains the layout of the hidden pathway to the children and Euclid as they prepare to go down. Dior eagerly begs to explore his room first, his eyes shining with pure excitement. Dior excitedly runs down the stairs, ignoring his sister's urgent calls to wait. Evgenia stops the children, gently advising them to wear jackets because of the lingering cold. Evgenia stands bewildered as Euclid and the children stare at her with confused expressions. Marianne questions why she finds it cold, noting that it feels colder here than in the capital. The children whisper that she must have a delicate body, making Evgenia sweat in amusement. Marianne points to a distant mountain, leaving Evgenia puzzled as to why she mentioned it. Marianne explains the mountain should be snowy, leaving Evgenia shocked to see it completely bare. A somber mist gathers as the voice explains the territory used to be much colder with frost-covered windows. Heavy snowstorms and severe blizzards used to dominate the frozen landscape during the season. Euclid confirms the unusual warming trend, mentioning that the territory's changing weather has sparked local gossip. Evgenia is left sweating as she contemplates the bizarre reality of global warming within a novel. Dior happily argues that the warm weather means they can play without wearing jackets. Evgenia chuckles and agrees to proceed, silently noting that warmer weather is hardly a crisis. Time passes quietly as a new chapter begins several days later in the quiet castle. Evgenia sits at her desk admiring a beautifully decorated letter that has just arrived. Melissa's letter begins with a warm greeting, asking if her sister is doing well. A brief flashback shows the blonde-haired Melissa sitting at her desk carefully writing her letter. Melissa writes that she has started attending local social gatherings to expand her circle. Evgenia cries in frustration, lamenting that she hasn't spent any quality alone time with Euclid. As the northern cold thaws, reports of green sprouts breaking through the soil flood the territory. Euclid is deeply shaken by this climatic shift and immediately convenes an emergency strategy meeting. Despite paying off the massive debt, Euclid finds himself buried under mountains of new paperwork. Evgenia sighs heavily, realizing that Euclid's overwhelming workload leaves them with no free time. She recalls Euclid politely declining her invitation to share tea after his long meetings. She also remembers Euclid declining a simple walk, thanking her formally but remaining at work. Staring blankly, Evgenia faces the painful realization that Euclid is actively keeping his distance. Trying to shake off her depression, Evgenia resolves to focus on writing back to Melissa. Evgenia reflects on the original novel's plot where Melissa starts volunteer work and confesses to Damien. Her pen glides across the paper as she writes down the trading company's names. Chill runs down her spine as the dark image of the crown prince makes her feel uneasy. Having finished her reply, Evgenia decides to go outside to clear her troubled thoughts. Her maid, Anne, asks where she is heading, and Evgenia replies she is going to the library. Evgenia dismisses Anne from following, instructing her to send the letter on her desk instead. As she walks down the hall, Evgenia guiltily resolves to make up for neglecting her loyal maid lately. Feeling dejected by Euclid's constant rejection, Evgenia proudly resolves to ignore him for the day. Approaching the library door, a strange rustling sound catches Evgenia's attention, making her pause. Inside, Marianne and Dior are in the middle of a heated, stubborn argument. Peeking inside, Evgenia wonders why on earth the children are fighting so intensely. Marianne suddenly yells that their aunt loves someone else, completely shattering Evgenia's composure. Her shock triggers an cough as she gasps loudly, instantly alerting the bickering children. Marianne and Dior turn in surprise, realizing their aunt has been standing at the door. Marianne quickly apologizes, blaming Dior for stubbornly refusing to admit what they knew. Marianne reveals they knew she liked someone other than their uncle, plunging Evgenia into deep panic. As the children resume bickering, a sweating Evgenia frantically tries to stop their wildly inappropriate debate. Evgenia realizes the children are referring to the day they discovered the hidden passage. Regretting her past passivity, Evgenia worries that the situation was easily misunderstood by the children. Dior gently tugs on his aunt's sleeve, calling out to her. A soft, hesitant voice asks if she truly likes someone other than their uncle. Tears well up in Dior's bright blue eyes as he looks up at her anxiously. Evgenia asks Dior for his thoughts, prompting him to recall her dismissing the rumor as nonsense. Evgenia frantically explains she was just worked up and asks Dior to forget her outburst, which he happily agrees to do. The children recall their aunt becoming angry when Amy made that claim in the past. Feeling deeply unsettled, Evgenia listens as the child concludes she didn't seem to like anyone else. Dior shyly points out that his aunt looks at their uncle every single day. A sudden startled pause catches Evgenia as she stares back in complete surprise. Dior explains he believes she likes Euclid because they both stare at him daily, though his sister disagrees. With a trembling voice, Dior asks his aunt if his feelings are truly mistaken. Smiling softly, Evgenia worries that her actions might have inadvertently hurt the children. She reflects on how shocking it must have been for them to hear such rumors. Evgenia warmly confirms that Dior is correct, leaving the young boy utterly surprised. With a gentle, melodic chuckle, Evgenia beams with a genuine and heartwarming smile. Admitting her feelings for Euclid to the children brings a refreshing wave of relief. The children cheer in triumph as Evgenia reflects on finally opening up to someone. She playfully swears them to absolute secrecy, making it a special pact between them. The children tilt their heads in confusion, wondering why loving their uncle must be kept secret. Evgenia silently hesitates, worrying that Euclid might not believe her feelings are genuine. Dior excitedly points out that since she is family, she can read their special book now. Dior reveals a magical fairy tale book authored by the first lord of the house. Evgenia wonders if this childhood magic book holds the forgotten history of the territory's founding. A mystical gleam shines from the locked red book, defying Evgenia's expectations. Dior animatedly describes how wind whooshes and lightning booms from the book's magical pages. Evgenia expresses disbelief about the lightning, while Dior explains the lock must be opened first. A sudden grunt of physical effort sounds as Evgenia unsuccessfully tries to pry open the locked book. Dior offers to unlock it, but Evgenia hesitates, questioning if she is permitted to read it. Marianne sweetly reassures Evgenia that she is a Rudion now and is welcome to read. After a quick throat clearing, Evgenia offers to read, triggering an excited cheer from the children. Dior gently places his hand on the ornate gold lock, promising to open it quickly. A soft, satisfying click echoes as the magical lock snaps open in a bright glow. Evgenia marvels at how the book automatically opens for those of House Rudion's blood. As the children's eyes sparkle with excitement, Evgenia prepares to begin reading the magical book. The scene transitions softly into the ancient story written within the book's pages. Flames consume a village, setting the stage for the ancient legend of the territory. Tale describes a chaotic era filled with constant warfare and desperate screams. The myth introduces a cruel, greedy hero and a compassionate golden dragon who loved humanity. Evgenia pauses in sudden shock, questioning if she is reading the words correctly. The page depicts a beautiful illustration of a golden dragon resting amidst ancient script. Evgenia reads how the escaping dragon grew weaker after fleeing the greedy hero. Hearing a soft sniffle, Evgenia comforts the weeping Dior by reminding him it is only a myth. A poignant illustration shows the majestic golden dragon covered in painful, bloodied battle scars. The dragon left a solemn promise to return and defeat the deceitful hero. The golden dragon slumbers peacefully, waiting for the day its promise will be fulfilled. The story urges readers to remain strong, promising the dragon will someday return. An overwhelming wave of sorrow washes over Evgenia as she finishes reading the legend. Though it is just a legend, Evgenia feels a profound, unexplainable ache in her heart. Evgenia realizes the book's story slanders the imperial family by framing the first emperor as a villain who stole the dragon's heart. Staring at the painted likeness of the First Lord, she wonders why the emperor's closest ally would write such a story. She notes the text represents the First Lord's opinion rather than official history. Gazing down at the open pages, she wonders if the founder wrote this book out of hatred or to preserve the absolute truth. The children enthusiastically declare their love for the dragon, leaving a nervous Evgenia sweating in deep concern. Evgenia gently closes the book and cautions the surprised children that wishing aloud might actually delay the dragon's return. Standing together in the library, she warns them to keep these thoughts secret as their political standing makes any slip dangerous. Dior suddenly remembers Euclid's similar warnings, prompting a curious Evgenia to ask what the Duke told them. Dior explains Euclid banned discussing dragons outside the family, happily concluding that his uncle also wishes for the dragon's return. The children tilt their heads in confusion, questioning why they cannot discuss the legendary creature freely. Evgenia laughs nervously, explaining she simply wants to avoid causing any unnecessary complications or trouble for Euclid. Evgenia inquires about other history books in the library, but Marianne confirms that no other such texts exist here. Marianne brightly suggests asking Euclid, noting he promised to show them history books before hiring their tutor next year. Dior grins playfully, wondering aloud if his uncle would actually share those hidden books with them. The children tease that their uncle is far too shy and would likely flee if left alone with their aunt. Dior eagerly suggests to his sister that they should invite their aunt to play with them immediately. Grinning mischievously, the two children suddenly turn their attention back to their aunt. The children suddenly invite her to play tag, leaving a bewildered Evgenia completely caught off guard. Sunset settles over the quiet castle as the cold mountain winds blow softly. Inside the quiet study, the aide presents Euclid with the latest reports on soil conditions across the territories. The aide reminds Euclid to escort the children before dinner, and Euclid agrees to go after finishing his work. The aide hesitantly asks if Euclid feels burdened, leaving the young duke thoroughly confused by the sudden question. The aide directly asks if Evgenia is a burden to him, catching Euclid completely off guard with the inquiry. The aide admits his past fears that Evgenia would never let go of her feelings for the crown prince. He adds that he now believes her wedding vows were sincere and that she's genuinely trying hard. The aide gently emphasizes that Euclid's own feelings in the marriage matter just as much. Euclid looks down at his paperwork, quietly assuring his assistant that he understands the situation perfectly. The aide gently advises him to have an honest conversation with Evgenia if there are other underlying reasons. Euclid reflects on the reality of living with a metaphorical time bomb inside his body. An oppressive silence surrounds him as he recalls how mana has controlled his life since birth. He remembers the agonizing pain that plagued his body whenever he used high-level magic. He walks down the corridor, recalling his sole hope was to survive long enough to pass on secrets. He looks back at his wedding day, feeling too guilty to ever burden her with his selfish secrets. Memory of his beautiful bride on their wedding day fills him with quiet sorrow. A sudden sharp clapping sound echoing nearby breaks his train of thought, leaving him startled. A blindfolded Evgenia calls out for the children as she stumbles down the hallway during their game. Marianne giggles mischievously, teasingly warning her brother that their aunt cannot see them at all. With a sudden push from Marianne, Evgenia stumbles forward and collides directly with the startled Euclid. Blindfolded and off balance, Evgenia instinctively reaches out and grabs hold of his chest. For a brief moment, Euclid is captivated by an inexplicable thought that he cannot fully understand. Standing close in the sunlit corridor, the blindfolded Evgenia remains completely unaware of his intense gaze. Her foot slips slightly, causing her dress to wrestle as she completely loses her balance. Euclid quickly reacts, catching her in a firm embrace to prevent her from falling. He gasps softly, a sudden realization washing over him as he holds her close. He realizes that using high-level magic recently did not cause the customary agonizing pain in his chest. He marvels at the fact that he felt absolutely no physical backlash or pain afterward. He reasons that even the strongest medicine should have worn off by now, yet the pain remains absent. He looks down at her in astonishment, wondering if his body is actually beginning to heal. Evgenia pulls off her blindfold and gasps in utter shock upon finding herself in Euclid's arms. Blushing furiously, she quickly steps back and bows to apologize for her clumsy mistake. Evgenia explains she did not know Euclid was there because her eyes were covered. Euclid quietly wonders in amazement if his body is actually beginning to heal.
Sparkles of gold magic drift from Euclid's fingers as he tests his painless heb.
Flustered by the silence, a blushing Evgenia demands Euclid say something to ease the embarrassment. Evgenia mentally panics, scolding herself for losing her mind during their sudden physical closeness. Evgenia realizes she has already memorized Euclid's footsteps well enough to recognize them from afar. Evgenia is completely thrilled and stunned by this historic first moment of physical contact. Evgenia suddenly realizes the children planned the game of tag to bring them together. Evgenia wonders how to handle the scheming, adorable children as they celebrate their successful matchmaking. Euclid gently assures Evgenia he is perfectly fine, pulling her out of her daze. A soft, genuine smile graces Euclid's face, completely disarming Evgenia with his warmth. Feeling her heart flutter, Evgenia notes that Euclid's expression and tone are unusually gentle. Evgenia commends Euclid's hard work, while he gratefully attributes his early finish to her assistance. Evgenia asks about the abnormal weather, but Euclid explains they have no definitive answers yet. Euclid explains that reports are insufficient, so he plans to personally inspect the territory soon. Euclid is caught off guard when Evgenia firmly requests to accompany him on the inspection. Evgenia explains she wants to ensure the approved welfare budget and supplies are reaching people. Evgenia notes that children have been cooped up inside the castle for too long. Evgenia suggests that touring the territory together would serve as a wonderful outing for them. The children are filled with sudden hope, asking if they will all go together. Euclid agrees to the idea, realizing it has been far too long since their last outing. Euclid ponderously strokes his chin, carefully considering the logistics of taking the children along. Evgenia celebrates internally, glad she used the children as a clever excuse to secure Euclid's company. Euclid expresses his sincere regrets for not being the first to suggest showing her the territory. Evgenia is completely taken aback, surprised to hear the usually formal Duke offering her an apology. Euclid delivers his heartfelt apology with deep sincerity, moving Evgenia with his emotional honesty. Evgenia warmly reflects on how gentle Euclid is, thinking he will make a wonderful father someday. Dior's eyes light up with immense joy and excitement at the prospect of the trip. Euclid apologizes to the children, but they sweetly assure him they understand how busy he is. The children excitedly plan their fun activities and snacks for the blizzard-free trip ahead. Night falls over the quiet castle as the scene shifts to the dark, peaceful corridors. Under the soft moonlight, Euclid tenderly plants a goodnight kiss on the sleeping boy's forehead. Watching Euclid's tender care, Evgenia's heart swells as she softly wishes for something more. Lost in her romantic thoughts, Evgenia accidentally speaks her wish for a goodnight kiss aloud. Euclid suddenly freezes in shock, turning around to stare at her after hearing her request. Seeing Euclid's crimson, startled face, Evgenia suddenly experiences a horrifying wave of dawning realization. Mortified silence fills the room as Evgenia realizes she just spoke her desire aloud. Evgenia panics in absolute mortification, screaming internally at her massive slip of the tongue. The quiet night hides Evgenia's mounting embarrassment as she questions if she has lost her mind. Evgenia despairs over her blunder, lamenting that her unrequited feelings drove her to make such a slip. Clenching her hands in anxiety, Evgenia desperately tries to brainstorm a way to play off her mistake. Breaking the tense silence, Euclid politely suggests that Evgenia must simply be very tired. Quiet tap of footsteps echoes as Euclid begins walking slowly toward the flustered Evgenia. Feeling a sudden pang of rejection, Evgenia wonders if Euclid is choosing to ignore her confession. Evgenia silently admits to herself that while it was a slip, her words were entirely sincere. Desperate to escape the suffocating embarrassment, Evgenia reaches out and grasps the bedroom door handle. Evgenia stiffly agrees with his excuse, preparing to flee the bedroom under the guise of fatigue. Evgenia declares her intention to go to bed immediately to avoid facing Euclid any longer. Euclid's green eye widens in silent surprise as he watches her prepare to leave. In a sudden, breathless motion, Euclid pulls Evgenia back into a tight and protective embrace. The light brown-haired maid smiles brightly, warmly welcoming her mistress back to the estate. The maid cowers in terror as Evgenia emits an intensely dark, burning aura of frustration. The maid's worried inquiry lingers in the air as Evgenia sits in quiet, contemplative profile. Evgenia quietly reflects that she does not regret her bold decision to speak her mind. She recalls how the blonde Duke played off her awkward blunder with a gentle, bittersweet smile. Looking closely, she senses that the Duke is hiding something deep within his heart. She holds on to the hopeful belief that he will eventually fulfill his promise to love her. Standing under the night sky, Evgenia fiercely resolves to throw caution to the wind. Standing together, Evgenia and her maid admire the exceptionally bright moon on this final night. Evgenia thoughtfully notes the sacred tradition of prayer on the final night of the month. Evgenia recalls a key novel scene where the heroine faces rejection at the Grand Temple. She remembers the tense moment when the male lead is supposed to rescue the heroine. A sudden realization strikes Evgenia with panic over who will now save the heroine. Rapid footsteps echo through the Grand Temple corridor as someone calls out for the High Priest. Inside the silent sanctuary, the Grand Priest kneels in deep prayer before the glowing altar. The silver-haired priest quietly turns his head as he is found in his usual sanctuary. Antonio approaches the kneeling priest, discussing the busy nature of this final night of prayer. The duty priest is startled by the sudden presence of the Grand Priest in the hall. Antonio confirms that the young duty priest is responsible for overseeing this specific prayer room. The silver-haired high priest urgently inquires if anyone has visited the prayer room today. The high priest freezes in silent disbelief upon hearing that no visitors have arrived today. The high priest presses for confirmation, prompting the young priest to suggest checking the logs. Antonio curiously asks the high priest if he was expecting to meet a specific visitor. The priest notes the high priest was the sole reason this old room remained open. The assistant wonders if there is a hidden purpose behind keeping the old sanctuary open. High priest looks away in quiet sadness, lost in his deeply personal memories. Dilapidated wooden shacks stand under a bleak sky, depicting the harsh environment of the slums. A dirty, frail young boy sits alone, reflecting on the grim slums of his birth. A warm hand reaches out to offer a fresh loaf of bread to Bodili. The mysterious cloaked savior silently hands out supplies, bringing hope to the slum children. The silver-haired boy happily announces his acceptance into the temple due to his magical gifts. Smiling brightly, the boy begs for a way to repay her kindness in the future. A desperate, whispered plea for help echoes in his memory against the encroaching darkness. He cherishes the memory of her touch, marking their first and final meaningful conversation. A few years pass, showing him walking down the halls as a young priest. A sudden spark of recognition ignites as he catches sight of a familiar figure. The cloaked figure quietly slips through a door, casting a shadow along the corridor. Heart-pounding, the young priest runs forward, certain he has finally found his savior. He peers through the door only to find his savior collapsed on the floor weeping. Choosing to protect her privacy, he silently listens to her agonizing, tearful prayers from afar. Month after month, her peaceful, muffled weeping echoes throughout the silent, moonlit prayer room. He silently prays that the goddess will ease her pain and grant her peace. Clenching his fist, he fiercely wishes she would never have to cry here again. Dark memories dissolve like smoke as a voice calls the priest back to reality. The high priest snaps out of his deep thoughts as his assistant calls him. He anxiously ponders when she stopped visiting, determined to deliver a crucial, long-held message. A heavy truth from a previous life remains waiting to be revealed of her. Turning to his assistant, the high priest asks what urgent matter brought him here. Antonio inquires about the schedule for the annual charity work that the high priest leads. Antonio explains that numerous people are eagerly awaiting confirmation for the upcoming service trip. The assistant expresses concern over the silver-haired high priest's unusually pale and unsettled appearance. A memory of a blushing blonde girl named Melissa looking deeply embarrassed flashes before his eyes. The high priest tracks the passage of time, anxiously waiting for her scheduled arrival. A tender, heartfelt confession of deep affection echoes softly from the shadows of his memories. The silver-haired high priest remembers coldly addressing Melissa by her formal name in his past life. He recalls pushing Melissa away, dismissively ordering her to leave and forget their entire encounter. The high priest remorsefully remembers rejecting Melissa with cruel, unfeeling words in his previous life. He reflects on his past harshness, wondering why he was singularly cruel to her of all people. He remembers their childhood in the slums, where her pure, kind heart shone amidst the squalor. He recalls his immense relief upon learning Melissa was revealed to be Duke Basilian's niece. He felt deeply comforted knowing she was finally safe and formally registered as the Duke's daughter. The fleeting, warm memories of the slum children bring a momentary sense of peace. He watches the blonde Melissa, deeply questioning where her persistent feelings for him first began. The high priest remains determined to find a secret benefactor and warn her to seek safety. He worries about her safety, noting she has stopped visiting the temple, leaving him no way to contact her. A sudden, shocking realization begins to connect the pieces of this mystery in his mind. Suspicion narrows his gaze as he considers a dangerous connection to a specific, mysterious woman. With a sharp thought of realization, his blue eye widens in pure alarm. A dark-haired woman casually reveals to the high priest that she bought the late emperor's illegitimate son. The high priest is completely stunned by her treasonous declaration, sitting frozen in disbelief. She confidently blackmails him, urging him to obey her commands to undermine the imperial family. She coldly demands that he refrain from calling her Duchess, as she is divorced from Rudion. She directly threatens the mysterious woman who visits the old prayer room to force his compliance. Sweating profusely, the high priest demands to know how she discovered his secret visitor. She mockingly boasts that finding one hidden woman is simple compared to tracking down imperial heirs. The high priest laments in quiet despair, realizing he has failed to protect her once again. He asks his assistant about Melissa's return, but learns she never actually left the capital. He clarifies he meant Duchess Evgenia Basilian, whose arrival in the capital would cause absolute chaos. Distressed, he realizes northern affairs have drastically changed from his memory of his previous life. He strategically decides to conduct this year's temple charity work in the Rudion territory. The high priest holds his hand steady, preparing himself to set his plan into motion. The scene shifts to the grand facade of Rudion Castle, bathed in bright winter light. At her desk, Evgenia sighs in relief upon hearing that Melissa is safe. She ponders how the original story is unfolding differently, now proceeding without Rihard's involvement. She notes that Damien has suddenly requested to visit the northern temple for charity work. Sitting elegantly at her desk, she contemplates the political ramifications of Damien's sudden decision. She looks at a sealed letter, noting how Damien's northern trip appears as defiance toward the Emperor. Evgenia realizes how different this path is from the original story where Melissa confessed in the capital. Her brown-haired maid happily announces that all preparations for their long-awaited outing are finally complete. The crisp click-clack sounds as Evgenia steps forward in her elegant heels. Dressed in a purple gown, Evgenia walks down the corridor flanked by guards alongside her maid and children. She proudly observes her knights, noting they finally look like a proper disciplined order. Her attention shifts to Reinhardt, whom she notes looks remarkably brighter than before. Reinhardt, a pink-haired youth with red eyes, stands quietly with a calm, clear expression. Evgenia recalls that in the original novel, Reinhardt was a gloomy, obsessive type because his eye was gouged out. The blonde child Dior beams with pure joy upon spotting Reinhardt. A comical scene unfolds as a startled Reinhardt reacts to the child's sweet nickname. Reinhardt gently holds the child's hands, warmly warning him to run carefully so he does not get hurt. Reinhardt blushes, politely asking the cute boy not to call him by that embarrassing nickname. The child sweetly insists on the nickname, leaving Reinhardt thoroughly disarmed by his innocence. Reinhardt requests that Dior use his name instead of nicknames, but the boy enthusiastically refuses. Watching their cute interaction, Evgenia fondly realizes that Reinhardt and Dior have already become close friends. Evgenia recalls hearing that Reinhardt taught Dior basic martial arts, finding their unexpected friendship rather sweet. Dior proudly boasts to his aunt about Reinhardt's incredible speed and exceptional swordsmanship skills. Reinhardt politely offers to officially teach the young master once he grows a little older, if permitted. The head knight assures Evgenia that Reinhardt's recognized skills make him a perfect sword instructor. Evgenia thoughtfully agrees, acknowledging that the children indeed need proper sword training for their future. While Dior celebrates the exciting news, Reinhardt shyly begs the boy to stop calling him Big Brother. Evgenia warmly grants her permission for them to act like brothers, leaving Reinhardt completely stunned and blushing. Evgenia enthusiastically suggests appointing Reinhardt as the children's official guard knight, prompting his quiet, humble hesitation. The young blonde girl curiously asks Reinhardt if he and Dior are not actually close friends. Dior stares up with wide, tear-filled eyes, looking utterly heartbroken by the sudden doubt. Evgenia teasingly notes that Reinhardt cannot possibly refuse now, leaving him completely overwhelmed by the child's tears. Evgenia bursts into cheerful laughter at the young knight's adorable panic and flustered reaction. As Evgenia continues to laugh merrily, a handsome blonde-haired man approaches her with a quiet expression. Standing silently nearby, the blonde-haired man wears an unusually stiff and somber expression. Sensing a powerful and familiar presence behind her, Evgenia suddenly stops laughing in surprise. Evgenia quickly turns to find Euclid while the young girl joyfully calls out to her uncle. Euclid politely apologizes for his late arrival and curiously asks what has made everyone laugh so happily. Slow, steady footsteps echo across the paved courtyard as the group gathers together to welcome him. Dior eagerly tells his uncle that he was asking his handsome new big brother to protect him. Evgenia explains that she suggested appointing Reinhardt as the children's guard knight to ensure their safety. Evgenia notices Euclid's tense expression and inwardly wonders if something has put him in a bad mood. She observes his rigid posture, deeply perplexed by why he suddenly looks so incredibly stiff. Stepping closer, Evgenia nervously wonders if she has somehow made the blonde duke angry. The distance between them feels heavy as she silently ponders what could have caused his sudden tension. Sensing the awkward atmosphere, Reinhardt respectfully tells Euclid that he does not have to approve the appointment. Breaking his silent, stiff demeanor, Euclid suddenly reassures them with an exceptionally bright, warm smile. Reinhardt quietly observes the sudden change in Euclid's expression, feeling a wave of silent relief. Dior cheers with pure delight, thrilled that his favorite big brother will officially protect him. Bowing respectfully, Reinhardt solemnly pledges to do everything in his power to protect both children. Flustered and blushing, Reinhardt is deeply touched when Dior happily acknowledges him as his big brother. Turning back to Evgenia, Euclid softly addresses her with a tender, deeply affectionate look. Euclid hesitantly blushes, struggling to find the right words as he stands before her. Euclid happily reveals he wore the comfortable clothes she gave him, warmly thanking her for the thoughtful gift. Evgenia secretly rejoices, glad her excuse of changing weather allowed her to buy him new clothes. Evgenia is shown talking near the window, explaining her desire to get comfortable seasonal outfits for everyone. Standing together in their beautiful matching outfits, the pair looks remarkably perfect and elegant. Evgenia happily reassures Euclid she bought plenty for herself too, and he promises to wear them well. A grand dark carriage adorned with elegant golden carving sits ready for their journey. Evgenia coordinates the seating arrangements, sending the excited children to ride with her maid, Anne. A soft rustle sounds as Evgenia's white-gloved hand gently reaches out to hold Euclid's sleeve. Evgenia speaks up to announce that they will be taking the front carriage together. Euclid is caught completely off guard as Evgenia boldly pulls him along by his arm. The heavy carriage suddenly rattles with a loud creak as its massive wheels begin to turn. Sitting across from each other inside the carriage, a tense, silent atmosphere settles between them. Euclid kindly warns Evgenia that sitting backward might cause her to experience motion sickness. Evgenia mischievously admits she actually likes facing backward, but still suffers from terrible motion sickness. While soft munching sounds echo, Euclid frantically offers to switch seats before realizing she is playfully teasing him. Evgenia smiles brightly as she admits she was only joking, leaving Euclid startled by her playful charm. Euclid gives her permission to go ahead with her question, looking rather somber. Euclid remarks that she seems to place a substantial amount of trust in Reinhardt. Evgenia looks startled, questioning his sudden mention of the young pink-haired knight's name. Euclid observes that her trust runs deeper before quickly retracting his statement in embarrassment. Evgenia contemplates how the original story had Reinhardt driven solely by revenge, wondering if the current emperor's actions will shift and if Reinhardt can change by finding true loyalty and belonging in Rudion. Evgenia explains that she trusts Rickhart's exceptional martial skills to keep the kids safe, prompting Euclid to quietly ponder her response. Evgenia asks if something is troubling him about the young knight, but Euclid blushes and quickly apologizes for speaking out of turn. Spotting his blushing face, Evgenia flashes a mischievous, knowing smile in his direction. As she moves closer to him, Euclid nervously asks what she is doing. Evgenia reminds Euclid of his earlier expression of deep gratitude for her clothing gift. Evgenia presses him, and Euclid nervously confirms his gratitude not just for the clothes, but for everything she does. A flustered Euclid asks if there is something specific she would like from him. Evgenia rests her head on Euclid's shoulder, playfully complaining of feeling lonely at night and requesting a cozy nap on his shoulder. Euclid is left completely flustered and heavily blushing as he weakly calls out to her. Evgenia mischievously asks him to sing her a lullaby, leaving the chibi-style Duke utterly speechless in his embarrassment. Euclid's expression softens into sheer tenderness as he watches her sleep peacefully against him. Upon arriving in the prosperous village, the local elders warmly thank the Duke and Duchess for visiting them in person. The elderly villagers happily report that everyone is healthy and eagerly offer their continued help whenever needed. The smiling elder couple praises the Duchess's kind care, noting that the seeds she sent are already beginning to sprout. The elder laments receiving no aid from the imperial family, acknowledging that they would have starved without Euclid and Evgenia. An old woman tearfully wipes her eyes, celebrating that nobody will call her a cursed lady anymore. Back in the carriage, Euclid looks out the window, deeply struck by the villagers' emotional words. Euclid warmly recalls offering extra clothing to the grateful villagers to help them adapt to the warming climate. A mysterious system lore record describes the cursed land and the immortality gained by tearing out a dragon's heart. The myth continues to explain that the dragon's corpse was burned with mystical fire from the Lucian forest. The historical record notes that almost everyone in the Empire believed the Golden Dragon was evil. The sacred lore reveals that only the bloodline of the Lucian forest sage inherited the true myth as it was written. Heavy carriages rattle loudly as they continue their journey through the prosperous village. Looking out the window, Evgenia contemplates the connection between the warming climate and the dragon legend from the library. Lush, vibrant green trees sway gently beneath a beautifully clear and sunny sky. Suddenly, her eyes widen in quiet surprise as a sudden thought crosses her mind. Evgenia reflects on Euclid's profile, realizing the climate shift might have cleanly resolved the issues with his niece and nephew. She quietly considers that in the original novel's timeline, Euclid might have remarried a kind person after divorcing Evgenia. A soft, questioning voice suddenly interrupts her thoughts, calling out to her. Evgenia looks up to find Euclid gently cradling her cheek with his gloved hand. Stroking her cheek, Euclid softly tells her that she has something on her face. Evgenia inwardly admits to herself that seeing Euclid remarry another woman would make her heart hurt far too much. Evgenia gently places her own hand over his, leaning into his warm touch. She gazes up at him with a look filled with profound, unspoken affection. A quiet, charged silence hangs in the air as their touch lingers. Evgenia bursts into cheerful laughter, dispelling the heavy romantic tension between them. Euclid stares down at her in complete silence, his face flushing a bright crimson. A sweet, flowery atmosphere fills the carriage as they share this tender, quiet pause. Euclid's gentle touch lingers on her face as he prepares to lean in closer. Euclid leans in incredibly close, gently lifting her chin as he gazes into her eyes. The space between them vanishes as they draw closer, completely lost in the moment. A sudden, sharp knock-knock sounds from outside the carriage, instantly shattering their intimate, quiet moment. Gretchen calls out from outside, worriedly asking if everything is all right and why they haven't stepped out yet. The interrupted pair instantly jump apart, wide-eyed and thoroughly panicked by the sudden intrusion. As a flustered Evgenia rushes out of the carriage, another maid loudly scolds Gretchen for being too dense to recognize newlyweds. Euclid steps out of the carriage first, simply confirming their arrival as Evgenia follows behind him. Sensing her ominous and intense aura, Reinhardt nervously asks if he has done something wrong. Sighing with frustration, Evgenia dismisses Reinhardt and tells him that she is simply annoyed. Evgenia quickly reassures a startled Euclid, telling him that he is not the one to blame. Euclid apologizes and walks away while Evgenia tries to stop him, internally screaming in frustration. Anne notices a sudden commotion nearby, wondering why there is so much noise around the children's carriage. Euclid inquires about the commotion, and Anne explains that Marianne insists she smelled something inside. Marianne calls out to her aunt, asking if she can also smell the mysterious scent. When Evgenia and Anne admit they smell nothing, Marianne confidently claims it smells like money. Dior proudly boasts about his sister's extraordinary talent for sniffing out money. Dior continues revealing secrets, claiming Marianne hugs her money at night and finds all his stashes. Marianne sadly admits she cannot find anything despite being absolutely certain of the scent of money. Euclid explains that the magic carriage has storage spells that might be hiding the items. Marianne immediately takes his advice, checking under the carriage seats for hidden storage. Anne agrees, noting that the seat indeed felt unusually uncomfortable during their ride. Euclid steps forward, offering to personally inspect the carriage seat. Reinhardt carefully opens the hidden compartment beneath the carriage seat with a soft clack. Reinhardt's eyes widen in sheer astonishment as he discovers what lies hidden inside. A dazzling massive pile of gold coins sparkles brightly inside the compartment. Marianne stares in disbelief, shocked to find that the gold coins are completely real. Countless gold coins suddenly spill out of the seat, cascading over the surprised onlookers. The carriage area is flooded with a spectacular sparkling shower of golden wealth. Stunned by the wealth, Evgenia suggests to Euclid that they quietly keep the gold a secret. Euclid points out they traded carriages fairly, and Delano enthusiastically agrees with his logic. While Euclid estimates it is a tower master's monthly income, Anne admits her conscience is hurting. The two share a knowing look, realizing they must decide what to do next. Evgenia suddenly gasps in quiet surprise as an unexpected thought strikes her. Blushing deeply, Euclid suggests they wrap things up and head back to the castle. Evgenia agrees to head back while silently planning to speak with Yurovit about the situation. The family enjoys a peaceful and sunny outdoor picnic together on the grass. The warm colors of sunset fill the sky as the peaceful afternoon comes to a close. As they walk back, Dior happily requests to go fishing together when the weather gets warmer. Making a pinky promise, Euclid warmly reassures him that they will definitely return next time. Euclid instructs Delano to safely escort the children back to the castle, which Delano accepts. Loud rattling sound echoes as the heavy carriage begins its journey back home. Euclid caringly warns Evgenia about the bumpy ride, asking her to speak up if she feels unwell. Evgenia reassures him, inwardly reflecting on how her true goal was finding dragon traces in the mountains. She contemplates the original story's mention of a real dragon's remains, determined not to miss them. She happily realizes this journey also grants her the perfect opportunity to spend time alone with Euclid. Evgenia gathers her courage, announcing she has something to say, which Euclid kindly encourages. Evgenia clarifies her earlier comment, explaining her annoyance was directed at the Knight Commander, not him. Euclid is stunned to realize he misunderstood, while Evgenia playfully chides him for thinking she would say that. Euclid beams with profound relief, leaving Evgenia completely captivated by his incredibly warm smile. They humorously debate the Emperor's treatment of her, with Evgenia insisting they must focus on protection. Euclid asks if she has more to say, and Evgenia eagerly confirms that she does. Anne's concern about returning the carriage's hidden gold to the Tower Master is brought up. Evgenia worries about the Tower Master's conscience, but Euclid assures her the man is not that small-minded. Euclid reveals he has been trying to contact the Tower Master, who seems to be out of the Empire. Evgenia asks in surprise, curious about the Tower Master's unexpected absence from the Empire. Evgenia suddenly declares she has made up her mind, leaving Euclid curious about what she has decided. Evgenia confidently explains her ambitious goal of starting city development in the north. A highly surprised Euclid questions her sudden proposal for roadwork and city development. Evgenia sheepishly explains her timing, and Euclid thoughtfully acknowledges her financial plan. The narrative highlights the massive benefits of overhauling the underdeveloped northern road network. Improving local weather will surely boost productivity and open paths for industrial growth. These developments could ultimately make full independence from the Empire a clear possibility. Euclid gently reassures Evgenia that he completely understands her strategic vision for the territory. Euclid requests more time to consider, which Evgenia readily grants as the final decision-maker. A sharp, heavy jolt rattles the carriage wheels as they continue their journey. Evgenia suddenly groans in deep distress as the bumpy ride upsets her stomach. Euclid caringly offers for her to lean on him, which she gratefully accepts. The heavy carriage rattles loudly as it travels through the frozen mountain terrain. Evgenia slowly blinks open her eyes, wondering if they have already arrived. Euclid gently bundles her up, reminding her to stay warm before they exit. He carefully adjusts her winter cloak to ensure she does not catch a cold. Deeply touched by his gentle care, Evgenia internally praises Euclid as the absolute best. The carriage door opens to reveal a heavy swirling snowstorm in the mountains. Evgenia bravely steps out of the carriage into the biting, freezing winter wind. Euclid notices her shivering, explaining they have reached the highest point of Mount Anatar. He gently instructs her to breathe slowly to cope with the thin mountain air. Evgenia struggles to catch her breath, realizing she is suffering from sudden altitude sickness. Noting her pale complexion, a worried Euclid immediately offers to turn back if necessary. Evgenia insists she's feeling better, learning they must ride horses to continue. Euclid asks if she can ride, but she quickly shakes her head no. A guard leads a horse forward as Euclid reassures her about the difficult trail. Euclid extends his hand to Evgenia, warmly inviting her to ride along with him. An ecstatic Evgenia happily accepts, swooning over the chance to share a horse. She firmly grasps his hand as they prepare to mount the horse together. Riding together on the single horse, a heavily blushing Evgenia enjoys his closeness. Euclid gently tells her to bear with the ride while she wishes it lasted forever. Evgenia looks back at him, determined to memorize his handsome profile on horseback. She finds seeing him ride steadily on the mountain pack to be incredibly exciting. They finally arrive at the massive stone fortress situated at the snowy border region. The knight rushes across the stone bridge to greet them as they enter. The guard apologizes for the delayed welcome, but Euclid dismisses any need for ceremony. Euclid gently carries her down in a protective princess carry, leaving her utterly flustered. The knight guides them inside. Evgenia regrets that their close ride has ended. The guard reports that the weather has been unusually mild compared to past visits. Euclid orders increased security, deeply impressing Evgenia with his diligent duty to the border. Suddenly, Evgenia's eyes widen as she spots something unexpected in the snowy landscape. She recalls ancient legends of the mighty dragon that once ruled these freezing mountains. Seeing Euclid busy discussing matters with the guard, she decides to step away quietly. Stepping down the stone stairs, she gasps as she encounters some exhausted guards. She observes several guards breathing heavily, thoroughly worn out by their intense training. A guard boasts about defeating wild boars, prompting a playful, grounding response from her. Euclid walks up to her, asking if she has been waiting long for him. Euclid expresses frustration over their quick departure, but Evgenia kindly reassures him. Euclid offers her a comfortable ride back, though she sighs over missed romance opportunities. Evgenia stops in her tracks as she suddenly senses something strange nearby. She alerts a surprised Euclid to a bizarre glowing golden light hidden behind the rocks. The mysterious golden light softly glows over a patch of grass and yellow flowers. A vibrant crystalline blue rock shines brightly in the darkness, leaving someone completely astonished. The group stands in utter shock as a lush field of spring flowers blankets the snowy ground. Euclid explains that previous patrols never reported this, prompting Evgenia to question their thoroughness. Realizing the environment changed after their arrival, Euclid suggests returning to the castle immediately. Euclid is baffled by the mountain climate shift and insists on gathering a meeting to plan. Evgenia deeply worries about the safety risks since these mountains touch the neighboring country's border. Her foot slips as a sharp, sudden crack sounds from the crumbling cliffside path. Evgenia gasps in terror as she loses her footing and falls backward into the darkness. A loud, echoing rumble vibrates through the air as Euclid desperately screams her name. Small rocks and pebbles tumble down with a quiet clatter into the deep cavern. Falling through the darkness, a confused Evgenia tries to process what just happened to her. Evgenia lies motionless on the cold cavern floor as tiny pebbles scatter around her body. She vividly recalls the sudden sensation of the ground crumbling beneath her feet just now. Looking up at the distant opening, she realizes she really plummeted into a deep fissure.
She silently muses that while accidents happen suddenly, this collapse felt far too unnatural.
Sitting up with a bruised face, she questions the suddenness of the cliff's collapse.
She raises her hand, hoping she did not die before even visiting the Dragonwood planet.
She humorously ponders if her death would cause Dragonwood to spiral into a drunken mess. A soft groan escapes her lips, immediately drawing a panicked and worried shout from Euclid. Evgenia's eyes snap wide open in sheer shock as she recognizes his familiar voice nearby. Seeing Euclid beside her, she stammers his title while he warmly reassures her of his presence. Overwhelmed with relief, she bursts into tears and wraps her arms tightly around Euclid's neck. Clinging to him, she tearfully whimpers about the terrifying cold and isolation of the cavern. Euclid gently pats her back as she admits she truly believed she was going to die. Evgenia asks why he is down here, and Euclid warmly explains he could never leave her. She tearfully scolds his recklessness, but he counters that he couldn't stay safe without her. Euclid tenderly admits that losing her would cause him agony, so he prefers being here. A heavily blushing Evgenia internally swoons over Euclid's incredibly handsome face and devoted heart. Moving past her old life's desires, she deeply thanks him for never letting her be alone. Euclid explains his rescue signal plan, while Evgenia proudly reflects on his brilliant and clever mind. He checks on her injuries and both warmly assure each other they are completely unhurt. Euclid gently encourages her to cry to release her tension while she silently plans their future. Evgenia smiles softly, looking forward to speaking openly with him once they return home safely. Sharing a peaceful moment of safety, she rests her head comfortably against his warm shoulder. A gentle hand softly brushes a stray lock of dark hair away from her face. Under a beautiful canopy of blooming flowers, Euclid shares a tender, romantic kiss with her. Waking up in a daze, a flustered Evgenia wonders if she had fallen asleep. She asks how long she was asleep, and Euclid gently assures her it was brief. She nervously asks if she snored, but he reassures her and shifts to their rescue. Evgenia remains highly suspicious, fully convinced she must have snored loudly based on his blush. Suddenly, a bright blue shimmering light catches her eye, causing her to gasp in surprise. Euclid asks what is wrong, and she points out the mysterious glowing energy nearby. She crawls over to investigate, asking a concerned Euclid to wait for just a moment. She reaches out to a floating blue crystal shard, eagerly calling Euclid to look closer. Evgenia turns back to him with a radiant smile, thrilled by her magical new discovery. Her joy fades instantly as she notices Euclid looking incredibly pale, sweaty, and weak. Placing her hand on his forehead, she gasps as she realizes he has a burning fever. She looks down in horror upon discovering a severe bloody wound cut deep into his arm. Despite his intense pain, Euclid weakly tries to smile, insisting to her that he is fine. Soft thump echoes as a weakened Euclid collapses, resting his head heavily against Evgenia's shoulder. Evgenia gasps in absolute horror, calling out in panic as Euclid suddenly loses consciousness. Shifting to Euclid's painful memories, he reflects on how agonizing his early childhood always was. The narrative reveals that young Euclid frequently vomited blood and woke up to pillows stained with nosebleeds. Mysterious Tower Master provided a painkiller, though it only blocked the pain of Euclid's rampaging mana. The treatment was incredibly expensive for a youngest son who held no claim as an heir. Feeling like a financial burden to his family, young Euclid doubted his right to continue living. A gentle hand touches his shoulder as his brother implores young Euclid to simply survive. His brother warmly reassures him that he is no burden, motivating Euclid to banish his weak thoughts. When his father asks about his health, the smiling young Euclid claims the medicine makes him feel better. His father inquires about his magic use, and Euclid dishonestly reassures him that he has avoided using it. After comforting his family, Euclid retreats to his room to suffer and cough up blood in isolation. Over time, Euclid became highly skilled at hiding his severe condition perfectly from everyone around him. He felt relieved that he could successfully conceal his deadly illness and act healthy around Evgenia. Euclid remained determined to keep her safe from suffering because of his own fragile state. A bright morning sun rises over the grand castle as birds chirp softly in the trees. Back in the present, Euclid lies sweating in bed with an alarmingly high fever. Opening his eyes slightly, Euclid recognizes the soft scent and dark hair of Evgenia nearby. The doctor promises the fever will break soon, but a skeptical Evgenia questions his rapid timeline. A soft sigh escapes Euclid as he weakly apologizes, blaming his own stubbornness for the situation. Feeling deeply apologetic, Euclid covers his eyes in shame over causing her so much worry. Evgenia looks down in profound sorrow, lamenting that this tragedy should have never happened. Euclid gently counters her self-blame, reassuring her that none of this is her fault. Euclid looks at her with tender warmth, quietly admitting that he is actually happy. He reflects on the immense comfort of not being alone when he finally opened his eyes. Tearfully looking down at him, Evgenia anxiously asks Euclid if he is finally awake. Euclid weakly assures her that he is all right and just needs a short rest to recover. Evgenia firmly rejects his reassurance, pointing out his broken arm and dangerously high fever. Overcome with raw emotion, Evgenia tearfully struggles to hold back her overwhelming grief and worry. Despite his intense physical suffering, Euclid offers her a gentle, comforting smile to soothe her pain. Evgenia looks at him with deep sadness, her eyes shining with unshed tears of worry. Seeing her cry, Euclid softly confesses that her tears hurt his heart even more than his injuries. Evgenia gazes at him in silent heartbreak, deeply moved by his selfless and caring words. Evgenia internally marvels at his tone, wondering if she has truly become someone precious to him. She speaks softly, acknowledging his request not to apologize, but feeling the heavy burden regardless. A remorseful guard deeply apologizes to Evgenia, expressing regret for not rescuing them much sooner. The guard explains that Euclid selflessly shielded her during the fall, making her survival a miracle. The guard shifts the topic to the incredible properties of the mysterious ore Evgenia discovered. The guard excitedly reveals that the glowing blue crystal ore is actually a rare, highly valuable mana stone. Finding mana stones in the northern mountains is a massive discovery that will surely overjoy Euclid. Evgenia dismisses the wealth, thinking that nothing matters compared to Euclid's safety and healing. Her maid Anne knocks gently on the door and Evgenia quietly invites her inside. Anne urges her to rest, but a determined Evgenia insists she is not tired. Evgenia decides to stay by Euclid's side all night, instructing Anne to go rest instead. Anne offers to brew a strong cup of tea to keep her awake, which Evgenia gratefully accepts. Evgenia resolves to ask the visiting Grand Priest to heal Euclid's severe injuries. Gently caressing his face, she promises to get him back on his feet very soon. Though the Grand Priest holds cold feelings toward her, Evgenia trusts his feigned compassion. Bright sunlight floods the castle window as birds chirp softly to welcome a new morning. Soft rustle sounds as Euclid slowly blinks his eyes open, greeted by the warm daylight. Evgenia sleeps peacefully beside Euclid, unaware that he has lovingly reached out to touch her. Sitting up in bed, Euclid gently holds Evgenia's hand as she rests her head nearby. Euclid fondly recalls that she wore this exact same peaceful expression in his memories. A soft blush warms Euclid's cheeks as he looks down at her with pure affection. The butler opens the bedroom door, surprised to see Euclid awake woolly. Euclid immediately signals the butler to remain quiet so Evgenia can continue sleeping peacefully. Outside the room, a servant curiously asks the butler why he is lingering in the hallway. The butler quietly reflects to himself that the bond between them is undoubtedly true love. A soft rustle stirs Evgenia as she slowly begins to wake from her sleep. Evgenia gasps in surprise to find Euclid awake, and he gently confirms his consciousness. Evgenia anxiously checks his forehead for fever, while Euclid warmly reassures her he is fine. Evgenia fretfully asks about his broken arm and other injuries, but Euclid insists he feels fine. Evgenia suspiciously accuses Euclid of hiding his pain, knowing how stoic he can be. The doctor advises Evgenia to rest in her quarters, but she stubbornly insists she is fine. The doctor explains that Euclid's fever is broken and he only needs rest to heal. Her maid anxiously warns Evgenia that she might fall ill herself if she neglects rest. Evgenia turns away with a pout, unwilling to abandon Euclid's side so easily. Euclid warmly promises Evgenia that he will strictly follow the doctor's orders. Evgenia firmly orders him to postpone any business meetings, and Euclid obediently agrees. Evgenia hesitantly asks if she may return to his side after taking a brief rest. Watching their sweet interaction, the butler tearfully mutters that this is undeniably true love. Following a quick wash and meal, a rejuvenated Evgenia makes her way back to Euclid. Suddenly, young Reinhardt runs down the castle corridor, frantically calling out for his uncle. Peering into the room, Evgenia notes how terrified the children must have been during Euclid's crisis. Marianne tearfully questions Euclid about what happened to his severely bandaged arm. The young children stare up at him, tears welling in their big worried eyes. Euclid wraps his arms around the children, holding them close in a reassuring embrace. Euclid gently comforts the weeping children, reassuring them that there is no need to cry. An attendant cheerfully announces that Euclid has just acquired massive wealth from the Mana Stone discovery. Standing by the doorway, Evgenia smiles softly as she watches the heartwarming family scene. Feeling like an intruder, Evgenia decides to slip away and return to Euclid later. With a quiet smile, she turns back into the hallway to give him privacy. Evgenia is surprised to find the pink-haired knight, Reinhardt, still lingering outside the chamber. She asks Reinhardt if he has something to say, noticing his tense, downcast expression. An awkward silence falls between them as they stand together in the castle corridor. Evgenia challenges Rickhart's guilt, questioning if his presence would have changed their fall. She kindly absolves him of blame, explaining he had no duty to protect her there. Rihart parts his lips, momentarily speechless at her gentle and forgiving words. Evgenia looks at him calmly, waiting for him to process her reassurance. Rihart quietly clenches his fist, deeply moved by her kindness. A soft, relieved smile graces Rihart's face as he blushes slightly. Suddenly, the brown-haired maid rushes up to Evgenia in a state of high excitement. Evgenia curiously asks the panicked maid what has transpired to cause such a commotion. The maid joyfully reports that the war has ended in victory and the crown prince returns. The maid adds that the Grand Priest Damien has arrived, shocking Evgenia with the suddenness. Evgenia immediately prepares to depart for the temple, but the maid quickly stops her. The maid reveals that the esteemed Grand Priest is already inside the ducal castle.